The story opens beneath a beautiful sky where a monk asks a scholar if he truly wants to hear about Yonho. This monk is none other than Master Musin, the living Buddha. The scholar, eager to record the truth behind Yonho's legacy. He explains that he is gathering stories to chronicle the life of the radiant martial sovereign. With a calm but slightly strained expression, Master Musin says that Yonho is a compassionate and honorable man, so virtuous that perhaps even the Buddha sent him to guide the world. Hearing exactly what he expected, the scholar lights up and quickly starts writing. But then he asks a simple follow-up. What was Yonho like in daily life? In the moment that question comes out, Master Musin's face changes completely. The monk suddenly loses his composure, starts cursing Yonho out loud, and flat out says he cannot continue. The scholar is left frozen in place. A monk swearing like that is already enough to shatter his brain, but what makes it worse is that this is not an isolated case, because the next place he visits is the Hubei Ping clan, and the result is somehow even worse. The moment Yonho's name is mentioned there, the supreme elder of the Hubei Ping clan, Ping Dojuk, explodes with rage. He demands to know why some miserable fool would dare bring up that name in front of him, and even orders salt to be scattered where the scholar is standing, like he's trying to cleanse the ground itself. At this point, the scholar is no longer just confused. He's genuinely scared everywhere he goes. People react the exact same way whenever Yonho comes up, and yet the story the world tells is completely different. According to history, Yonho, the radiant martial sovereign, was a mythic figure who brought an end to a chaotic age. Some praised him as the greatest martial artist of all time. Others called him the ultimate man of honor, a heroic warrior whose name echoed across the land. So why does every person who actually knew him look like they want to punch a wall the moment they hear his name? Determined to uncover the truth, the scholar keeps moving. That is when he arrives before the beggar sect's divine mad dog. The divine mad dog bursts into laughter the second he hears the scholar was kicked out by both Shaolin and the Hubei Ping clan. The scholar says the reaction was almost identical everywhere. The moment he mentioned Yonho's name, but the mad dog cuts him off and says of course it was. Then finally the real story begins. 100 years in the past, in the great Guangong clan, there lived a boy who dreamed of becoming the strongest under heaven. Yonho had been raised in a martial family, so he understood exactly what that dream demanded. Discipline, effort, relentless training, he knew all of it perfectly. His only real problem was that whenever the time came to actually begin, it somehow always felt better to start tomorrow. At just 12 years old, Yonho was already a complete disaster. He woke up half asleep, stared at the sunset pouring through the room, and quietly realized that today's training was no longer realistic. In his mind, the timing was simple. Since the sun was already going down, there was no point forcing it now. The smarter choice was to rest properly, sleep early, and begin his rise to greatness the next day. So after seriously thinking it through, he simply pulled the blanket back over himself. That alone tells the whole story of what kind of child Yonho was. But his peace does not last long. Footsteps approach, and someone enters the room telling him to get up. Yonho ignores it. The voice calls him again, louder this time, still nothing. Then the voice erupts hard enough to shake the room, finally forcing Yonho to sit up in irritation. Standing over him is Jiang, patriarch of the Guangdong clan, famed righteous swordsman, and unfortunately for Yonho, his father. Jiang demands to know if Yonho even realizes what time it is. Yonho casually replies that he saw the sun. That answer only makes his father angrier. If he saw the sun, then why is he still in bed? Yonho answers with perfect seriousness that the sun is setting. Jiang then asks how long he has been shut inside this room. Yonho hesitates. Guesses maybe 2 days, then maybe 3 before confidently landing on 2. His father immediately corrects him. It has been 4 full days of doing nothing but rolling around under a blanket. When Jiang asks whether his back does not hurt after lying there that long, Yonho awkwardly laughs and admits that he does get up once in a while. Somehow that only makes things worse. Then Yonho tries to defend himself. He says he really did plan to train. But every time he opened his eyes, the sun was already going down. And once the sun sets, a person obviously needs to sleep early so they can wake up properly the next day and train for real. That explanation finally pushes Jiang past the limit. Furious, he flips the bed over on the spot and screams that today he's going to fix Yonho's rotten attitude once and for all. And from the divine mad dog's point of view, that was the day when the sun truly set on peace in the Guangdong household. After that chaotic scene, the story moves to the clan office, where Jianghan sits looking completely exhausted. The administrator of the Guangdong clan, Zhou Bang, carefully asks if the source of his stress is once again the second young master. Jianghan instantly fires back, asking who else it could possibly be. Zhou Bang tries to reassure him by saying Yonho will surely mature in time, but Jianghan can only sigh and blame himself. And once his story is revealed, it becomes clear why. When Yonho was only 2 years old, Jianghan left home on a martial pilgrimage. At the time, he believed it would take no more than 2 years, but one incident after another dragged him farther and farther away until those 2 years became 8 full years. During that time, he gained fame, honor, and the title of the righteous, chivalrous swordsman. But by the time he finally returned home, his family had changed in ways he never expected. His once gentle wife, Han Sanga, had become fiercer than a tiger. His daughter, Suryeon, had been born during his absence, and the son he thought would grow up without causing much trouble had somehow transformed into a hopelessly lazy young master who treated tomorrow like a sacred promise. That is why Jianghan looked so worn down. He did not come home to the family he left behind. Still, Zhou Bang says there may be one answer. At first, Jianghan does not understand what he means, then it suddenly clicks. Someone is returning, someone Yonho is actually afraid of. After 3 long years at the martial academy, the eldest son of the Y clan is finally coming home. And almost as if his body senses danger before his mind does, Yonho suddenly feels chills crawl down his spine. The moment he turns around, he sees the reason. Standing behind him is his older brother, Sanho. Sanho calmly asks how long Yonho has been sleeping. Already nervous, Yonho tries to dodge the question by asking when Sanho got back instead, but Sanho quietly reminds him that he asked first. Yonho scratches the back of his head, unable to come up with a convincing answer. While Sanho's stare grows heavier and more intense. Under that pressure, Yonho finally panics and blurts out that it is not what it looks like. He insists he trained early that morning, trained very hard in fact, and only lay down because he got tired from all that effort. Sanho listens without changing expression, then he asks the only question that matters. Did he really train? Yonho immediately says yes. So Sanho points to a candle and tells him to split it in two with a technique. He says he wants to see just how much Yonho has improved during the past 3 years. Backed into a corner, Yonho picks up his sword and takes a stance. Before he can buy any more time, Sanho coldly asks what he is waiting for and tells him to begin. Yonho makes one last excuse, saying that they are indoors and it could be dangerous. Sanho raises his voice and says he will take responsibility, so Yonho should stop talking and show him what he can do. With no way out, Yonho charges forward and swings with all the flair he can muster, unleashing the soaring dragon technique as if he is about to astonish everyone in the room. And the candle does not move at all, not even a little. The attack lands, the pose is there, the confidence is there, but the candle remains completely untouched. Second Yonho sees that, he knows he is finished. Sanho looks at him in open disappointment and says that 3 years should have been more than enough time to master one sword technique and move on to the next stage. Yet somehow Yonho has become even worse than he was 3 years ago, and somehow that still is not the worst part of his day. That night, the family gathers for dinner, and Yonho already knows he is about to suffer through every second of it. While the meal begins, Jianghan asks Sanho how life at the martial academy was and whether he endured any hardships there. Sanho answers calmly that it was fine. If there were no hardships, then it would not be training. Hardship is what allows a person to overcome himself. Jianghan praises him for enduring so much, but Sanho says his father had it even harder, having been away from the family for so long. And Jianghan asks whether anything else happened while he was away. Sanho says there is one matter that must be discussed. The matriarch asks what it is, and then Sanho says the one name that immediately changes the atmosphere at the table. Everyone reacts at once, but Sanho does not hesitate. He states plainly that Yonho should be taken to the martial academy. The instant those words leave his mouth, Yonho is hit with pure terror to everyone else. It sounds like a solution. To him, it sounds like the end. And that is where the divine mad dog brings the story back to the present. He explains that this is why even men like Master Musin and Ping Dojuk grind their teeth whenever Yonho's name is mentioned. Because the legendary radiant martial sovereign did not begin his story as a noble saint, a heavenly genius, or some flawless hero. He began as a lazy child who kept putting off greatness until tomorrow. And back then, not a single person could have imagined that this same Yonho would one day shake the entire world. Just like that, Yonho ends up being half-forced into going to the martial academy. His family is clearly not happy about it either. We are then introduced to Yonho's younger sister, Suryeon, who is crying as she begs him not to go. Meanwhile, his father laughs and tells him to come back as a man. Yonho gently tells his sister not to cry and promises that he will return. From the Mad Dog's perspective, the journey taken by Sanho and Yonho goes smoothly. Sanho answers that they still have 10 more days to go. The moment he hears that, Yonho is completely shocked. Along the way, Yonho asks his brother whether they are almost there. From the back, Yonho immediately protests, saying that he has never ridden a horse before. Sanho calmly replies that he was not blaming him and was only answering the question he asked. Still exhausted, Yonho asks Sanho if they can stop and rest. Complaining about how steep the hill is, he groans that he is so tired his back and butt feel like they are about to burst. Then he notices some people lying beneath a dead tree and points them out, telling Sanho that they should head over there since those people seem to be resting too. But the moment Sanho sees them, his expression changes completely. Sanho quickly dismounts from his horse. Confused, Yonho asks what he is doing. Sanho walks over to the bodies and checks them, then tells Yonho that they are too late. Every person lying there is already dead. Hearing that, Yonho is left stunned. Sanho then shows him the marks on the bodies and explains that this is the work of a technique called the flower-indulging palm. It used to be known as the crimson flower palm, but because a rapist named Seo Juak went around committing evil deeds with it, the technique came to be called the flower-indulging palm. The moment Yonho hears that, he nervously asks if Sanho is saying that the rapist is somewhere nearby. Sanho answers that Seo Juak targets women climbing the mountains, and the fact that these bodies are here means he must have ambushed them while pursuing a woman. In other words, somewhere nearby, a woman is in danger right now. Sanho tells Yonho to stay there and says that he will be back before immediately taking off. Yonho shouts after him, asking if he is seriously being told to stay behind alone with a pile of corpses. But by then, Sanho is already far away. Yonho is left standing there in frustration. He glances around at the bodies, then at the horses, and realizes just how badly he is trapped. He is completely screwed. Before long, the sky darkens as though rain could pour down at any moment. Yonho starts yelling that Sanho is a liar and wonders what is taking him so long. He complains that Sanho should have just brought him along. But as more time passes, another thought creeps in. Did something happen to Sanho? There is no way he would be this late otherwise. Yonho begins to panic and tells himself that he has to do something. If he just keeps lingering around here, he might end up as dinner for a tiger. Then all of a sudden, thunder crashes overhead, making Yonho jump in fear. Rain immediately starts pouring down. We see Yonho, the horses, and the dead bodies all caught in the rain. And Yonho can only think about how completely doomed he is. He cannot believe things ended up like this. Even so, he struggles to lift the bodies onto the horses' backs. He grumbles to himself that he cannot simply leave the corpses behind to be eaten by wild animals. but he also cannot bury them now because of the... And more than anything, he needs to find shelter. Then, to make matters worse, the horses refuse to listen to him, and one of the horses kicks Yonho so hard that he tumbles all the way down the hill. When Yonho finally wakes up, he is in pain. He hurt his back badly from the fall, and the first thing he does is curse the horses. But as he gets to his feet, he realizes he has ended up inside a cave. That instantly lifts his spirits, because at least he has found shelter from the rain. A moment later, the horses also make their way into the cave. Yonho ties them down and bitterly thinks that he cannot even hit them back. Then he looks down at his filthy clothes and mutters to himself what a complete mess this is. And that right there is exactly why he prefers staying at home. Trying to be somewhat prepared, Yonho leaves a mark outside the cave so his brother can find him later. After that, with nothing else to do, he simply lies down and goes to sleep. Some time later, he wakes up briefly and worries that something may have happened to his brother. But then he reassures himself that Sanho is strong, so he will obviously be fine. With that thought, Yonho closes his eyes again and drifts back into a deep, comfortable sleep. Time passes quietly. Then all of a sudden, a blue light begins to glow around Yonho. Little by little, the light wraps itself around his sleeping body and gently lifts him into the air. Without waking him, it carries him deeper inside, passing through what seems to be an invisible barrier. After some time, Yonho finally wakes up. He looks around in confusion and wonders where exactly he is. At first glance, the place resembles the cave he had been in before, but the structure is clearly different. That makes him think that maybe he somehow rolled deeper inside while he was asleep. Then a voice suddenly echoes through the cave. It calls out "Faded human." The moment Yonho hears it, he is terrified and lets out a scream. He stumbles back toward the wall, and when he looks up, he sees a blue spear of light floating there. The voice then says, "Welcome to the Faded Place, successor of my radiant sword." Still shaken, Yonho asks whether the voice is coming from that sparkling thing. The voice answers yes, explaining that it has transcended the limits of a physical body and is now speaking to Yonho from beyond time and space. Then it tells Yonho to accept its will and rule over the world. The second he hears that, Yonho screams that it is a ghost. The voice tells him not to be afraid, explaining that it is already dead and that only its will remains behind. It says this was prepared for the one who would come after it, so that person could inherit its will without doubt. Hearing all of that, Yonho starts to feel like this entire situation sounds strangely familiar. A cave untouched by people, the will of an old man left behind, an unexpected inheritance. Then with a downright shameless grin, Yonho starts thinking that this must be a fateful opportunity. In his mind, the heavens are clearly rewarding him for being such a kind person. And best of all, if he becomes strong right here, he would not even need to go to the martial academy. But the old man's voice cuts through his fantasy and says there is no time. It tells Yonho to inherit the sword and set the morals of the world right. It declares that it will teach him the radiant sword and that he must train without end. Then it adds that if Yonho truly carries its blood, he should at least have enough talent, and if he trains hard in this place for 30 years, he may be able to somewhat replicate the old man's level. The moment Yonho hears 30 years, his entire expression changes. Completely thrown off, he says that he does not think this fate was meant for him after all, and suggests that the old man should just wait for the next person. For a brief moment, the old man is left speechless. Then, in utter surprise, it asks Yonho why. Yonho bluntly answers that he would rather give up this fate entirely than stay trapped there for 30 years. And from the mad dog's perspective, that fateful encounter was the very beginning of how the loser Yonho eventually became so strong. Yonho tells the old man that he does not think this is fate at all, and that he should go find someone else. Then, without another word, Yonho turns and runs. The old man immediately calls out for him to wait. When Yonho glances back, he sees the light suddenly take the form of an old man. This is our introduction to Beggar. The moment he sees him, Yonho blurts out that he knew it. The old man is obviously a scamp. Offended, the old man demands to know how Yonho dares call him that. But Yonho fires right back, saying the old man first pretended to be one thing, and when that failed, he simply revealed his true form instead. The old man insists that he was not pretending at all. He explains that he is truly a spirit who has already left behind his physical body. Yonho refuses to believe a word of it, and swings a punch at him, but his hand passes straight through the old man, causing Yonho to stumble and fall. The moment Yonho realizes that his hand actually went through him, the old man quickly corrects him, saying that this is the spirit transmission arts, a skill that only martial artists of an extremely high level can use. But Yonho stubbornly replies that people usually just call those ghosts. That answer makes the old man snap, and he shouts that he is not a ghost. Then the story returns to the mad dog. While continuing the tale, he tells the scholar that was how why Yonho met his master. The scholar, still caught off guard, asks whether something like the spirit transmission arts truly exists. The mad dog answers that it is a technique only the greatest martial artists can ever take. The young scholar then asks who among martial artists was known to use it. In response, the mad dog asks him whether he knows the Sword Emperor. The scholar immediately says that of course he does. The Sword Emperor is the strongest figure in recorded history. Beggar, the Radiant Sword, the one who would later be called the Sword Emperor. Hearing that, the scholar is stunned and asks whether the Sword Emperor did not live 300 years ago. Even so, it remains true that the one who made Yonho into what he became was none other than the Sword Emperor. The scholar can only marvel at how incredible that is. Then naturally he assumes that once Yonho learned that, he must have immediately begged to become the Sword Emperor's disciple. But the mad dog says it was actually the complete opposite. The Sword Emperor, having realized that not one of his descendants had come looking for him in 300 years, became desperate to secure a disciple at any cost. Back in the cave, Yonho casually asks the old man why he is throwing such a tantrum. He says he truly cannot learn from him, and that he is leaving. The old man responds by asking if Yonho really thought he would let him walk away that easily. Then with his power, he seals the entrance of the cave shut. The sight only irritates Yonho. The old man begins to laugh and asks what he thinks now. He explains that the cave entrance is blocked by an incredibly thick stone gate, and with Yonho's current level, there is absolutely no way he could lift it or break through it. But if he learns the old man's martial arts, he would be able to slice through it like paper and walk out whenever he wants. Hearing that, Yonho mutters that there is no helping it and pulls out his sword. The old man immediately reminds him that he already said Yonho could not cut through that stone gate with his current abilities. But instead of attacking the gate, Yonho simply starts scratching away at the stone wall beside it. The old man goes completely speechless. Then he asks what in the world Yonho is doing. Yonho answers as if it is obvious, saying that he is digging a hole. No matter how hard the stone is, it is still just stone, which means if he keeps grinding it down with metal long enough, it will eventually break. At this rate, he figures he should be able to get out in about a year or two. The old man stares at him in disbelief and asks whether he is seriously planning to do that for a year or two. Yonho laughs and says that is a funny thing to hear from someone who just talked about making him train for 30 years. At that moment, the old man is inwardly furious. He can only think that this bastard is completely insane. And what makes it worse is that he cannot even beat him to death. Instead, he floats around Yonho and tries persuading him, telling him to at least give the training a chance and promising that he will not disappoint him. But Yonho bluntly says that he does not like him. So the old man lowers the price. He says that if Yonho agrees, he will allow him to leave after 20 years. The second Yonho hears 20 years, he immediately lies down and says that is still far too long. Then he lazily adds that he might consider it if the old man said 3 years instead. In his heart, the old man is already cursing Yonho as a bastard all over again. But outwardly, with a smile forced onto his face, he asks whether Yonho truly believes he can learn the Sword Emperor's martial arts in 3 years. He says that even if Zhang Sanfeng himself came back from the dead, it still would not be possible. As Yonho gets back to his feet, he simply shrugs and says that in that case, he guesses they were never meant to be. We then see the old man's face turning red with rage as he curses Yonho so furiously that we do not even hear the words. Then finally, he changes his offer again. This time, he says 5 years. He begs Yonho to give him 5 years, promising that he will do absolutely everything in his power to make him the strongest martial artist in the world within 5 years. That finally makes Yonho pause. The strongest in the world in 5 years. On top of that, he has never even heard of a spirit that looked as vivid and real as this old man. With that same shameless expression on his face, Yonho starts thinking that maybe this technique simply is not something widely passed down by word of mouth. Maybe the old man has only been telling half the truth. And if that is the case, then he might really have been the greatest master in the world. With that thought, Yonho decides he might as well use this chance to become a true martial master. So at last he says fine, he will try it. The story then returns to the mad dog, who explains that of course Yonho had no idea at the time that the old man was the Sword Emperor. But the Sword Emperor himself was quite unfortunate too, because the person he happened to meet at the very end of his life turned out to be a hopeless lazy sloth. Back in the cave, the old man furiously shouts at Yonho, calling him a bastard and ordering him to wake up. Yonho groans that he is too tired and asks whether the old man never sleeps, but then almost immediately he remembers something obvious. The old man is dead, but Yonho is still human and humans need sleep. Does the old man not understand that? At that, Beak Muhin starts cursing the skies, the heavens, the earth, and just about everything else before finally forcing himself to apologize and telling Yonho to get back to training. The problem is, Yonho spends the entire day sleeping and only practices the moves once when it is actually time to train. The poor Sword Emperor, who is always angry by this point, snaps and says that at this rate, it will take them 50 years, not 5. Yonho then asks if there is not some easier way to learn. The old man tells him that this is already easy enough. Hearing that, Yonho thinks that if the old man would at least stop talking, he might be a little less annoying. Then Yonho openly tells him that this is exactly why a person needs to find a talented master. The moment he hears that, Beak Muhin turns red with fury and looks like he is on the verge of suffering Kai deviation. Or at least he would be if he still had a body. Sword Emperor can only think bitterly about how all he wanted was worldly success and a proper successor to inherit his martial arts, and instead he ended up leaving behind his spirit and enduring this miserable state. If he still had a body, he would have beaten Yonho first and taught him afterward. Meanwhile, Yonho is just lying there, rolling around lazily, before suddenly calling the old man master and asking how he did that. The old man asks what he is talking about. Yonho says he means the way the old man dropped the stone gate. Then he asks whether the old man cannot use that same power to move Yonho's body around and teach him martial arts directly. The old man explains that all he did was pull the string of a device he had already prepared in advance. Yonho immediately asks how that was possible when the old man does not even have a body anymore. The old man replies that it has nothing to do with having a body. He simply used psychic levitation and pulled the string with Kai alone. Then all of a sudden, the old man realizes something. His expression changes and a devilish laugh escapes him. He wonders why he did not think of this sooner. He keeps laughing to himself while Yonho watches and asks what is wrong with him. Has he finally gone crazy? But the old man says that for the past 300 years he was so fixated on the idea that he had no body and that many things were incomplete because he had only maintained himself as a spirit. Yet thanks to Yonho, he has just realized something useful. Yonho asks what exactly the old man is mumbling about, but before he can get an answer, something suddenly flies past him. At first he does not even register what it is. Then he notices a rock striking the stone wall. Laughing even harder now, the old man says that thanks to Yonho, he has realized that even without a body he can still move rocks whenever he pleases. The moment Yonho understands that, he immediately recoils in terror. The old man continues, saying that if he can move rocks by levitating them, then naturally he can also do something like this. In the next moment, the rocks rise. Seeing that, Yonho hurriedly tells him to stop because he wants to talk this out. But the old man does not stop. Instead, he launches the rocks straight at Yonho. From that day on, Beak Muhen and Yonho's training continues day and night. During the day, Yonho learns swordsmanship without rest. During the night, the two of them argue and debate endlessly, and whenever Yonho falls asleep, he still does not get to rest because Beak Muhen makes him train through the unparalleled dream mythic arts that he teaches him. Living becomes the sword, life itself becomes the sword. Yonho no longer has any time left to be lazy. And that is how 5 years pass in the blink of an eye. Then when Yonho finally returns, he shakes the world. One day before he finally got out, while Yonho is asleep, the old man calls for him. The old man calls for him as he slowly gets up. Yonho grumbles that he wanted to sleep a little longer, but then he notices something strange. There is a surprised look on his face as we see the old man sitting there calmly in a cross-legged position. The old man simply tells him to come over. As Yonho sits down, he asks what is going on. The old man then begins to speak. He says that he spent his entire life learning martial arts. His only hope was to see the very end of it. He devoted himself to martial arts alone. And after spending his whole life chasing only that, he ended up becoming a bitter old man, one his own clan treated with distance. Hearing that, Yonho cannot help but think that something feels off. What is wrong with the old man today? This is nothing like him. The old man continues, saying that when he thinks about it now, it was obvious why his clan never came looking for him. After all, he was the one who abandoned his children and his family for the sake of martial arts. After all, he was the one who abandoned his children and his family for the sake of martial arts. He believed that reaching the end of martial arts would give him everything. But he was wrong. Martial arts is something humans practice. So if one does not walk alongside people while pursuing the end of swordsmanship, then reaching that end becomes meaningless. And it was Yonho who made the old man realize that. The old man says that for the first time in his life, he taught someone. He was angry, he was annoyed, but he also felt happiness. Watching Yonho grow let him learn joy, and through that he also came to understand fondness. Calling him master, Yonho asks what is going on with him. He is talking as if they are never going to see each other again. The old man calmly confirms that it is true. He says the time has come. The moment he hears that, Yonho panics. He asks what the old man is even talking about and whether he really thinks Yonho will fall for something like this. The old man was the one who said they should train for 30 years and only 5 years have passed. That means he still has to remain here for 25 more years. The old man says that is true, he did say that. But the internal Kai he gave Yonho in the form of an elixir was meant to let Yonho survive in this place without food. And maintaining something like that is far more difficult than Yonho thinks. The old man quietly explains that he has no power left now, and it is time for them to say goodbye. Sad and shaken, Yonho asks why he never told him sooner. If he had just said something, Yonho could have left, found food, and then come back to continue training. Then the old man says that he understands how Yonho feels. As he rises to his feet, he tells Yonho that he truly enjoyed the time they spent together. He says he wanted to watch Yonho travel the world and see its sights, but this is fine as well. Looking at Yonho with clear fondness, the old man says that in his eyes, he can already see Yonho crossing the world from end to end. In his eyes, he can already see Yonho crossing the world from end to end. Then he tells Yonho to go out and see the world and to keep it inside himself. If he does that, the other things he seeks will naturally follow. He also tells Yonho that before seeing the world, he must first see people. Even if the old man can never see Yonho again, and even if no one else in the world ever knows that he existed, Yonho's movements and Yonho's swordsmanship will carry him within them. As he slowly begins to disappear, the old man says that even if Yonho does not become someone outstanding or someone great, that is fine too. Calling out to him as master, Yonho begs him not to leave yet. He asks his master to stay just a little longer, even if it is only for one more day. But as the Sword Emperor Beak Muhen fades away, his final words are simple: be happy. We then see Yonho crying, as he says that the old man really should have told him a little earlier. Then the story returns to the present, where we see a clearly irritated Yonho muttering that this is exactly why the old man left without telling him in advance. He's holding a cloth and looking at it with growing disbelief. Yonho asks when the old man even had the time to pile all of this up, then complains that if he was going to leave, he should have at least done it properly. Finally, Yonho snaps and screams, asking what the hell this even is. Before disappearing, Baek Myuhan had written a message on Yonho's clothes. Put it simply, the martial arts Yonho managed to learn in only 5 years were still incomplete. Since Baek Myuhan knew Yonho would probably stop training the second he was gone, he placed a kind of condition on Yonho's body. The inner elixir that Yonho swallowed, the one Baek Myuhan gave him, would continue forcing his martial arts to improve. At first glance, it might sound like Yonho would simply grow stronger automatically, but that is not exactly the case. If the martial progress Yonho gains through his own experience and training is slower than the speed of the inner elixir's growth, then the inner energy inside him will be consumed by Baek Myuhan's setup, and Yonho will die. In the end, the meaning is very simple. He is to travel the world and see many different things. When Yonho sees the world, he will start to feel things, and once he feels things, he will begin to learn things as well. Baek Myuhan tells him not to be satisfied with becoming a small person who stays in a small place. Instead, he tells Yonho to look at greater things and become a greater person. And because of that, the first place Yonho must go is Rulin. There, he is supposed to find the world's greatest scholar and stay by his side. As for Yonho, he says that he had originally planned to go straight home, but now he will return only after he has settled everything he needs to settle. In his mind, he knows there are things he has to do first. So before leaving, he offers his master one final. Then with that, Yonho sets out for Rulin. But the moment Yonho is gone, we see Baek Myuhan appear once more in front of the cave. Letting out a loud, devilish laugh, he calls Yonho a bastard, and says that if Yonho does not learn about the world, he will shrivel up like a mummy and die. What kind of martial art in the world works like that? Even so, Baek Myuhan cannot just let Yonho live out his life in some random corner of nowhere. The world is far too vast for that. Wearing a pleased and satisfied smile, Baek Myuhan says it would be a complete waste of Yonho's martial arts. Then the scene shifts to Kaifeng. Here we meet a completely new version of Yonho. After starving for days, he has become so thin that he looks like a walking skeleton. In that miserable state, he approaches a beggar. The moment Jang Il lays eyes on Yonho, he cannot help but think to himself, who is this mummy? Yonho says that he came because he has something he wants to ask. Jang Il immediately responds with one word, money. Yonho blinks and asks whether he has to pay. Jang Il tells him of course he does, nothing in this world is free. As he studies Yonho more closely, Jang Il thinks that his voice sounds like that of someone barely 20. Yet his face looks closer to 50. And despite being surrounded by beggars his whole life, he has never once seen a beggar quite like this one. Jang Il then says that honestly he would want to help for free considering they are basically in the same line of work. But rules are rules. Hearing that, Yonho asks what he means by the same line of work. Jang Il says it is obvious, they are both beggars. Yonho immediately asks how he looks like a beggar. Jang Il answers that he obviously looks exactly like one. Still, if Yonho has no money, then Jang Il cannot give him any information or help at all. He tells Yonho to leave, go do some begging, and come back once he has earned some money. Not long after that, we see a pile of money gathered in front of Yonho. Jang Il is overjoyed to earn half a year's operating funds for the branch in only half a day. He says the god of wealth himself must have arrived. Then Jang Il asks Yonho what exactly he wants to know. Yonho asks for a list of the locations, hobbies, and specialties of famous scholars, as well as a list of the locations, hobbies, and specialties of famous blacksmiths. Jang Il tells him that since he made a promise, he will keep it. He says he will gather the information and asks Yonho to come back after 7 days. But Yonho simply lies down and says that he has nowhere to go and nothing to do anyway, so he will just stay there. Jang Il casually agrees. A few days later, he deeply regrets saying that. One of the beggars comes running to Jang Il in a panic, shouting that there is trouble. Jang Il asks what all the fuss is about and what kind of trouble could possibly happen to a bunch of beggars. But the beggar tells him that at this rate, they are all going to starve to death. Then he brings Jang Il to see the situation for himself. The moment Jang Il arrives, he is stunned. One of the passersby throws coins and curses at the beggars, saying that if they are going to be beggars, then they should at least be on that level. And there, right in front of them, is Yonho, looking like a dried-up mummy and pulling in piles of coins just by sitting on the road. Jang Il is horrified and amazed all at once. The money just keeps pouring in. Meanwhile, Yonho lets out a laugh and says that making money is easy. And just like that, Yonho begins taking over the world of beggars. We then see Yonho saying that he is thirsty. Still lying down, he tells Jang Il to bring him some water. The moment he hears that, Jang Il beats the beggar who brought it and tells him to bring water again, this time in a clean bowl. So while kicking the beggars around in frustration, Jang Il orders them to go bring cold water all the way from the damned mountains. Meanwhile, Yonho lies their face down and says nice, how nice. Jang Il is practically burning with rage. In his mind, he cannot believe that he, the branch leader of the beggar sect, has been reduced to acting like a servant for that idiotic beggar. But at the same time, if he throws Yonho out, then his own men will starve. While wondering when the information Yonho requested is finally going to arrive. At this rate, he feels like they are all going to die first. Then one of the beggars suddenly comes running in with a happy shout, saying that the information has arrived. Hearing that, Jang Il brightens up immediately. Yonho takes the information and looks it over, but then he asks whether that is really all. He questions whether Jang Il seriously intended to charge money for something like this. Jang Il asks what he means and snatches the paper from Yonho's hand. The moment he sees it, his face changes. In his mind, he can only think that those idiots must be trying to get them all killed. The information is barely half of what Yonho originally asked for. Then Yonho asks if the information is incomplete because he did not pay them enough. Left with no other choice, Jang Il takes Yonho somewhere else to obtain the rest. That is when we see a womanly figure greet Jang Il by calling him Foxdog and remarking how rare it is to see him there. This is our introduction to Gui Nangnang, the Kaifeng branch leader of the Hao sect. Jang Il says that he needs information, all while Yonho keeps calling him despicable. Branch leader Gui says she finds this quite surprising. The Kaifeng branch leader of the beggar sect has come all the way to the Hao sect for information, even though both sides are rivals. She asks what could possibly have brought him there. Jang Il explains that he is not there on behalf of the beggar sect. Instead, he says he has brought a client with him. All the while, Yonho is still laughing and calling Jang Il despicable. Branch leader Gui asks whether Jang Il is making fun of her. It is not the beggar. Sect asking, yet somehow the client he brought is also a beggar. She asks whether this is meant as an insult or some kind of provocation. Then she flatly says that they do not sell information to the beggar sect. Hearing that, Yonho says that he is not from the beggar sect, but as she turns away. Branch leader Gui says that if they continue insulting her like this, she will have no choice but to respond. Yonho should understand that they have pride too. Yonho then asks whether the Hao sect is not supposed to be an intelligence organization. Yet she does not even know whether he is from the beggar sect or not. She makes a living selling information, but she cannot even grasp something that basic. Yonho tells her that she does not even have the fundamentals down. That makes her angry enough to call one of her guards, Gongmu. When Gongmu answers, she asks him who Yonho is. Gongmu replies that they do not know much about him, but they do know that he is not from the beggar sect. Hearing that, branch leader Gui looks irritated. Yonho immediately points that out and says, see, now she can sell him information right. Still annoyed, branch leader Gui says no, she does not want to, then she tells them to leave. Yonho lets out a laugh and says she really has no business sense. He is offering to pay and she is still refusing. At this rate, he guesses it will not be long before the Hao sect falls apart. Branch leader Gui warns him that he had better watch his mouth unless he wants to lose his limbs. But Yonho says he is not wrong as he, then he goes even further and calls her an old lady. At that moment, branch leader Gui's face twists with an emotion that is impossible to fully describe. Then she asks whether Yonho is insulting her. Without waiting for an answer, she orders Gongmu to teach him a lesson. We then see the masked Gongmu rush toward Yonho and strike. But just as Gongmu's hand is about to reach him, Yonho pushes Jang Il aside and throws a punch of his own. In an instant, Gongmu is slammed headfirst onto the ground and knocked unconscious. Branch leader Gui is shocked. So is Jang Il. Out loud, branch leader Gui says that Yonho is a martial master. Yonho casually apologizes and says that it is simply his instinct to counterattack when someone tries to hit him. He even adds that he would have gone much easier if Gongmu had at least warned him before attacking. Jang Il, meanwhile, thinks that he suspected Yonho knew martial arts, but he never imagined he would be this strong. At that point, Jang Il comes to one very simple conclusion. Yonho is basically a monster. As Yonho scratches the back of his head, he mutters that this is all that old man's fault. Branch leader Gui stutters for a moment, then says that she did not realize Yonho was such a prestigious customer. Even so, she adds that it does not look like they came there with good intentions. Jang Il says she probably will not believe him, but they truly are not there to fight. There was simply information the beggar sect could not obtain, so he came to ask for her help instead. Branch leader Gui asks whether that is why Jang Il brought Yonho there. Jang Il says yes. She then says that Jang Il knows this is basically like bringing a tiger into a rabbit's den and asking for little fur, right? Jang Il says he understands how difficult that is to believe, but he is serious. After a moment, branch leader Gui says fine, she believes him. Jang Il immediately thanks her, but branch leader Gui says that giving him information is a separate matter altogether. After all, his client injured one of her people. That means compensation is required. She then explains that the rules of the unorthodox Murim are very simple. Blood for blood and a life for a life. With that, branch leader Gui calls for her guards, the Four Shadows. We then see several intimidating figures make their dramatic appearance. Looking at them, Yonho casually remarks that everyone in this place really has a fancy way of showing up. Branch leader Gui says she does not know what his purpose there is, but since he injured one of their people, he will not be allowed to leave unharmed. Yonho says that this really is not hard to understand. He already told her it was a mistake. He only hit that man lightly because the man tried to hit him first. With an angry expression, branch leader Gui curses him and says the law of the unorthodox Murim is simple: an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Yonho mocks that, saying it sounds more like something out of a loan shark's handbook. Branch leader Gui then says they will just take a little flesh from Yonho's face and call it even. Yonho apologetically tells her that he does not really have any fat left on his face. He has not been eating properly lately. That only makes her even angrier, and she immediately orders the Four Shadows to kill him. As the Four Shadows launch themselves at Yonho, he scratches the back of his head and remarks that he thought they were only planning to carve a little flesh from his face, yet now they suddenly want to kill him. That is a lot of interest to pile on at once. In a mocking tone, he says it is actually kind of scary. Then in the next instant, Yonho overwhelms them too. With the four shadows still hanging in the air, Yonho's expression changes. Releasing a wave of Kai, he tells everyone not to move. He says he does not want to kill anyone yet. Seeing that, Jang Il is left completely speechless. Branch leader Gui, meanwhile, immediately realizes that Yonho's aura is unmistakably that of a martial master. Yonho then says that his master once told him something important. If a person is willing to attack once, then they will be willing to attack 3 or even 4 times after that. Because of that, he says he should never allow things to reach that point. Yonho adds that he does not even like the old man, but the old man has never once said anything wrong. At that moment, branch leader Gui is genuinely terrified. In her mind, she realizes that she has provoked the wrong person, someone far beyond what she can handle. She forces herself to calm down, knowing that if she makes even one more mistake, this entire branch of the house sect could be destroyed because of it. So she quickly recomposes herself and asks Yonho what it is he wants. Yonho answers with one word. Branch leader Gui then asks what kind of information. Jang Il quickly steps in and says that he already has the papers, and he only hopes that she can fill in the missing parts. As branch leader Gui looks over the paper, she cannot help but think that Jang Il actually dragged a monster like Yonho all the way to the house sect because they could not handle something this simple themselves. Then she says there is nothing difficult about it and that she only needs a little time. After that, she asks Yonho whether he can wait. Yonho says yes. Branch leader Gui asks for 15 minutes, then turns to Jang Il with an angry expression and tells him to come with her. After some time passes, Jang Il finally returns. The moment Yonho sees him, he starts laughing and says that Jang Il's face looks like a dumpling. Then he asks whether branch leader Gui beat him up. Yonho goes on to say that he guesses the beggar sect must be nothing special if its people are getting beaten around by the house sect. Jang Il immediately snaps back and asks whether that woman looks like some ordinary member of the house sect. He explains that she is the daughter of the house sect leader and the future leader of the entire house sect. She has been fed miracle medicines like daily meals and raised with every possible advantage, so how could he ever be a match for her? Just then, branch leader Gui appears behind Jang Il and says that she has brought the information. Yonho thanks her, but she adds that they still have their own rules to follow. Jang Il immediately understands and mutters that she means the information fee. Yonho asks how much, and she replies that it will cost 5 nyang. Hearing that, Yonho casually hands over 5 bronze nyang and says that it is pretty cheap there. But Jang Il quickly corrects him and says it is not bronze, it is silver. That makes Yonho ask why it is so expensive. Branch leader Gui explains that the information he requested is actually rather high security, and that is why the price is so steep. The moment he hears that, Yonho simply gets up and starts walking away. Jang Il grabs at him and asks where he thinks he is going. Yonho says that he has to go earn the silver first. The second Jang Il hears that, he throws himself to the ground and grabs Yonho's leg, saying that he brought him there for a reason. Yonho asks what that is supposed to mean. Looking utterly unwilling, Jang Il tells him to wait a moment. In the end, Jang Il is forced to cough up the 5 silver nyang himself, using not only all the money Yonho earned but also his own hidden stash. He even has to borrow some of it with a written promise of repayment. As he hands over the silver, Jang Il thinks that his heart is literally breaking. Then he curses Yonho as an evil bastard. As he hands over the silver, Jang Il thinks that his heart is literally breaking. Then he curses Yonho as an evil bastard, says that his entire savings are gone because of him. Meanwhile, Yonho looks through the information and says that this is definitely thorough. It is on a completely different level compared to the scraps the beggars brought him. He admits that the house sect really is operating on another level then. While holding one of the papers, Yonho says that he also wants to send a letter to Guangong and asks whether that will be expensive too. Branch leader Gui replies that it would normally cost even more than hiring an escort agency, but she is willing to do it in exchange for Yonho answering a few questions. She first asks for his name and age. Yonho answers that his name is Yonho and that he is 17 years old. Hearing that, Jang Il is shocked to learn that Yonho is actually younger than him. Branch leader Gui is also surprised, because his martial ability is absolutely not what one would expect from someone only 17 years old. Then his name clicks in her mind, Yonho. Realizing who he is, she asks whether he is the second son of the Guangdong Y clan. Yonho asks whether she knows him. Branch leader Gui says of course she does. The Guangdong Y clan had actually asked the house sect to find Yonho. The moment Jang Il hears that, he asks whether Yonho is Y Sanho's younger brother. Yonho then asks how Jang Il knows his older brother. Jang Il answers that Sanho is his friend. Branch leader Gui then asks whether the letter Yonho wants to send is meant for the Guangdong Y clan. She tells him that it will take at least 10 days to reach them. Yonho says that is fine. They already waited 5 years, so another 10 days will not make much difference. After that, branch leader Gui hands Yonho a red cloth and explains that it marks someone as a special guest of the house sect. If Yonho ties it somewhere visible whenever he needs them, one of the house sect's informants will come find him. In her mind, she knows their 17-year-old strong enough to take down the 4 shadows is not someone who exists anywhere else in the Central Plains. Building a connection with someone like him could only benefit them in the future. But Yonho says the cloth is useless to him. So branch leader Gui immediately changes her approach and says that in that case, she will give him information for free next time. Especially for him, after what happened earlier, they do not want to lose him as a customer. Yonho laughs and says that nothing really happened anyway, right? At that, Jang Il blurts out that his face is swollen like a dumpling and he has been reduced to complete poverty. Branch leader Gui coldly tells him that sort of thing tends to happen when a person is a loser. Then the scene shifts outside, where Jang Il can be seen wallowing in despair over the money he lost. Yonho, on the other hand, keeps a perfectly straight face as he says that money comes and goes. Besides, a beggar should not be that greedy in the first place. He tells Jang Il to get back in touch with his roots as a beggar. Jang Il grows even more frustrated, but the most maddening part is that he cannot even beat Yonho up. Trying to end things, Jang Il says that Yonho got the information he wanted, so that should mean they never have to see each other again. But Yonho suddenly grabs him and says that there is a problem. Jang Il asks what it is. Then, with a bright smile on his face, Yonho says that he does not have any money. At that point, Jang Il truly wants to beat him to death, but he cannot. The scene then shifts back to the Hao sect branch, where branch leader Gui is deep in thought. She calls for Gongmu and tells him to send a letter to the main sect. The message is simple. The second son of the Guangdong clan who had gone missing has returned as a martial master. After that, Yonho arrives at the Great Hanam Institute. This is Songlan, the Great Hanam Institute. There, beside a lake, we see a scholarly man sitting peacefully while drinking tea. This is the third grand scholar, Mun Yuwen. Then his daughter arrives and tells him that he has a guest. We are also introduced to Mun Yuwen's daughter, Mun Yunji. Mun Yuwen says that he does not remember having anything scheduled for today. His daughter tells him that the guest said he wanted to play a game of Go with him. The instant he hears the word Go, Mun Yuwen brightens up. Then Mun Yunji brings Yonho over. Yonho politely says that he hopes he is not intruding. Mun Yuwen warmly replies that of course he is not, and that having guests is its own kind of pleasure. He says that he heard Yonho wanted to play Go with him. Yonho answers that it is the only sort of game he really knows how to play. Mun Yuwen says that in that case they should begin. He chooses white and tells Yonho to make the first move. Yonho says he will begin, then awkwardly pulls out the pieces in a clumsy manner. Seeing that, Mun Yuwen immediately lowers his expectations. He assumes Yonho is probably just there hoping for a free meal, so he decides he will simply help the boy out after they finish a game. But then Yonho places his first move. The moment Mun Yuwen sees it, he is surprised. It becomes clear right away that Yonho is not a beginner, and so the game begins. As it continues, Mun Yuwen realizes that Yonho plays incredibly fast. It is rare to see someone that age move with such confidence. More importantly, Yonho is not simply being cornered and eaten away. Before long, Mun Yuwen starts to feel as if he is facing a demon, or perhaps a warlord across the board. They continue through several more exchanges. Gradually, Mun Yuwen's expression turns gloomy. He cannot make his move. At that point, he can only think to himself, what is this? Yonho is not merely fast. Then with a sly smile, Yonho asks him whether he is not going to make his move. Mun Yuwen thinks to himself that Yonho is incredible. His style of play is like furious waves crashing across the sea. He plays like someone addicted to battle, charging in boldly even when a fight is not necessary. The moment he spots even the smallest opening, he rushes in like a starving demon and devours everything in sight. He is a war demon on the board. After the game, Mun Yuwen tells Yonho that it was a good match and says that he has a very unique style of play. Yonho thanks him and says it is all thanks to the bullying he suffered under his master. Hearing that, Mun Yuwen asks whether Yonho really had a master. Yonho briefly thinks back to the days of being tormented by his teacher, then answers yes, saying it was a very strict old man. Then Yonho says that if it is not too much trouble, he would love to stay there for a while. His master told him to remain in Rulan for some time. Hearing that Yonho is following his master's teachings, Mun Yuwen says of course he will help. He says he will prepare a room for Yonho and that he may stay as long as he likes. Then he tells his daughter Mun Yunji to prepare a room and clothes for Yonho and to guide him to the bath as well. Mun Yunji reluctantly says she understands, but Yonho suddenly says that he does not have any money. Hearing that, Mun Yuwen laughs and tells him that he would never expect payment from a guest like him. In fact, if Yonho had not asked first, he was going to suggest that he stay there anyway. In return, all Mun Yuwen asks is that Yonho occasionally play a game of Go with him or with any guests who visit. Yonho says that much he can do. After the two exchange greetings, Yonho leaves with Mun Yunji. While bathing, Yonho thinks about how incredibly nice this is. He used to hate baths when he was younger, but now he feels like he could almost cry from how good this feels. Then remembering his master, Yonho thinks that this is all that damned old man's fault. Outside the bath, Mun Yunji waits with clothes for him. While pouting, she thinks she cannot understand it at all. Why did her father accept someone like Yonho as a guest? Then, out of nowhere, Yonho comes out of the bath completely naked, startling her so badly that she screams and tells him to cover himself at once. She blurts out that she thought he was a ghost. The moment she gets a clear look at him, Yunji blushes. Yonho casually wraps himself with a cloth and in a cheeky tone asks whether this is good enough. Seeing Yonho all cleaned up, Yunji is momentarily stunned. And can only think, who exactly is this person? A few days later, Yunji goes to her father and tells him that he really needs to say something to that person. Mun Yuwen asks who she means. Yoonji answers that she is talking about the new guy. She complains that Yonho never even leaves his room. If he is not eating, then he is sleeping, and that is all he has done for the entire week. Mun Yoo-won stays quiet for a moment, then suddenly says that he forgot to ask Yonho's name. Already irritated, Yoonji says that her father is always the one who says sloth is a sin, and that a person should always keep himself busy. So why is he not saying anything now when Yonho is doing nothing but lazing around? She says Yonho may be a guest, but he is ruining the entire atmosphere of the place. Ignoring her frustration, Mun Yoo-won begins talking about Go. He says that he likes the game because a person can learn a great deal about an opponent through it. A person may hide facial expressions and choose words carefully, but in Go, one cannot hide oneself. Someone impatient cannot suddenly play with patience, and someone with a timid nature cannot simply learn to enjoy battle. In a single match, a person reveals both the way they have lived and the kind of person they truly are. Mun Yoo-won says that Yonho's style of play was hurried and rough, unlike anything he has ever seen before. Because of that, he is certain that Yonho is not a lazy person. Instead, he assumes Yonho must have lived a very difficult life. When sunlight shines brightly, the shadows it casts become just as dark. So if Yonho is being lazy now, Mun Yoo-won believes it only means that the life he lived until now was extraordinarily hard. He says that when a bird comes beneath a roof to avoid the rain, one should not drive it away, nor should one question why it is not flying through the storm. In the end, Mun Yoo-won tells Yoonji to simply let Yonho rest. Unable to argue back, Yoonji says she understands. But when she later sees Yonho sleeping lazily in a completely messy room, she boils with anger. She becomes convinced that her father has been deceived. There is no way this lazy bum is the kind of person her father described. So she decides that she is going to drive Yonho out herself. Marching in angrily, Yoonji tells Yonho to get up, half asleep. Yonho asks why he should get up. She grabs the blanket and yells at him to rise because the sun is already up. Yonho sleepily tells her to let him know when the sun sets instead. That is the final straw. Unable to hold back anymore, Yoonji demands to know what is wrong with him. Everyone else there is studying, so why has Yonho spent an entire week doing nothing except sleeping? With a smug look, Yonho replies that those people are studying because they want to study, while he is sleeping because he wants to sleep. So what exactly is the problem? Yoonji tells him to shut up. She says she cannot just keep watching him roll around in there without even bathing properly, and asks who he thinks is washing his sheets. At the very least, he should be doing something to pay for the food he eats. She says he may not realize it, but they are not exactly rich. They can afford to feed students who are there to learn, but they do not have the means to support someone who just lies around all day. Yonho points out that her father said he could stay as long as he liked. Yoonji immediately says that she is the one in charge of the money, so her father does not know any better. Then, fixing Yonho with a sharp stare, she waits for his answer. Letting out a sigh, Yonho asks what exactly she wants him to do. Yoonji tells him to do the laundry. Looking at the mountain of clothes, Yonho asks whether he really has to do all of that and whether it will cover the food he eats. Yoonji says yes and adds that it is not even that much. Then with a sneaky little laugh, she tells him good luck. She says every piece has to be spotless, because anything not cleaned properly will be washed all over again, so he had better do a thorough job. In her mind, she is sure Yonho deserves it. There is no way he can finish all of that in a single day. Then the scene shifts 2 hours later. Mun Yoonji stands there in utter shock. Every last piece of laundry is sparkling clean. She stares at the clothes and wonders how Yonho even managed this. Looking closer, she starts thinking that they somehow seem whiter than they ever were before. Once again, she asks herself how in the world he did it. Frustrated, Yoonji decides she cannot allow him to go back to lazing around again. So this time she takes him to the pile of logs and tells him to chop all of them. She gives him a week to finish the job and asks whether he thinks he can even manage it. She's certain that he will run away after a single day. But after some time passes, she comes back and finds every log already chopped, with Yonho sleeping comfortably on top of the stack. Once again, she is stunned. That amount of work should have taken 10 men 10 full days. After that, she gives him the dishwashing job. The exact same thing happens. Everything is done and Yonho is sleeping again. Then she tries gardening, and once more the work ends up shining with perfection while Yonho is found sleeping like always at that point. Yoonji is completely dumbfounded. Frustrated and furious, she cannot understand how Yonho is so absurdly capable. Then the story returns to the mad dog's perspective. He says that this is how Yonho's life in Rulan began. But taking him in was a mistake. Mun Yoo-won should never have allowed Yonho into his home. The young scholar asks why. The mad dog answers that it is because Yonho brings disaster everywhere he goes. It may not always be intentional, but wherever Yonho appears, trouble follows close behind, and Rulan was no different. A scholar's hall that had once been peaceful and quiet was soon swallowed by chaos. The moment Yonho appeared there, everything changed. The scholar asks what happened. The mad dog says it all began with the game of Go. We then see a very irritated Yonho thinking about how he even ended up in this situation. He thought it was only supposed to be an occasional visit. Instead, there is now a huge crowd gathered outside, all waiting for their turn to play Go against Yonho. Mun Yoo-won writes out a letter that says, "A stone that stays stagnant will rot. A laid table waits for its owner." If the time is right, please come visit for a game of Go. In other words, a master of Go has appeared at the great Hanam Institute. Then he sends that letter out to scholars across the Murim. What follows is a line of scholars stretching out endlessly, all waiting to challenge Yonho. We see an irritated Yonho rapidly playing one game after another. He defeats one scholar with total indifference, then immediately tells the next person to come forward. Yonho is in the middle of another game of Go with a scholar. Across from him, the scholar is under intense pressure, thinking as hard as he can. The moment he sees Yonho's move, he is thrown into confusion. What kind of move is that? It is practically suicide. For a moment, he wonders if it could be a mistake, but then he immediately rejects that thought. Maybe it would be a mistake if it came from an ordinary person. But the man sitting before him is the undefeated genius of Hanlam. Growing nervous, the scholar convinces himself that Yonho must have some deeper plan in mind. It has to be a trap. He absolutely must avoid it. He is certain Yonho is plotting something, so he carefully backs away from the bait, feeling relieved that he saw through it in time. Meanwhile, Yonho is trembling. He stares at the scholar with a deeply irritated expression, but inside, all he can think is why. Why did the scholar back off there? Why? Yonho made that move specifically so he could lose. At this rate, he is going to be stuck playing Go forever if he never loses. In his mind, he is practically screaming at the scholar to fall for it. If the man just takes the bait, Yonho can lose in 10 moves. But instead, the scholar respectfully acknowledges defeat. With tears practically forming in his eyes, Yonho politely returns the greeting. Nearly exhausted, he drags himself back toward his room. He keeps trying to make suicidal moves so that he can finally lose. But instead, those moves seem to be frightening his opponents even more, scratching his head. Yonho thinks that at this rate, even more people are going to show up wanting to challenge him. He would honestly rather be doing laundry. As he walks, his back aches. Then suddenly he hears someone's voice. He peeks over to see what is happening, and that is when we are introduced to the thoroughly unpleasant-looking Mokpung. He is asking Yoonji whether she really does not want to marry him. Yoonji answers immediately, saying no, absolutely not. Mokpung tells her that she is going to regret saying that, in anger. Yoonji says she will not. Mokpung then tells her she had better think it over again. He has always gotten what he wanted, and he never lets go of something once he decides he wants it right now. He says he is merely making an offer. But if she keeps refusing, then next time it will not be an offer anymore. Then he asks whether she is really willing to let the great Hanam Institute fall just because of her. Hearing that, Yoonji becomes furious and tells him to do whatever he wants. But Mokpung says that he can make it happen, and he is sure she knows that too. Yoonji grits her teeth in anger and screams that this is exactly what she hates about him. Does he really think everything will always go his way? Mokpung calmly says that it is not impossible. Yoonji shouts back that she is never going to marry him. It is impossible. Then she turns to leave. But Mokpung suddenly grabs her hand with his repulsive hand and squeezes tightly. Yoonji cries out and tells him to let go. Mokpung says it would be in her best interest not to anger him. Then, with a disgusting gesture, he tells her that she should think carefully before acting so boldly, especially if he decides to take her by force right there and then. That is when Yoonji becomes truly frightened. From behind them, Yonho suddenly speaks up and says that this is not the kind of thing someone should be saying in another person's house. The moment she hears his voice, Yoonji looks startled. She quickly tears herself free from Mokpung's grasp and runs toward Yonho, asking whether he already finished the laundry and firewood. Yonho says he has been playing Go until now, so what exactly is she talking about? But then his eyes fall to the scratch marks on Yoonji's hand. At that point, Yonho reaches over, takes one of Yoonji's hair ties, and says he will borrow it, then he calmly ties back his hair. Mokpung tells Yonho that listening in on other people's conversations is rude. Yonho casually apologizes and says he really does not know much about manners. Then he steps in front of Mokpung and says that even so, he does not think Mokpung should be the one lecturing anyone about manners. After all, do people who care about manners normally act the way he does? With an ugly expression, Mokpung says that Yonho must be the genius of Hanlam. In a mocking tone, Yonho thanks him for recognizing him, but adds that he has absolutely no idea who Mokpung is. When Mokpung tries to introduce himself, Yonho immediately cuts him off and says it is fine because he does not really care. That makes Mokpung furious. He says the genius of Hanlam should stick to playing Go instead of getting in his way. Yonho replies that what a shame, because getting in people's way is actually one of the things he does best, just like he is doing right now. Mokpung grits his teeth and curses Yonho. But before he can say anything more, several scholars appear and ask who is there. One of them even requests a match with Yonho for the next day. Seeing how the situation has changed, Mokpung decides to leave. Before going, he reminds Yoonji not to forget. If she does not come running into his arms within 3 days, then he will do things his own way. After he leaves, Yonho asks Yoonji who that was. Yoonji explains that he is a man named Mokpung, the adopted son of an imperial palace attendant who holds a great deal of power. Yonho then asks what exactly Mokpung was saying to her. Yoonji says he wants to marry her. She has refused him every single time, but he continues to harass her, and it is unbelievably irritating. Yonho then says that from the outside, Mokpung does not seem that bad. He comes from a powerful family, and he is certainly persistent. The moment Yoonji hears that, she gets furious and tells Yonho that Mokpung is not trying to marry her because he likes her. He only wants to use her. She says that Yonho may not know this, but her father has an incredibly wide network throughout Rulin. Some people even say he is a perfect candidate for political office. The reason he lives as he does now is not simply because he has no interest in civil service. But before she can finish, Yonho cuts in with a silly gesture and says it must be because of Go, right? Yoonji immediately says no. She explains that it is because the eunuchs of the imperial palace are extremely wary of her father. Yonho asks why the eunuchs would care when her father is only the owner of an institute. Yoonji says it is not just any institute. The Great Hanam Institute is completely different from the others. They are not affiliated with any outside organization, and it was difficult for them to grow this far because of that. But in exchange, they have built deep ties with many different groups. She goes on to explain that the eunuchs remain powerful despite being corrupt and useless, because the forces of Rulin have never united to drive them out. However, if her father were ever able to bring the forces of Rulin together, then the eunuchs would be in real danger. That is why Nok Mokpung's father is desperate to stop her father from stepping into civil service. And recently, he found a new solution. One that would both prevent Rulin from uniting against them and also tie them closely to one of Rulin's most influential figures. That solution is a marriage between Nok Mokpung and her. Then the scene shifts. We see Nok Mokpung kneeling before his father and apologizing. He says that an unexpected variable appeared, the genius of Hanlam, and because of that it may become difficult to continue the plan. This is our introduction to Nok Gi, the head of the eunuchs. Nok Gi asks whether the genius of Hanlam is not just some useless good-for-nothing who spends all day playing Go. Nok Mokpung quickly says that the genius of Hanlam is not the real issue. The real problem is that people from all over the country are coming to challenge him in Go, which means there are far too many eyes on the institute now. Because of that, Nok Mokpung's movements are restricted. It could be dangerous to try anything while so many people are watching. As he explains all of this, Nok Mokpung is visibly sweating in fear before his adoptive father. Nok Gi says he understands why Nok Mokpung is being cautious. Nok Mokpung apologizes again. But Nok Gi then asks whether he really believes this mission exists only for his own sake. Nok Mokpung cannot answer. Nok Gi says that taking control of the imperial palace is a mission handed down by the one and only. Because of that, failure is not an option for either of them. He says he fears disappointing that person even more than death itself. Then Nok Gi asks whether Nok Mokpung understands. Terrified and drenched in sweat, Nok Mokpung answers yes, he understands very well. Nok Gi then says that sometimes violence is necessary. With a chilling smile, he tells Nok Mokpung to use the crowd to his advantage and kill them all, including the genius of Hanlam. We are then introduced to Royal Head Inspector Hwanjia, the emperor's brother. He asks Mun Yuwen whether he is still unwilling to take a government position. Mun Yuwen apologizes to Hwanjia and politely refuses once again. Hwanjia asks him why he cannot see that he needs to stand at the center and maintain balance if they are ever going to stop. Nok Gi hearing that, Mun Yuwen falls silent and says nothing. Hwanjia lets out a frustrated sigh and says that Nok Gi's movements have been suspicious lately. There is unrest in the military and there is unrest among the scholar officials as well. Nok Gi is already worming his way into their minds. Mun Yuwen tries to say something, but Hwanjia cuts him off and says that he already knows what Mun Yuwen wants to ask. He knows Mun Yuwen is wondering why a man who cannot even have children would want to start a revolution. Mun Yuwen quietly admits that this is true. With a stern expression, Hwanjia says that if he were to tell Mun Yuwen that Nok Gi is not acting alone, and that there is another master standing behind him, would that change things? He says that the terror behind the eunuch's political struggle is beyond what most people can imagine, and yet Nok Gi managed to rise past all of them despite having absolutely no real foundation of his own. Is that not strange? The people who crossed Nok Gi died in accidents, while those who did not oppose him suddenly fell to illness. It was as if someone were clearing the road ahead of him. Hearing that, Mun Yuwen says it could simply be coincidence. But Hwanjia says he believed that too, at least until recently. The more he watched, the more he began to suspect that someone else might be helping Nok Gi from the shadows. And that is exactly why he needs Mun Yuwen. If they want to stand against Nok Gi, they have to unite as one. Mun Yuwen tells him that he needs a little more time to think about it. Hwanjia then changes the subject and asks what kind of person this new genius that Mun Yuwen took in really is. At that question, Mun Yuwen brightens up immediately and says that Yonho is amazing. He says it feels as though Yonho is still hiding his true potential. Hwanjia says that makes him curious about why Yonho, and asks when he can meet him. Mun Yuwen replies that Mun Yunji has already gone to bring Yonho over. At that exact moment, Yunji's voice comes from outside saying that they are here. Mun Yuwen tells them to come in. Then the door opens, and we see a soaking wet Yonho standing there beside a flustered Mun Yunji. The moment they see his condition, both Hwanjia and Mun Yuwen go speechless. Mun Yuwen quickly apologizes for calling him so early and asks whether Yonho slept well. In a sarcastic tone, Yonho says he slept very well. If only someone had not poured cold water all over his face while he was sleeping, completely ignoring the sarcasm. Mun Yuwen simply says he is glad Yonho slept well. Then, while pointing toward Hwanjia, Mun Yuwen tries to introduce him. But Hwanjia lightly winks and says that he is merely an old passerby. Yonho greets him and says it sounds like there must be some grand reason behind his visit, so what exactly is it? Mun Yuwen casually answers that what other reason could there be? He wants to play Go. With a straight face, Yonho says no, he cannot. Huangjia asks why he cannot. After all, he has been playing Go with everyone else who comes by. Yonho says he is not refusing to play Go altogether, but there is a proper order to these things. There are already people waiting who arrived before Huangjia, so he should wait for his turn like everyone else. Hearing that, Huangjia laughs and says that problem is simple to solve. He can just ask the others to be understanding. Yonho immediately looks irritated and says that is not really solving the problem at all. That is just coercion. At that, both Huangjia and Mun Yuwen are stunned into silence. Yonho then tells Huangjia that he seems to be someone of very high status. Because of that, everyone would probably go along with what he says, not because they truly agree but because they have no choice. Yonho says that he values promises and rules. Hearing that, Huangjia thinks Yonho is much firmer in his own beliefs than he expected. That makes this troublesome. He asks whether Yonho really cannot make an exception, but Yonho refuses again and says he still has to wait his turn. At that point, Mun Yunji steps in and tells her father that she thinks she can solve this. Inwardly clenching her fist in irritation, she thinks it is ridiculous for Yonho to act like he values rules and promises. Then she places a hand on Yonho's shoulder and says that if he just plays this one game, she will cancel all the other matches he is supposed to play today. The atmosphere around Yonho changes instantly. He says that the offer is tempting, but he is still a man with morals and ethics. However, if Mun Yunji is also willing to cancel tomorrow's matches. Before he can finish, Yunji cuts him off and says no. She tells him not to even think about bargaining for more if he wants to rest today. There is no room for negotiation. He can make his choice right now. The next moment, Yonho smoothly drops into place in front of the Go board and says, "Let us begin." Seeing that, both Huangjia and Mun Yuwen are surprised. In his mind, Huangjia thinks this is the worst. Yonho is not a man of his word at all. He feels like getting up and leaving, but in the end, he decides to see the match through. As he places his stones, Huangjia carefully watches, wanting to understand what kind of person Yonho really is. The game ends fairly quickly. Later that night, we see Huangjia sitting alone before the Go board, deep in thought. Mun Yuwen asks whether he did not enjoy his game with Yonho. Huangjia keeps staring at the board, and thinks to himself that Yonho's style is violent and absurdly fast. It is the sort of play one would not even see in a game held in the middle of a battlefield. He wonders what kind of life Yonho must have lived. Even so, Huangjia decides that Yonho is not the right person. The laziness, the violence, none of that is what he is looking for. So Huangjia tells Mun Yuwen that the whole thing was a waste of time. He says he does not understand why Mun Yuwen values Yonho so highly. Mun Yuwen answers that it is because he saw something. Huangjia asks what he means. Mun Yuwen says that during one of his games against Yonho, he once played a prophylactic move and thought it was a very good one. He believed the game was already finished at that point, so he let his attention drift away from the board for just a moment. But what he saw instead was the face of a man who had fallen deeply into a rare kind of trance. As Huangjia gets ready to leave, he asks whether Mun Yuwen is certain that he saw correctly. With complete confidence, Mun Yuwen says that he is sure. Huangjia gives a small pout and says that no matter what, he still has no intention of taking Yonho in, even so. Although the visit felt like a waste, he at least got to see Mun Yuwen, so it was not entirely pointless. Then he says that he should leave early tomorrow. Mun Yuwen asks whether he is truly that busy. Looking up at the moon, Huangjia says that he already explained how tense things have become lately. Then, as he gazes at the night sky, he quietly says what a shame. The night is so perfect, then the scene shifts. Outside the gates of the Great Hanam Institute, someone appears. A masked man reports to Nok Mokpung that all preparations are complete. Behind Nok Mokpung stands a large group of masked men, each with a sword in hand, ready to strike at any moment, wearing a creepy smile. Nok Mokpung orders them to finish it quickly. At once, the masked men leap toward the Great Hanam Institute. Inside, we see someone sweeping the grounds, hearing the sound. He turns around only to be killed on the spot. His blood splashes across the gates of Hanam. Nok Mokpung pushes the gate open, and the moment he steps inside, we see the masked men slaughtering the scholars of Hanam. Nok Mokpung says that this is exactly why Mun Yunji should have listened to him while he was still being nice. He orders the masked men to kill every last one of them. With a disgusting smile, Nok Mokpung declares that tonight the Great Hanam Institute will become a prison that not even a rat can escape from. And through all of this, why Yonho is still sleeping peacefully. Thinking of Mun Yunji, Nok Mokpung decides that today, he is going to teach that brat a lesson. Around him, the masked men gather up all the scholars and tie them down. Mun Yuwen demands to know what all of this means. Nok Mokpung calmly says that they received information about suspicious activity taking place inside the Great Hanam Institute. According to that information, all kinds of people with high authority have been visiting recently. Hearing that, Mun Yuwen angrily asks how any of that is suspicious. With a smug expression, Nok Mokpung answers with a question of his own. If people with both political influence and martial power are gathering in one place, then what possible reason could there be? To him, there is only one answer: a revolution. Furious, Mun Yuwen demands to know what nonsense Nok Mokpung is spouting. He says those people came for only one reason: to play Go. Nok Mokpung asks whether he really expects anyone to believe that this many people gathered just to play a board game. Panicking, Mun Yuan insists that he's telling the truth. Surely Nok Mokpung has already heard the rumors about the genius. Nok Mokpung says that yes, he heard the rumors, but rumors can be fabricated easily. Then he asks where the so-called genius is. One of the masked men asks who exactly he is looking for. Nok Mokpung says he means the genius Mun Yuan keeps talking about. The masked man replies that there is no one left inside the building. Hearing that, Nok Mokpung figures Yonho must have slipped away earlier, because once they arrived, escape should have been impossible. Clicking his tongue, Nok Mokpung calls Yonho a lucky bastard. Then Nok Mokpung tells the scholars that if they are truly innocent, they will all be released. If no problem is found, he will free them and even apologize. But at that moment, one of the masked men arrives carrying a book and says that he found it. He claims it is an agreement signed by the people planning the revolution. The moment Mun Yuan sees that, he is shocked and insists that they have never done any such thing. Holding up the ledger, Nok Mokpung says the proof is right in front of them. Mun Yuan immediately realizes what this really is. Nok Mokpung came there intending to frame them from the very beginning. They were set up from the start. Some of the scholars frantically protest that it was not them. They are innocent. One even cries out that he had no idea about any of this and never came there to be involved in something like that. Then, in the middle of the chaos, Huanjia rises to his feet and says that this has become a very interesting incident. The moment Nok Mokpung sees him, he's startled and flustered. Huanjia shouts at him, ordering him to address him properly as the royal head inspector. Nok Mokpung and the masked men fall silent. The scholars are instantly relieved. Since Huanjia saw everything with his own eyes, surely he will testify that they are innocent. Nok Mokpung hurriedly greets Huanjia and says he never would have carried this out if he knew Huanjia was present. Huanjia tells him that he is not a petty man, so there is no need for excuses. He simply orders Nok Mokpung to untie them all. For a moment, Nok Mokpung regains his composure. Then he says that before doing that, he would like to ask Huanjia one question. Huanjia asks what it is, and with a sickening smile, Nok Mokpung asks why Huanjia planned this revolution. He then reveals that he knew from the start that Huanjia was there. Huanjia asks what nonsense he is talking about, but before he can do anything, the masked men force him to the ground. Nok Mokpung says that every revolution has to have a central figure. He never thought it would be some random scholar. The most likely mastermind would obviously be Huanjia, a member of the imperial family himself. Hearing that, Huanjia explodes in rage and shouts that Nok Mokpung's arrogance knows no bounds. How dare he try to frame him like this? Does he really think he can escape the consequences? Huanjia swears that he will never let Nok Mokpung get away with this. But Nok Mokpung coldly says that Huanjia seems to misunderstand the situation. Huanjia will not be reporting anything to His Majesty because he is never going to see the Emperor again. Nok Mokpung explains that the punishment for treason is immediate execution. That means every single person there is going to die. Then he says that they already have the signed agreement of the so-called revolutionaries, so what will His Majesty think when he sees it? The conclusion will be obvious. They were all plotting rebellion. After saying all that, Nok Mokpung bursts into loud laughter. Huanjia curses him as a bastard and says the heavens will never forgive him for this. But Nok Mokpung tells him to keep begging if he wants, because there is still one person who has to die first. Mun Yunji turning toward her. Nok Mokpung reminds her that he warned her he would do things his own way. Because she rejected him, everyone there is now going to die. Then he asks whether she is finally willing to change her mind. In response, Mun Yunji spits in his face. She tells him that she would rather die right there than marry someone like him. That makes Nok Mokpung's face twist hideously. Reaching out, he touches Mun Yunji's cheek and tells her not to worry. He has no intention of killing her. Instead, he will make her wish death had been the outcome. He tells her to imagine the worst thing possible, because what he will do to her will be 100 times worse than that. Trying to resist with everything she has, Mun Yunji says that he must be insane if he thinks she will simply let that happen. She would rather die than be humiliated by him. But Nok Mokpung tells her that if she kills herself, then her father will be the one forced to suffer. And if her father kills himself too, then everyone else there will take his place. He says she should not think this ends with just her. The families of traitors are wiped out completely, so if she really wants to die, then she should go ahead. Laughing cruelly, he says everyone else will just pay for that sin instead. Mun Yunji grits her teeth in rage. Then Nok Mokpung grabs her by the hair and tells her to kill herself if she wants. He would not mind having even more people to entertain him. Touching her cheek again, he asks whether they should begin. Unable to do anything, Mun Yunji can only pray in her heart for someone to save her. Then she opens her eyes, and her face immediately darkens. Because what she sees is Yonho leaving. He is already climbing the wall, ready to escape. Right before he gets away, Mun Yunji shouts for him at the top of her lungs, and instantly everyone turns to see Yonho trying to run. Caught in an awkward spot, Yonho lets out a foolish laugh. Mun Yunji demands to know what the hell he is doing. Yonho answers as if it should be obvious. He says he is making his getaway. Mun Yunji asks whether he is joking. Yonho says that if he is really running away, then what is wrong with saying he is running away? Then he adds that maybe she just does not like the phrasing. Should he say he is taking his leave instead? Yunji immediately shouts that he should be helping them. He learned martial arts so he can fight. But Yonho says there is no way he can help. It is already hard enough just to keep himself alive, and she is clearly overestimating how skilled he is. In a situation like this, the smartest thing to do is pretend he never saw any of it, then with a casual wave toward the intruders. Yonho says that he did not see anything, so they should all just continue with whatever they were doing. At that moment, everyone there can only think the same thing. What a complete piece of trash. Nakmokpung shouts at Yonho to stop right there. He says Yonho is already involved in the revolution now, and from this point on, the whole world will be after him. There will be nowhere safe left for him. Yonho replies that Nakmokpung cannot really know that for sure. Calling him a fool, Nakmokpung says the world may be vast, but there are eyes everywhere and finding him would not be difficult. Still trying to leave, Yonho casually tells him to come look for him later. That is when Nakmokpung orders the masked men to seize him. The masked men rush Yonho all at once. Seeing that, Mun Yunji suddenly yells for Yonho to run. That makes Yonho stop and look confused. Just moments ago she was telling him to help and now she is telling him to flee. What exactly is he supposed to do? Then one of the masked men swings at Yonho and misses. For a split second, the attacker wonders if what he saw was an afterimage. In the next instant, Yonho slams his elbow into the man and drives him straight into the ground. Then in a dramatic tone, he mutters that this is such a hassle. And while looking at Mun Yunji, he tells her that she really is a strange woman. Before he can even finish the sentence, Yonho bursts forward. In an instant, he appears right in front of the masked man. And knocks the poisoned dagger out of his hand. Then he follows with another strike. The masked man cannot avoid it at all. Once again, he crashes to the ground and loses consciousness. Nakmokpung, Mun Yuwen, and Hwanjia are all stunned by what they just saw. None of them know what to make of it. Seeing all of this, Nakmokpung is shaken. He cannot believe it is possible to defeat the first darkness that easily. All the scholars are left dumbstruck. But instead of retreating, Nakmokpung starts clapping. Wearing a strange smile, he says excellent. To display martial skill like this at such a young age is truly excellent. Yonho casually thanks him for the compliment. Irritated, Nakmokpung snaps that it was not meant as praise. Then Nakmokpung calls one of the masked men forward and demands to know how much longer he intends to endure this ridiculous humiliation. Nakmokpung then tells him not to kill Yonho. Then Nakmokpung makes an offer. He asks Yonho to work for him. The masked man apologizes and says he will handle it immediately. Nakmokpung then tells him not to kill Yonho. The masked man asks why. Nakmokpung answers that he plans to tear Yonho apart with his own hands. Then the masked man rushes forward again. Shouting at the top of his lungs, he charges straight at Yonho. The masked man charges in, but Yonho suddenly tells him to wait a second. Confused, the masked man asks what it is. Yonho says he needs to use his sword, so could the man stay put for a moment while he goes to get it. In his mind, Yonho is already thinking that his sword is back in his room. The masked man calls him a crazy bastard. Yonho replies that the man already looks old enough as it is, yet he still has a problem when someone younger politely says he just wants to go grab a sword. The masked man angrily tells him to shut up. Then Yonho glances at the broom nearby and says that 5 years ago the world was not like this, so how did it become this harsh in the meantime? He picks up the broom and the masked man asks what exactly he is doing. Yonho answers that since he is not being allowed to get his sword, he will just use the broom instead. That only makes the masked man angrier, and he demands to know whether Yonho is mocking him. With a smug look, Yonho says there is no reason to get mad. If he does not like it, then he should have just let Yonho fetch his sword. Then the masked man rushes forward again, swearing that while he will not kill Yonho, he will make him suffer so much pain that he will wish he were dead. He says that even if Yonho ends up crying and begging later, it will be too late. But Yonho, sounding completely indifferent, says that they should just start already because he only woke up recently and is still sleepy. The masked man, enraged and unable to tolerate Yonho's attitude, releases killing intent and prepares to strike seriously. With killing intent unleashed, the masked man rushes forward and swings his sword to kill Yonho. The masked man swings his blade down with full force, aiming to cut Yonho down instantly. In the next moment, before anyone could react, Yonho moved and slammed the masked man straight into the ground. Without even using his sword, Yonho casually struck him away, sending him flying. The masked man couldn't even understand what just happened. He crashed down and lay there, completely defeated. Everyone watching was shocked by what they had just witnessed. As if nothing had happened, Yonho casually tightened his grip. Yonho casually said he was just cleaning up garbage. Only then did he realize the gap between them. He still couldn't accept it and tried to get back up. A moment later, the masked man regains consciousness. Yonho points the broom at him and tells him to be grateful it only ended like that because it was Yonho he faced. Still unable to understand what just happened, the masked man curses him and calls him a bastard. That instantly annoys Yonho, and he starts smacking him with the broom while saying that he was kindly trying to explain things. The masked man realizes that Yonho is far too fast. Forced back, he starts to retreat. It is absurd. Yonho is not just some loudmouth. Forced back, he starts to retreat. He does not want to admit it, but he has no choice. It is absurd. Yonho is not just some loudmouth. Even so, he tells himself that in real combat, the strongest does not always win. Then he pulls out a deadly poison, the 7-step soul-chasing serpent. The moment Yonho sees it, he asks whether the man does not think that is dirty. The masked man asks whether Yonho is claiming to be immune to all poisons. Then he says that poison will not work on him. Yonho says no, he did not grow up boiling and eating ginseng roots or anything ridiculous like that. Of course, poison works on him. It is not that he is immune, it is more like. Before he can even finish the sentence, Yonho bursts forward. In an instant, he appears right in front of the masked man. And knocks the poison dagger out of his hand. Then he follows with another strike. The masked man thinks he has to block it, and before the man can react, Yonho's strike lands. The masked man cannot avoid it at all. Nakmokpung, Mun Yuhun, and Hwanjia are all stunned by what they just saw. None of them know what to make of it. Yonho then says that his master always used to tell him that if the enemy looks like he is preparing something grand, then he should not wait around and watch. Seeing all of this, Nakmokpung is shaken. He cannot believe it is possible to defeat the first darkness that easily. After all, that man is the head of the dark force his father spent decades building. Then Yonho looks at Nakmokpung and tells him that if he backs down here, things will be better for both of them. But instead of retreating, Nakmokpung starts clapping. Wearing a strange smile, he says, "Excellent. To display martial skill like this at such a young age is truly excellent." That catches Yonho off guard and almost makes him embarrassed. Mun Yuwin loudly calls out to Yonho, asking what the hell he is doing. They are enemies, what's with all the talking? Nakmokpung smiles and says that it doesn't matter. He walks over to the unconscious Nakmokpung and says that he should get up. He begins explaining that it's because the first darkness underestimated his opponent. Yonho asks if he is talking about him. Nakmokpung says that since they now know each other's strength, there is no need to keep fighting. He says that if Yonho is willing to join him, he will grant him tremendous power. He says that he has no intention of doing that. That answer completely throws Mun Yuwin off. Instead, he says that if Nakmokpung has something to say, he should explain it more clearly. Mun Yuwin suddenly shouts at Yonho, telling him to kill Yonho. Mun Yunji screams at Yonho, asking what in the world he is doing. Are power and wealth really that important? Without even a shred of shame, Yonho says absolutely. Nakmokpung immediately agrees with him. And before long, even Mun Yunji is forced to admit that yes, of course those things matter. Hwanjia gets flustered and awkwardly adds that it is true. Then he asks how much Nakmokpung could possibly offer because whatever it is, he will give it to Yonho instead. That instantly catches Yonho's interest. Nakmokpung mockingly asks what Yonho thinks Hwanjia could even do for him. Hwanjia may be the emperor's brother, but he has already given up both wealth and power. At best, he could only offer Yonho some official position. In contrast, Nakmokpung says his father can give Yonho all the wealth and authority he could ever dream of. Hearing that, Yonho tells Hwanjia that he is definitely losing right now. Then Mun Yuwin cuts in and says that there is a huge difference between helping an evil man carry out his schemes and helping expose a conspiracy. He asks Yonho whether his master never taught him morals. The moment he hears that, Yonho looks at him and asks if he is really talking about his master. Suddenly nervous, Mun Yuwin asks what exactly Yonho's master told him. In a situation like this, what advice did he give? In his mind, Mun Yuwin thinks that since Yonho always brings up his master, he must value that man's teachings deeply. There is no way such a master would have taught his disciple rotten principles. Surely, Yonho's master gave him something that could help them now. Yonho starts speaking and says that his master told him, then he pauses. All the scholars wait in anticipation. Then Yonho finishes the sentence. His master told him to stick with whichever side gives him more money. Yonho goes on to explain that his master said morals and recognition have no value because they are not what puts food on the table. If money is being offered, then the right thing to do is take it instead of trying to act kind. Hearing that, Mun Yuwin can only think what on earth is wrong with both the master and the disciple. Nakmokpung, however, says that Yonho's master is absolutely right. What do morals and recognition matter in the end? His father knows how to reward people who are useful to him, so he asks Yonho what he thinks. Will he work for him? But the moment Yonho hears the word work, his face tightens with irritation. He asks whether he actually has to work. That is when Mun Yunji jumps in and says that they will not make him do any work at all. They will feed him the best food and let him rest all day, every day. That immediately catches Yonho's attention. Nakmokpung also realizes what kind of person he is dealing with and quickly changes his approach. He says he was foolish to put it that way. If Yonho does not want to work, then fine, he does not have to. Of course, Nakmokpung will still give him the reward he promised. Yonho asks if he really means that. Then he walks right over to Nakmokpung, throws an arm around him and tells him that he really is generous. A true man. Nakmokpung lets out an awkward laugh and says he is nothing compared to Yonho. Watching this, Mun Yuwin, Mun Yunji, and Hwanjia are all boiling with rage, yet none of them can do anything. All they can do is curse Yonho in their heads. Then Yonho asks Nakmokpung what exactly he has to do. As always, Nakmokpung lets out that disgusting laugh. Then he asks Yonho whether he can start by killing everyone there. After all, it is only natural for traitors to be sentenced to death. When Mun Yunji turns to look at Yonho in disbelief, he casually points at Nakmokpung and says that is what he said. Then Yonho asks the others why exactly they committed treason. Mun Yunji finally snaps and screams what treason he is talking about. Nakmokpung made the whole thing up. She asks whether Yonho seriously believes him. Yonho says that the situation says otherwise. They even found a ledger full of signatures. That makes Mun Yunji scream at him and call him a damned bastard. Then Yonho turns back to Nakmokpung and says it feels like a bit much to kill them all. Besides, he has never killed anyone before. Nakmokpung says that in that case he will do it himself. he orders someone to bring him a sword, and says that although he dislikes dirtying his own hands, there should never be hesitation when carrying out a sentence. Manhwa shouts for him to stop. He says Mokpung is clearly an educated man, so how can he commit something so disloyal to the nation? Sword in hand, Mokpung replies that what he is doing now is out of loyalty to the country. Manhwa begins crying out for her father. Manhwa closes his eyes and prepares himself for death, then softly apologizes to his daughter. Just as Mokpung is about to bring the blade down and cut off Manhwa's head, Yonho suddenly stops the sword and tells him that is enough. The instant Mokpung realizes he cannot pull his weapon free from Yonho's grip, he is shaken. How is Yonho this strong? Then he asks whether Yonho forgot everything they just talked about. Yonho says of course not, he just had enough of playing along. Then he asks Mokpung whether he knows what is truly necessary to be lazy. It is avoiding trouble. Yonho says that once when his father was away from home, he broke an ink stone his father treasured. After that, he stayed away for 3 days, but those 3 days felt like a living hell. When he finally came back, he got beaten half to death, and strangely enough, once that was over, he felt much better. Hearing that, Hwanjia says his father should have killed him back then. Mokpung, completely lost, asks what in the world Yonho is talking about. But Yonho continues. He says his master also told him something else. A person should never forget his grudges, but he also should never forget what others have done for him. Debts have to be settled before the interest piles up. Then Yonho says that he thinks it is finally time to pay back what he owes. All of them are stunned. Mokpung says he understands now. So all those words were simply Yonho's way of saying that he intends to stand in his path. Then Mokpung lets out an especially revolting laugh and asks whether Yonho really thought he was trying to recruit him because he was afraid. Scratching the back of his head, Yonho says not really. It never felt that way to him. At that, Mokpung raises his hand and a massive palm made of kai forms in the air. As he prepares his technique, he tells Yonho that if he wants to, he can kill him as easily as crushing an insect. Yonho should consider it an honor to die by Mokpung's hand. Seeing this, both Manhwa and Hwanjia are shocked. They had no idea that Mokpung also knew martial arts. Then Mokpung unleashes the technique. A storm of giant palms made of kai rushes toward Yonho from every direction. Laughing, Mokpung tells him that in his next life, he should try being less lazy as the palms are about to strike. Manhwa cannot even bear to watch. But then Yonho calmly says that it is strange, because he feels like he has seen this martial art somewhere before. Hearing that, Mokpung feels a surge of satisfaction. That is right, since Yonho seems strong, he used an ultimate technique from the very beginning. And yet Yonho still cannot even react in time. But before that thought can fully settle, everything changes. Yonho starts weaving through the incoming palms with ease. Mokpung is stunned. Before he can even process what happened, Yonho has already appeared behind him and casually asks whether he is done now. Terrified and stammering, Mokpung asks how this is possible. Yonho simply tells him that he watched the whole thing. Then, without another word, Yonho drives a kick into him and sends him flying straight into the wall. And with perfect flair, Yonho declares that when it comes to cleaning up trash like Mokpung, one kick is enough. All the scholars stare at Yonho in complete awe. After that, Yonho starts untying everyone one by one. Hwanjia then asks whether Mokpung is dead. Yonho casually says no, he only hit him lightly, and Mokpung's body is thick with fat anyway, so he is probably fine. Then Yonho walks over to Mokpung, flexes his arm a little, and asks whether they should continue where they left off. Mokpung immediately tells him to wait, then shamelessly suggests that they should all just pretend none of this ever happened. The moment those words come out, everyone else is left speechless. Hwanjia immediately says that is unacceptable and orders Yonho to seize him at once. Addressing him as Your Highness, Mokpung desperately pleads with him. But Hwanjia asks whether Mokpung has ever seen the Inspector General allow a traitor to walk free. Mokpung says that if he does not return, his father will assume the plan has failed and make one final desperate gamble. And no matter how that turns out, the Imperial House will suffer irreversible damage. Hearing that, Hwanjia calls him a wicked man. He knows that if they push too hard over this one incident, the Imperial Palace may end up drenched in blood. Even if he sees it coming and tries to stop it, Nokgi's forces are too deeply rooted. Chaos would erupt either way, and knowing Nokgi, he would only resort to even filthier methods after that. Then Hwanjia asks whether Mokpung is really telling him to stand there and watch traitors run wild through the Imperial Court with his own eyes. Mokpung calmly replies that this is politics, is it not? The Inspectorate can seize a weakness of the eunuchs and use it to secure a temporary peace. Hwanjia says he has heard that eunuchs are like rats, always leaving themselves 10 holes to escape through. After that, he tells Mokpung to leave while he still has the chance, so Mokpung withdraws with his men. But before he fully leaves, Yonho stops him and says he wants to offer one piece of advice. He asks whether Mokpung's martial art is the art of flowing grace. It is a formidable technique. However, since Mokpung is also maintaining the bone-shrinking art at the same time, its effectiveness is bound to drop if he truly wants to face Yonho properly next time. He would be better off releasing that transformation first. Transformation, after all, is a martial technique used to alter one's outward appearance. Nok Mokpung says he will keep that in mind for next time. Yonho immediately says he would prefer there not be a next time. But Nok Mokpung answers that there will be, at least as long as Yonho continues wearing the identity of the genius of Hanlam. After that long night, morning finally arrives. Yonho lets out a sigh and says that everything is finally over. Then he notices that everyone else is still staring at him. Yonho simply says he's going to bed now and that they can handle the rest on their own. Mun Yunji instantly gets angry and asks whether he is really going back to sleep again. Yonho replies that he has full board and lodging rights, so surely she is not going to go back on her word now. Then already hurrying toward bed, he tells Mun Yunji not to wake him up, and this time he really means it. Watching him, Mun Yunji can only wonder what kind of person he even is. Mun Yuwen and Li Wanjie silently agree. Even after that day, Yonho's life continues in absolute comfort. Li Wanjie and Mun Yuwen remain busy cleaning up the aftermath of that incident, but none of it has anything to do with Yonho. Every meal, delicious food is brought directly to his room, and nobody nags him for sleeping. To Yonho, it is truly paradise on earth. Then one day, Mun Yunji storms into his room and tells him to wake up. Yonho remains perfectly still, pretending to be asleep. That only makes Yunji angrier, and she tells him not to fake it because she knows very well he is not actually asleep. At that, Yonho finally sits up and asks what happened to his full day of rest. Yunji tells him that her father is calling for him. She says she was not the one who summoned him, so if he has complaints, he can take them up with her father. Then she reminds him that after lying in bed for an entire week, he is not seriously planning to refuse, is he? Yonho asks whether he cannot just tell her father that he will see him later. That is the last straw for Yunji. She yanks the blanket right out from under him and Yonho drops to the floor. Soon after, Yunji brings Yonho in and addresses Li Wanjie respectfully as my lord. She says she has brought Yonho, and Mun Yuwen tells them to come inside. Yonho enters the room. Mun Yuwen then tells Yunji that she did well and may leave now. At that exact moment, both Yunji and Yonho bow as if they are both about to leave together. Seeing this, Li Wanjie immediately gets irritated and tells Yonho that he is not the one being dismissed. Yonho pretends to misunderstand and says that His Highness must be telling Mun Yunji to stay. Yunji gets frustrated and snaps that it is not her, it is him. At this point, Li Wanjie looks ready to explode, but he forces himself to scratch his head and laugh awkwardly instead. Yonho finally sits down. Then Li Wanjie brings out an embroidered sword, but for a moment he says nothing. Mun Yuwen has to remind him. And only then does Li Wanjie hand the sword over to Yonho. The moment Yonho sees it, he becomes visibly excited and accepts it immediately. Li Wanjie then asks whether Yonho even knows what it is. Yonho says no. That makes Li Wanjie ask why in the world he accepted it without question. Yonho makes a money gesture and says it looked expensive. His master taught him that if something looks like money, he should grab it first and ask questions later. Li Wanjie tries to explain the sword, but Yonho instantly cuts him off and says no takebacks. Then he warns Li Wanjie not to be stingy. Surely someone of Lord Li Wanjie's status would not stoop so low as to take back a gift once it had been given. Li Wanjie says that is not what he meant, but Yonho says it is too late. He already put his spit on the sword, so now it belongs to him. That finally makes Li Wanjie burst out. Calling Yonho a damned brat, he tells him to shut up and listen for a moment. At this rate, Yonho is going to doom his whole clan. That sword is the sacred relic of the inspectorate. Wherever Yonho goes while bearing it, people will treat him as Li Wanjie's equal. Hearing that, Yonho takes the sword out and examines it for a moment. Li Wanjie asks whether there is a problem. Yonho asks whether that is all. Is there not some practical benefit like being able to buy food or a house with it? Li Wanjie is stunned and asks what he just said. Yonho then asks why Li Wanjie of all people is acting surprised. Yonho did his part that day, so if this sword is meant to make them even, that is nowhere near enough. Give and take, that is how the world works. That is just the way things are now. People want something more realistic, something more material. Then with an awkward little gesture, Yonho says he cannot quite bring himself to say it outright. Li Wanjie clenches his fist and asks whether Yonho wants him to forget the inspectorate relic and just hand over money instead. Yonho answers that he would never put it so bluntly. He has manners after all. Unable to restrain himself anymore, Li Wanjie hurls an inkstone at Yonho. Yonho catches it immediately and asks whether this is his too because it looks expensive. Meanwhile, poor Mun Yuwen can only think that it is his precious inkstone. After forcing himself to calm down again, Li Wanjie repeats that the sword is the sacred relic of the inspectorate. Wherever Yonho goes with it, he will be treated as though he holds the same office as Li Wanjie himself. In other words, it is essentially the same as granting Yonho a post equal to the Inspector General. Yonho immediately asks whether that not just means more work for him. Li Wanjie says he told him it is a government post. Yonho asks whether that is not the same thing. Li Wanjie insists that it is not. Yonho asks how exactly it is different. In the end, Li Wanjie just tells him to accept that it is different and stop questioning it. So Yonho says fine. Out of respect for his elders, he will let it slide. Then Mun Yuwen explains that for a long time, the inspectorate used to send secret inspectors out into the Central Plains. That position has remained vacant for some time, and he asks Yonho to take it up. Holding up the sword, Yonho asks whether just this is enough to make it official. Li Wanjie quickly says he is not asking him to go govern anything. It is a reward. If he has to, he will even sell his own house to properly reward Yonho. then he calls him a stubborn turtle. Hearing that, Yonho says that is a relief. For a second there, he thought things were about to get troublesome. Li Wanjie asks what he means by that. Yonho says it is nothing. But at that point, both Li Wanjie and Mun Yuwen remember Yonho's money gesture from earlier, and they immediately realize he was definitely planning to sell the sword. Then Li Wanjie asks Yonho what clan he belongs to and who his master is. Yonho says he cannot answer that. Li Wanjie asks whether he is refusing because he does not trust him. That makes Li Wanjie angry again, and he shouts that Yonho knows full well who he is, yet still does not trust him, and now he intends to hide his identity on top of that. But Yonho replies in a completely straight tone that this is not about identity. It is about trust. He says he cannot trust someone who hides his martial arts and puts on an act so obvious that anyone can see through it. Then he asks Li Wanjie how many seconds it would have taken him to subdue Nok Mokpung. 5, or maybe 3. That completely catches Li Wanjie off guard. Then Yonho says that dancing around on someone else's chessboard like this is unpleasant. And as he releases his aura and speaks in a serious tone, he says he cannot stand it. Li Wanjie falls silent for a moment the instant he realizes he has been exposed. At last, he speaks and asks whether Yonho knew all along that he was capable of martial arts. Yonho admits that he found the whole situation strange from the beginning. He explains that while he knows some people can be obsessively devoted to the game of Go, traveling 400 kilometers just to play is ridiculous. And yet, far too many people kept showing up there under the excuse of playing Go. That made him assume there had to be some hidden scheme behind it all. And on top of that, Li Wanjie himself appeared right in the middle of it. Then, when Nok Mokpung revealed himself and the situation exploded, Yonho realized that he would eventually have to decide which side he was going to stand on. Li Wanjie asks whether siding with them was not the obvious choice from the start. But Yonho seriously says that it was actually more likely Nok Mokpung had been telling the truth. The ledger of signatures may have been fake, but the royal head inspector really had been gathering people in secret. It is difficult to believe that such a thing was only a harmless social gathering. From Yonho's point of view, the most likely explanation was treason. Hearing that, Li Wanjie asks why Yonho helped them anyway. He says that his original plan was to run away if he did not get caught. But when he saw that she truly seemed ignorant of what was going on, he could not just leave her behind. Then he adds that his master always told him that meaning and worldly affairs matter, but if a person cannot see the one standing right in front of him, then all of it is meaningless. Li Wanjie says that must be why Yonho acted the way he did, watching his reaction throughout the entire incident. Yonho agrees but bluntly adds that it felt awful. Then Yonho gets straight to the point and directly asks whether Li Wanjie is planning treason. Li Wanjie throws the question back at him and asks what he would do if he admitted that he was. Yonho answers that in that case he would simply go to sleep in comfort. Li Wanjie presses him and asks whether that would still be his answer if he truly intended to commit treason. Yonho responds with sarcasm and asks whether Li Wanjie wants him to pray for his success. Then Li Wanjie asks whether Yonho has no loyalty to the emperor at all. Yonho answers honestly that he has never received anything from the emperor, so why would he feel any loyalty toward him? If anything, he says, he would rather cheer for Li Wanjie, especially since Li Wanjie at least gave him gold. The two of them lock eyes in silence for a long moment. Then all of a sudden, Li Wanjie bursts into laughter. His laughter fills the room as he admits that while he expected Yonho to be clever, he turned out to be far better than anticipated. Once the laughter settles, Li Wanjie becomes serious again and swears on his own head. He declares that they are not plotting treason. Instead, they have only been gathering forces in preparation against Nok Gi. Li Wanjie then explains what the real issue was. Nok Gi had already noticed their movements. The reason Nok Gi sent Nok Mokpung was not to target him directly, but to force him into a situation where he would have no choice but to kill Nok Mokpung himself. If that had happened, Nok Gi would have been able to expose the fact that Li Wanjie had been hiding his martial arts and secretly gathering allies. He admits that it was only because of Yonho's unexpected intervention that Nok Gi's plan fell apart. He apologizes if his actions seemed unpleasant and explains that he never meant to manipulate Yonho like a piece on a Go board. He says that both he and Mun Yuwen were simply desperate in that moment. Yonho once again says it is fine. He already knew Yonho's martial arts were impressive, but he never imagined he would be sharp enough to notice that Li Wanjie himself knew martial arts. Yonho gives only a short reply and says it is fine. After confessing all of that, Li Wanjie bows deeply toward Yonho. Li Wanjie repeats himself and asks Yonho to believe his words. Then Li Wanjie changes the subject and asks whether Yonho would be willing to take on the role of secret royal inspector. Yonho immediately makes himself clear and says that he would never go out of his way to seek work. Li Wanjie tells him it does not matter because even if Yonho tries to avoid it, the world will not leave him alone. Yonho pouts and asks whether that is supposed to be an insult. At that, Yonho rises and says he is leaving. Yonho leaves him with one final remark, saying that if he is being honest, he hopes they never see each other again. Li Wanjie smiles and says he has a feeling they will. At that, Yonho rises and says he is leaving. Once Yonho is gone, Mun Yuwen appears beside Li Wanjie and asks what he thinks. With a grin, Li Wanjie admits that Yonho exceeded his expectations. Mun Yuwen says the risk is worth it. Li Wanjie continues and says that martial skill is not the only issue. Yonho is intelligent too. Later that night, Yonho is lying on the roof, basking under the moonlight. Then a voice rises from below and asks whether he is planning to leave. Yonho sits up, looks down, and sees Man-Yuwen. He tells him that after being allowed to stay there and being fed, there is no way he would leave without saying a proper goodbye. Man-Yuwen points out that Yonho was already planning to leave soon anyway. Yonho admits that is true, but he also says that he learned a lot while staying there. Man-Yuwen asks what he learned. Yonho says the two biggest things he learned are that even scholars who read endlessly often fail to live according to the texts they study. Man-Yuwen asks what he means by frightening. Yonho explains that he never expected the strongest person he would meet in the Central Plains to be someone in Rulin. Yonho smiles and continues speaking about that person. Man-Yuwen realizes who Yonho is talking about. Man-Yuwen confirms his suspicion, and Yonho admits it was true from the beginning. Then Man-Yuwen asks him for a favor and promises to keep it secret. Yonho agrees and tells him to go ahead with the favor. Yonho begins explaining what truly made Rulin frightening, the corruption he witnessed. Man-Yuwen responds philosophically, saying that everyone has different ideals. Man-Yuwen continues, explaining that once conflicts of ideals become tangled, they are extremely difficult to resolve and may not be solvable at all. Man-Yuwen concludes that such tangled ideals create hypocritical and corrupt people who justify terrible actions. Yonho adds that the palace is actually even worse than Rulin. Yonho admits that he feels lost and unsure how to interpret everything he has seen. Yonho says that simply recognizing this confusion might already be enough. Man-Yuwen responds, offering his own perspective, suggesting that people who don't think deeply may find it easier to live. Yonho pauses and listens carefully, absorbing Man-Yuwen's words. Man-Yuwen giving his final advice, while Yonho reflects on it internally. Yonho quietly accepts the idea and reaches a sense of inner clarity. Yonho begins to act on his realization, focusing inward and centering himself. Yonho successfully begins to untangle the knot, transforming his understanding into power. Yonho fully enters enlightenment, harmonizing himself with the world. Man-Yuwen watches Yonho and realizes he has truly understood. Man-Yuwen quietly leaves, knowing his role is finished. Yonho opens his eyes, now completely changed. Man-Yuwen reflects quietly as Yonho continues on his own path. Man-Yuwen begins to speak again, now with a final, deeper insight. Yonho responds casually, breaking the heavy mood. Man-Yuwen laughs and accepts Yonho's answer. Man-Yuwen turns and leaves after finishing his advice. Man-Yuwen completely departs, leaving Yonho alone on the rooftop. Yonho reflects quietly after Man-Yuwen leaves. After everything, Yonho casually lies down on the rooftop. He places a hand on his chest and thinks that he definitely felt something. That makes him wonder whether the orb his master gave him might have done something. Then he looks up at the full moon and imagines his master's face looking down at him, asking whether he understands now. Yonho turns onto his side and quietly mutters to himself that he does not. A few weeks later, Man-Yuwen enters Yonho's room and finds the young man lying lazily on his bed once again. He asks whether Yonho did not say that he would be leaving soon. Yonho immediately sits up and answers that since it is already late today, he will leave tomorrow. This time, he assures him it really will be tomorrow. Man-Yuwen calmly replies that it has already been half a month since he first heard that exact same answer. Yonho simply points out that sometimes things get delayed. Man-Yuwen admits that may be true but says it is still a problem. Just then, a voice rings out from outside with perfect formality, thanking them for calling on the Swift Dragon Escort Agency, a place of tradition and history. Man-Yuwen turns toward the sound in curiosity. The voice grows closer, asking what cargo needs to be transported. Then the door opens and Man-Yunji steps inside. She points coldly at Yonho and declares that he is the one. Yonho blinks, points at himself, and asks if she really means him. A heavy silence fills the room until one of the escort warriors glances at Man-Yunji and awkwardly remarks that the one she pointed at appears to be a person. Man-Yunji plants her hands firmly on her waist and says that it only looks that way. As far as she is concerned, he is no different from baggage. Another escort warrior gestures toward Yonho and explains that while they do escort people, those cases require a separate carrier. If this is supposed to be a cargo escort, then bringing along a person would be difficult. She tells them to place him on top of the baggage, feed him 3 meals a day, and assures them that he will not cause any trouble. Then she adds that she will pay his fare as if he were a passenger. No, she corrects herself, she will pay double. She demands that they take him with them. The escort warrior tries to explain that no matter how much she offers, there are still rules they must follow. But before he can finish, Man-Yunji sharply cuts him off and shouts that she will pay triple. The warrior still tries to insist on the rules, but Yunji raises her voice even louder and screams that she will pay quadruple. And just like that, the deal is struck. Another escort warrior leans toward Yonho and tells him that they will accept him after all, asking him to come along. Still sitting on his bed, Yonho shouts at Man-Yunji and demands to know whether she is seriously saying they are going to load him up like baggage and ship him away. Man-Yunji pouts, looks off to the side, and comments that at least he is quick-witted. Watching the whole exchange, Man-Yuwen asks his daughter what in the world is going on. Mun Yoonji bluntly replies that it simply seems best to get rid of this freeloader as quickly as possible. Yonho shouts even louder, saying this is unbelievable. He says he heard mortals had declined, but never imagined it had become this bad. He reminds them that he is the benefactor who saved them, yet now they are selling him off like cargo. Mun Yuan turns to him and admits that he is right. Still, he reasons that since they did receive grace from him, the least they can do now is allow him to act freely for a little longer as a gesture of gratitude. In response, Yonho turns away, lies back down, and faces the other direction. Mun Yoonji immediately adds that if they leave things like this, he will probably still be there next year. In her eyes, what she is doing is helping him. The moment he hears that, Yonho shoots back up and demands to know how she can possibly call this helping. Yoonji points straight at him and reminds him that he once said he would go to the Hubei Sacred Beast Pavilion. Yonho freezes in surprise and asks what she means. She explains that since the escort route goes to Hubei, he can just travel there with them. Walking all that way by himself would be exhausting and troublesome. Yonho admits that her reasoning is true, though he still hesitates. Wearing a faint grin, Yoonji tells him that he can ride in a horse-drawn wagon. The escort agency gets paid, she and her father finally get rid of him, and everyone wins. Hearing that, Yonho grows serious and admits that Mun Yoonji's argument is very persuasive. After a brief silence, he finally stands up. Mun Yoonji immediately tells him to stop talking and follow the escort warriors. As he goes with them, Yonho mutters that his mother always told him never to follow strangers. Mun Yoonji reassures him that it is fine, saying these men are trustworthy, their status is legitimate, and there's nothing to worry about. Yonho still looks reluctant, but he follows anyway. A short while later, Yonho is sitting on top of the wagon, leaning against the goods. He says aloud that he really did not expect to leave so suddenly, but it looks like he is going after all. Standing in front of him, Mun Yoonji and her father bid him farewell. Mun Yuan tells him to take care of himself. Yonho looks at Mun Yoonji, notices the wide grin on her face, and remarks that she seems very pleased. She answers with amusement and asks whether it is that obvious. Yonho then tells the escort warrior to get moving. As the wagon begins to roll, he lies back down on the baggage, but turns sideways and looks one last time at Mun Yoonji and Mun Yuan. Mun Yoonji waves and shouts for him to stay healthy. Gok Biheng knocks on the wooden crate beneath him and shouts again. At last, Yonho opens his eyes, looks down at him, and asks what he wants. Mun Yoonji waves and shouts for him to stay healthy. Annoyed, Yonho yells back and asks how she can drive him out and then tell him to stay well. Frustrated, he waves the thought away, says he does not care anymore, and lies back down. Once he is gone, Mun Yuan tells his daughter to come inside. She agrees, but looks back one last time at Yonho disappearing into the distance. A warm smile spreads across her face as the wind rushes past her. After some time, the escort warriors make a stop. A stern-looking man approaches with clear displeasure on his face and introduces himself as Gok Biheng, the head of the Swift Dragon Escort Agency. He looks at Yonho, who is still asleep on top of the wagon, and asks the others whether that really is the item. One of the warriors confirms that it is. Gok Biheng frowns and asks whether they are trying to play games with him. Does anyone there understand how much more preparation is needed when a person joins an escort? One of the warriors explains that they wanted to refuse, but since the request came from the prestigious Great Hanam Institute, they could not turn it down. Gok Biheng then asks how long Yonho has been like that. The warrior answers that it has been this way ever since he left the institute. Gok Biheng crosses his arms, studies the still sleeping Yonho, and thinks to himself that the young man never seems to tire, which is almost impressive in its own way. Another warrior adds that the institute specifically instructed them to simply feed him 3 meals a day like cattle or chickens, and that if they do, he will behave until they arrive and cause no trouble. Gok Biheng says he cannot understand any of this at all. He calls out to Yonho, but the young man does not move, irritated. Gok Biheng knocks on the wooden crate beneath him and shouts again. At last, Yonho opens his eyes, looks down at him, and asks what he wants. Clearing his throat, Gok Biheng introduces himself as the head of the escort agency. Yonho gives a short response, and Gok Biheng explains that an escort is not meant to serve people but to transport goods. If Yonho still insists on coming along, things may become rather inconvenient. He asks whether he is still willing. Yonho answers that there is no need to worry because he is registered not as a person but as cargo. Gok Biheng warns him that it will be uncomfortable, but Yonho says he can endure it. If all he has to do is lie still until they arrive, then it is worth it. Amused, Gok Biheng comments that he is a surprisingly positive fellow, then he turns away and orders the group to depart. Yonho lazily waves and says he will be in their care. 5 days pass after leaving the Great Hanam Institute. One morning, Yonho wakes up, stretches, and lets out a yawn. He mutters to himself that the situation is unbearable. If he stays awake, he feels like he's being tortured, and if he sleeps, that fraudulent old master of his appears in his dreams to harass him. He curses the dream mythic arts and wonders how long this torment is supposed to continue. What if it lasts his entire life? Frustrated, he waves the thought away, says he does not care anymore, and lies back down. Gok Biheng remains tense. In his mind, he thinks that if no one reveals themselves, then this is not good. If they are stalling like this, then either they are clueless beginner bandits or a truly dangerous figure is targeting the wagon. If it is the former, they are lucky. He places his hand on his sword and draws it halfway. His thoughts sharpen. He cannot sense any presence within the thicket, which means these are definitely not some ignorant novices. He raises his voice again and warns that if the person does not come out, he will consider it an attack against the escort agency. Everyone falls silent, their attention fixed on the bushes. After a tense moment, the leaves rustle and a broad man steps out. The escort warriors immediately draw their swords, but the man calmly sets his weapon on the ground, bows, and introduces himself as Ping Dojuk of the Hubei Ping clan. The moment Gok Biheng hears the name, he bows in return and asks why a descendant of the Ping clan is traveling in such a place. Ping Dojuk picks up his sword again, clutches his stomach, and explains that he is being pursued by enemies. He admits that he cannot shake them off by himself and begs for their help. Then he warns that this matter could turn into a crisis for the entire martial world. Throughout all of this, Yonho stays sprawled on the wagon, looking at Ping Dojuk in silence. Much later in the future, the divine mad dog recounts this memory to the historian. He says that this was the meeting with Ping Dojuk, the very man who once turned the historian away at the gates. And back then, even Ping Dojuk himself had no idea that this single encounter would one day drag him into the river of misfortune. Gok Biheng thinks to himself that people from the Hubei Ping clan are the sort who use their muscles before their heads. Yet their sense of chivalry is second to none. Seeing Ping Dojuk standing there with his sword, he concludes that if someone from a place like that is speaking this seriously, then the matter must truly be grave. So Gok Biheng asks what exactly they can do. Ping Dojuk replies that people are pursuing him, and if they can just help him leave the mountain, he will make sure to repay them properly afterward. Gok Biheng immediately says they will help, then tells him to quickly hide inside a barrel first. Ping Dojuk agrees and climbs inside. As he hides, a sly smile briefly crosses his face. Meanwhile, Yonho had been sleeping on the cart, only to be disturbed by all of this. Gok Biheng lifts the lid of a barrel and tells Ping Dojuk that he can get inside. Ping Dojuk thanks him and slips in. Gok Biheng quickly places the lid back on and warns him that he must not make a sound under any circumstances. Inwardly, Gok Biheng thinks that Ping Dojuk is a truly meddlesome man, though he cannot say he dislikes that about him. From inside the barrel, Ping Dojuk apologizes, saying that if he ends up bringing danger to them, he is sorry. Still, if they get through this safely, he promises that everyone there will be properly repaid. At that, Yonho cuts in and asks what good repayment is if a person ends up dead. Ping Dojuk is caught off guard. Then he snaps that Yonho has no conscience at all. All these people are being put at risk, and the very least someone with even a shred of conscience could do is look the other way. Yonho, however, says that is enough for him because he's going back to sleep now. Then he settles back down in the cart. Ping Dojuk can only answer that he understands. As the cart continues moving, Gok Biheng thinks to himself that they are almost at the bottom of the mountain now. Fortunately, no one seems to have noticed Ping Dojuk yet. For a moment, he dares to hope they may have slipped by unnoticed. Then suddenly, a man in green robes appears in front of the cart and shouts for them to stop. The cart jerks to a halt, and in an instant, the members of the escort agency find themselves surrounded by green forest bandits. Their squad leader steps forward and presses his sword to Gok Biheng's throat. Startled, Gok Biheng stammers in confusion, then realizes who they are. The Green Forest. He quickly bows and introduces himself as Gok Biheng of the Swift Dragon Escort Agency, saying that he is honored to meet members of the Green Forest. The squad leader asks whether they have seen a young man dressed in red. Gok Biheng replies that they have not seen anyone like that. The squad leader narrows his eyes and presses further, asking if that is really true. If they lie, misfortune will follow. Gok Biheng responds that he does not understand why they would lie. The Swift Dragon Escort Agency has maintained good relations with the Green Forest for years, so why would they hide someone they do not even know and create needless hostility? Then the squad leader's eyes shift toward Yonho, who is still sleeping on the cart. He asks who that person is. Gok Biheng hesitates for a brief moment before saying that Yonho is sick in both mind and body, and they are simply taking him to a physician, so there is no need to pay him any attention. The squad leader asks what exactly he means by that. Is Gok Biheng saying there is no reason for them to make an enemy of the Green Forest? Gok Biheng answers that of course there is not. Why would they do anything so reckless? But the squad leader says that is exactly the problem. Trouble has already appeared because of the man on top of the cart. Then he reminds Gok Biheng that he clearly asked whether they had seen someone in red. At that moment, Yonho wakes up, removes his outer robe, and reveals the red accents of the clothing beneath it. Gok Biheng awkwardly tries to say that he is not actually wearing red. The squad leader asks whether he's trying to play some kind of prank. As a blade presses harder against Gok Biheng's throat, sweat runs down his face. Inwardly, he panics, wondering whether they already know Ping Dojuk is hiding there. Then the squad leader speaks coldly, saying that perhaps this can be settled in a simple way. They will start by killing one of them. If no one has seen the man in red, then they will kill the next. By killing them one by one, they will soon find out whether anyone there is truly innocent. He says that before the third person dies, he is certain someone will suddenly remember seeing him. Gok Biheng is horrified and demands to know what kind of nonsense that is. The squad leader then calmly asks who should go first. The squad leader replies that if that is the case, then death will answer in his place. As he swings his sword, the escort member cries out in terror. But just before the blade can land, Gok Bihang grabs the squad leader's arm and stops him, cursing as he finally gives in and says that yes, the man is there. Both the Green Forest bandits and the members of the escort agency look on in shock. Then Yonho's voice is heard. He says that yes, he is here. Yonho rises from his place and sits on top of the cart, looking down at the bandits. He says that the one they are looking for, Ping Dojuk, is indeed there. Then he calls out toward the barrel and tells him that he has been caught, so he might as well come out. And with that, Yonho kicks open the barrel Ping Dojuk is hiding in. Gok Bihang cries out, demanding to know what he is doing. Yonho tells him enough is enough. There is nothing more foolish than risking your life for someone else like this. Then he addresses the barrel again and asks what Ping Dojuk is doing. Does he really intend to stay hidden until everyone there is dead before stepping out? After a moment of silence, the lid opens. Ping Dojuk steps out of the barrel. The Green Forest squad leader says that if he had kept fleeing, there might have been the slightest chance of survival, but instead he foolishly crawled out on his own. Ping Dojuk replies that if he had not, then everyone there would already be dead. The squad leader mocks him, asking whether he is trying to act like some kind of chivalrous hero. Ping Dojuk shouts that he may not be a hero, but he is not some petty coward who would watch innocent people die without intervening. Then he turns to Gok Bihang and thanks him for the help, but now he says this is his problem to handle. Their target is him, so if he steps forward, then the Swift Dragon escort agency should at least be spared. Gok Bihang starts to object, but Ping Dojuk assures him that he will be fine. Then he adds that avoiding them any longer would have been difficult anyway. Gok Bihang hesitates, then says he wishes him luck and tells his men that they are leaving. But just then Yonho suddenly tells them to wait a moment. He says they cannot leave yet. Confused, Gok Bihang asks what he means. Yonho looks at him and asks why he's being so oblivious. Why would the Green Forest attack them in the first place? The Green Forest may be powerful, but surely they do not want to recklessly make an enemy of the Hubei Ping clan. If the people there survive and word spreads that a member of the Hubei Ping clan was killed by the Green Forest, then every member of that clan would take up a sword and scour the mountains. Rather than endure that, the bandits would prefer to kill everyone there and leave no witnesses behind. The Green Forest squad leader hears that and realizes Yonho is right. Gok Bihang also admits that he had not even thought of that, but it makes perfect sense. Yonho smugly asks whether he really had not considered it. That makes Gok Bihang yell at him and call him a lunatic. Ping Dojuk then says that he will fix what he started. This whole thing is his fault and he will resolve it himself. He says he will hold them off. Hearing that, Yonho thinks to himself what a ridiculous man Ping Dojuk is. He snuck into the escort mission, caused this disaster, and now he is acting as if he is going to solve everything. To Yonho, it is like pushing someone off a cliff, then handing him a rope and expecting praise for saving him. Ping Dojuk asks how much time a person who fled could realistically buy. Yonho thinks that Ping Dojuk is like a drowning ghost that drags others down with him. No, even that comparison feels wrong, because a drowning ghost would not trap so many people at once. He does not even know what to call this kind of man. Then Yonho points out that running away solves nothing anyway. The Green Forest already knows this as the Swift Dragon Escort Agency. Before word ever reaches the Hubei Ping clan, the Swift Dragon Escort Agency will already be finished. At that, Gok Bihang asks in defeat what they are supposed to do. Yonho answers simply they have to fight. Gok Bihang repeats the word in shock, fight them. Yonho explains that if they run, the remaining members of the escort mission will be left to die alone. But if they fight now, then at least they still have that drowning ghost with them, so he can be useful. Gok Bihang reluctantly admits that this is true. Ping Dojuk then turns to the Green Forest squad leader and asks one last time whether he truly has no intention of letting them go. The squad leader replies that there is no need for them to say it twice. Then he orders his men to attack, telling them that even if they die, they should hate them for it. At once, the battle begins. The Green Forest squad leader clashes swords with Ping Dojuk, sparks flying from the impact. Ping Dojuk grits his teeth and thinks to himself that the martial world is said to be vast, but if he had known it was this vast and this dangerous, he never would have gotten involved in the first place. Then his thoughts turn inward. Ever since people began praising him as a promising rising star, a kind of carelessness he never noticed had quietly started settling in his heart. It was like a poison seeping into him. And now, as he struggles, he blames himself for everything. It is all because of him. Everyone there is suffering because of him. Then the Green Forest squad leader shouts that this is the end for him and swings his sword at Ping Dojuk. As Ping Dojuk braces himself, he thinks to himself that he is sorry to everyone there. Then suddenly, a flash of blue energy shoots past him. The squad leader grunts in shock as his attack is blocked. The force of the impact sends him flying backward, and his weapon is knocked from his hands. Ping Dojuk stands there panting, while the other members of the Green Forest stare in disbelief. From atop the cart, Yonho watches the whole scene unfold. Then he says that Ping Dojuk really is a handful, and as he speaks, a blue aura begins to rise from his hands. In the middle of the fierce battle, both Ping Dojuk and one of the Green Forest men cry out, in shock as another bandit is suddenly knocked unconscious. Breathing heavily, Ping Dojuk stares at the scene with a puzzled, intense expression. Then his eyes widen as he spots blue glowing bowl lying beside the fallen enemy. That bowl knocked him out. From atop the cart, Yonho casually holds another bowl in his hand and scolds him, saying he is getting distracted again. Forced to refocus, Ping Dojuk is immediately swarmed by several green forest fighters. He struggles to parry their coordinated sword strikes, his own blade clashing against theirs in a shower of sparks. Meanwhile, Yonho remains seated lazily, juggling two bowls in his hands while looking down at the chaotic fight below. He remarks that Ping Dojuk dragged all the enemies over there and is now about to die before even doing his share of the fighting. Truly, he is a water ghost. Then with a sigh, Yonho adds that at this rate, he is really going to die. Elsewhere in the fight, Gok Behang is struggling desperately with a blade at his throat, glaring upward in fury and frustration. Ping Dojuk catches sight of Yonho from the middle of his own battle and cannot hide his mixture of disbelief and irritation. What the hell is he doing up there? But the moment he is surrounded again, he forces himself to focus. This is not the time to be curious. His eyes sharpen, and with a fierce red glow gathering around him, he thinks that the only thing he can do right now is fight down as many of them as possible. Then he unleashes a powerful technique. 5 Tigers Gate-Destroying Blade. A massive spectral tiger rises behind him as he swings his sword with tremendous force. A wave of pink energy tears through the ranks of the green forest men. But when the dust settles, Ping Dojuk finds himself surrounded once more. That is when he realizes the truth. This is not a duel. There is no point trying to block or deflect every single strike. Even so, as 3 green forest fighters leap toward him from above with their swords poised to kill, Ping Dojuk braces himself and thinks that this is it. Then, before the blow can land, the attackers are blasted away by a surge of blue energy. From atop the cart, Yonho shouts down that he is seriously going to die like this. Gok Behang, still fending off attacks, screams at him to get down there and help. Yonho casually replies that he is only an item being transported. Remember, Ping Dojuk is baffled. What in the world is he talking about? Gok Behang yells that this is not the time for that. Still confused, Ping Dojuk cannot understand why Gok Behang is even going along with this. Then Yonho explains that some mean girl told him that if anything happened, he should stay up there instead of causing even more trouble. She warned that otherwise he would only bring harm to the Hanam Institute, and that she would chase him to the ends of the earth just to harass him. At that point, Gok Behang practically begs him, saying he will take responsibility, so please just help. Yonho shrugs and says he does not know. He tends to keep the promises he makes. Gok Behang shouts back that if they all die, will Yonho not feel at least a little uncomfortable during the rest of the journey? Yonho lazily answers that he is not exactly comfortable right now either. So Gok Behang changes tactics. He says that if things go well, they will rest for 2 full days at an inn in the next town. Yonho immediately perks up and repeats 2 days. Gok Behang, growing more desperate, adds that Yonho can eat as much as he wants there. That catches Yonho's full attention. He asks if he really gets food too. Gok Behang screams yes, so please help, you donkey. Watching the exchange, Ping Dojuk can only think, what kind of conversation is this? Yonho asks for confirmation one last time. Gok Behang says yes, and with that the deal is made. At last Yonho moves. A barrage of glowing bowls flies from the cart, each one smashing into a green forest fighter with terrifying force. One after another, the attackers are knocked out until the battlefield is practically cleared. Ping Dojuk stares in open disbelief. What? The green forest leader looks on in horror and realizes the truth. Yonho is a martial master. Then Yonho lands lightly on the ground and turns to Ping Dojuk. He calls out to him. Ping Dojuk, still wary, answers, and then Yonho starts lecturing him. He says Ping Dojuk is the one who dragged those men there, so if he has even a little guilt, should he not be fighting with everything he has? He got himself into trouble, brought all those enemies to them, and yet he is not even doing his fair share of the fighting. Yonho points a finger straight at him, and Ping Dojuk actually flinches. Yonho says that maybe he could understand it if Ping Dojuk were at least trying his best, but instead he got distracted and nearly got himself killed. What exactly is wrong with him? If he has a head on his shoulders, then he should think. Yonho tells him to look at his own weapon. He uses a heavy blade. It is strong and powerful, but slow. So what is he trying to do? Fight multiple opponents with a slow sword? Is he aiming for some kind of suicide mission? Ping Dojuk tries to speak, but Yonho cuts him off and tells him to wait his turn, or better yet, he should focus on taking down one opponent at a time. So Ping Dojuk ends up standing there at attention and answering like a scolded student, "Yes, sir." Yonho continues, saying that the technique from earlier was no better. Why waste such a move on empty air? Then he says, "Give me that." Before Ping Dojuk can react, Yonho snatches the sword right out of his hand. Ping Dojuk is completely stunned. He cannot believe his blade was taken before he could even respond. Then with a swift and powerful motion, Yonho swings the sword and releases a wave of blue energy that rips across the ground and blasts the remaining green forest fighters away. That is how the 5 Tigers Gate-Destroying Blade is supposed to look. Ping Dojuk is left speechless. How does Yonho know that technique? Did he really copy it just from watching it once? But Yonho is not finished. He turns to Ping Dojuk and continues the lecture. If he is going to fight multiple opponents, then he needs to swing faster. Just because there is less Kai in the blade does not mean the enemy will survive once it lands. There are times when speed matters more than raw force, just as there are times when strength should be favored over speed. As Yonho demonstrates the movement with Ping Dojuk's sword, he asks why something that simple is so hard to understand. Then he points a finger right in Ping Dojuk's face and scolds him again. Completely flustered, Ping Dojuk apologizes, even though he is not entirely sure why he is apologizing in the first place. Yonho tells him that in that case he should do better. Then he hands the sword back. At that point, the remaining green forest men are trembling in fear. Ping Dojuk takes a deep breath and tells himself that even if he has to reduce the amount of Kai in the blade, he should now focus on speed and precision instead. He turns to face the remaining enemies, only to find that they have already run away. As they flee into the forest, one of them shouts that they will come for him again later. And just like that, Ping Dojuk is left standing there alone, bewildered. Then, drenched in sweat and exhausted, he can only say that this is unbelievably frustrating. After the fight, Gok Bihang thanks Yonho for everything. Yonho replies that there is no need to thank him. They are paying him after all. Still, he admits it was an easy job thanks to Gok Bihang's offer. Gok Bihang then thanks him again sincerely, saying they will never forget that Yonho saved their lives. Yonho immediately asks if it is just going to be verbal gratitude. Gok Bihang goes silent. Then Yonho says he is joking and that he will collect whatever he wants from that Ping clan bastard instead, while gesturing toward Ping Dojuk. After that, Gok Bihang asks why Yonho was so harsh on him. There was no need to treat him as if he really were some kind of drowning ghost. Yonho immediately tells him to shut up. Then Yonho explains himself. If he had not stepped in, Gok Bihang would have died and so would the others, all because of that one man. Gok Bihang admits that is true but says Ping Dojuk at least seemed to have his reasons. It looked like he was trying to do something good. At that, Yonho asks what exactly that means, something good. Then he says that even if it is for some noble cause, does that justify getting innocent people killed? His expression grows serious as he repeats what his master taught him. There's nothing more foolish than risking your life for something unrelated to you. A person has to prioritize himself first. He knows people talk about justice and righteousness, but if achieving that requires sacrificing others, then he wants no part in that kind of greater good. He needs to be happy before anyone else can be happy, which means his first priority has to be himself. Then he asks Gok Bihang if he really has not suffered enough already to stop caring about that man. Gok Bihang falls silent. Even so, both the goods and the martial artists of the Swift Dragon Escort Agency survive the ordeal, and the Green Forest matter, as it turns out, is supposed to be handled by the Venerate Heaven Orthodox Murim Alliance. Hearing that, Yonho says that is good to know. Gok Bihang then tells him that he hopes they will meet again someday. Yonho bluntly says probably not. Gok Bihang complains that he should not say something so ominous. Then Yonho says goodbye, turns around and walks away. Gok Bihang watches him go and lets out a sigh. It really would be nice if that young man were at least a little more disciplined. Meanwhile, Yonho arrives before a large and impressive building. At last, he says to himself he has arrived. Yonho has reached Nature's Hand Manor. At the same time, inside the manor, a Y clan warrior is reporting to Y Jianghan, the patriarch. He says that they still did not find him this time either. Y Jianghan, wearing a worried expression, says that Yonho must still be alive somewhere. Where are you, Yonho? Then suddenly Zhou Bang, the administrator, bursts into the room and announces that there is a message. Y Jianghan asks what it is. Zhou Bang excitedly says that young Master Yonho has sent a letter, and at that Y Jianghan's eyes widen in pure shock and relief. Yonho. In a dimly lit and ornate room, Nok Gi lies in bed while speaking to his son, Nok Mokpung. Even a simple plan failed. Were you really that afraid to die? Nok Mokpung bows before him and answers no. If he had died at Li Wanjia's hands, then at least his death would have had meaning. But instead, he fought someone else, so even if he had died there, it would not have done anything to harm Li Wanjia. Nok Gi coldly asks whether that somehow paints a meaningful picture for him. Does it change the fact that Nok Mokpung fled with his tail between his legs? From the very beginning, the plan was a gamble. Their duty was to seize the opportunity, not run away from it. Then Nok Gi sighs and tells him that is enough for now. He tells him to go. Nok Mokpung answers yes sir and takes his leave. After his son departs, Nok Gi lies back in bed, his thoughts turning to everything that has happened. In the end, he thinks that fool will still encounter it. Then with disgust in his voice, he mutters that Nok Mokpung is nothing more than a useless and ambitious pig. That eunuch does not even know his place. At that point, a masked man speaks up and says that Nok Mokpung is still useful for now, so it would be better to keep him alive a little longer. Nok Gi acknowledges the man's arrival and says that merely existing is enough for Nok Mokpung to act as a restraint on the royals. After all, he could have done that much himself. Then he asks how long he is supposed to keep playing along with that eunuch. The masked man replies that there is something else Nok Gi must do first. A summons has come from the main estate and they want him there as soon as possible. Hearing that, Nok Mokpung inwardly rejoices. At last, he thinks he will be free from that sickening appearance. Nok Gi is destined to be discarded the moment he is no longer useful, so they only need to leave him alone until then. After that, everything Nok Gi possesses will become his. Then Nok Mokpung asks his subordinate whether the imperial family is truly in no hurry. He wants to know what his brothers have been doing lately. The subordinate says he is not completely sure, but he heard that they have shifted their attention away from the Confucian faction and recently started meddling with the medical clan instead. The medical clan, that makes Nok Mokpung pause in thought. Meanwhile, Yonho arrives before a large building with a sign that reads Nature's Hand Manor. He enters only for the receptionist to tell him that he has come to the wrong place. Confused, Yonho asks what that means. The receptionist looks over the letter Yonho presented and explains that it is a recommendation letter to the Sacred Hand Manor. This place is Nature's Hand Manor instead. That makes Yonho think back to when Mun Yuan handed him the letter. Back then, Mun Yuan told him that since he wanted to visit the medical clan, the Sacred Hand Manor in Hubei was famous across the land for its medical skill. By chance, he happened to know the former manor master, so he would write Yonho a letter of recommendation. If Yonho showed them that letter, they would surely treat him well. Back in the present, Yonho asks if that means this is not the Sacred Hand Manor after all. The receptionist replies with a sly smile that this is a Nature's Hand Manor too, but not the one he is looking for. If he wants the actual place, he should cross the street and head down the alley to the other Sacred Hand Manor. Though the receptionist adds he doubts Yonho will find anything there worth his expectations. Realizing his mistake, Yonho leaves. As he walks through the dark street, he thinks that this was not the place after all. Then, as he passes one of the buildings, he hears desperate pleas from outside. Is anyone in? A woman cries and begs a physician to please save her wife. Another man desperately promises that he will repay the money somehow if they just save his father. But the man from inside the building turns them away without the slightest warmth. He tells them that if they have no money, then there will be no treatment. Watching the scene, Yonho is left disillusioned. He thinks that physicians are supposed to save lives, yet even they turn their backs on the dying. In the end, it all really does come down to money. Still, he continues on, crosses the street, and heads into the alley. Following the directions, he finally arrives at a rundown building with a sign that reads Sacred Hand Manor. So this is it. Looking at its shabby condition, Yonho cannot help but wonder whether this is really the 500-year-old medical clan he was sent to. He steps inside the deserted courtyard and calls out, asking if anyone is there. Then a young boy peeks out from behind a pillar and asks what brings him there. Yonho says that he has business there and asks whether the manor master is in. The boy answers yes and tells him to go ahead and speak. Yonho, annoyed, repeats that he said he wants to see the manor master, so what exactly does the boy mean by speak? The boy calmly explains that his father passed away the year before, and that now he himself is the manor master of the Sacred Hand Manor. Then he introduces himself as Jin Soa, the head of the Sacred Hand Manor. Yonho is stunned. The manor master is this child. Immediately, Yonho starts complaining inwardly. Of course this would happen to him. Nothing good ever seems to come his way. At this point, he would be lucky just not to get struck by lightning in the street. Then he curses that damned master of his for sending him on such an errand and says he wants to go home. Just then a young woman approaches and asks what is going on. Jin Soa calls her sister and says a guest has arrived. He says the man came to see father. The young woman, Jin Yuran, asks in a cool and composed tone what business the guest had with him. The moment Yonho looks at her, he is visibly taken aback by her beauty. Flustered, he fumbles for the letter and hands it over. Jin Yuran reads it, then says that from what it says, Yonho came to learn from the medical clan. Is that right? Yonho awkwardly answers that it is something like that. Jin Yuran then explains that, as he can clearly see, the Sacred Hand Manor is no longer in any condition to present itself as a proper medical clan. Even so, turning away someone introduced by Uncle Mun Yuan would only bring shame to their late father. So although the place may be lacking, she asks Yonho to stay. But Yonho quickly insists that it is really not necessary. There are other medical clans out there, so if it is too much trouble for them, he can simply leave and go somewhere else. Jin Yuran firmly says that is not acceptable. If they send away a guest who came looking for their father, the world will point fingers at them. Yonho tries to argue that if the situation does not allow it, then surely that should be understandable. But Jin Yuran cuts him off and says never. Later, Yonho sits alone in a room thinking over everything. Now that he reflects on it, he says to himself that he should have been suspicious the moment he heard Mun Yuan was close with that stone-headed scholar. But whatever, it is still a physician's household, so he guesses staying there is fine. Then he flops down onto the floor. A voice calls out from the doorway asking if he is there. Jin Yuran enters carrying a lavish spread of food. She says she thought he might be hungry, so she prepared his meal first. It is not much. But she asks him to eat plenty. Not much. Yonho is stunned. That amount could last him 3 whole days. Then he awkwardly invites her to join him. But Jin Yuran replies that she already ate, so he should not worry and simply enjoy his meal. Then she bows and leaves the room. Left alone, Yonho thinks that maybe they are not quite as poor as he first thought. Outside, Jin Soa quietly whispers to his sister asking where she got all that food. Jin Yuran tells him to keep his voice down because the guest is eating, but Jin Soa insists that they are far enough away that he will not hear them. Then he points out that they are out of rice, so where exactly did she get the money for all that food? Jin Yuran tells him their man should not meddle in household matters and should focus on studying medicine instead. But Jin Soa cannot stop himself. He asks about her necklace. Jin Yuran casually says she only took it off for a little while. That makes Jin Soa even more suspicious. She never takes that necklace off, not even for a moment. It was their mother's keepsake, so did she sell it? The moment Yonho overhears that, his expression changes. A keepsake. Jin Yuran then explains that she did not sell it. She only pawned it at the Milky Way Manor to borrow some money, and she will get it back once things improve. Jin Soa argues that even if Yonho is a guest, pawning their mother's keepsake just to prepare him a single meal is too much. Jin Yuran rebukes him and says what is he talking about? Yonho came there looking for their father. How could they ever treat someone like that carelessly? Jin Soa says that is not what he meant, but by that point Yonho has already heard everything. Overcome with guilt, he thinks that there is no way he can eat that meal now. Then he pushes the food away. Jin Yuran returns and asks whether the meal is not to his liking. She says she can bring out something else, so he only needs to wait a little longer. Yonho hurriedly tells her that it is not because he dislikes the food. Then inwardly he wonders whether there is any way to turn that meal back into money, and the next moment he bolts out of the building. Yonho rushes straight to the Milky Way Manor. There he tells the proprietor Hee-jun that he is looking for an item, specifically a necklace that was pawned by a woman from the Sacred Hand Manor. Hee-jun apologizes and says that the item has already been sold. Yonho is shocked. Already sold? He asks when it was sold and to whom. Hee-jun says the buyer did not leave a name, but he was some monk from a clan, and he bought it only a short while ago. That makes Yonho think he can still catch up. But Hee-jun says he probably cannot. From what he heard, that monk is already heading toward Hua Mountain. The moment Yonho hears Hua Mountain, his face falls. Then he asks whether the silver he has with him will be enough, placing a pouch on the counter. He says there are more than 2 silver nyang in it, while the young lady only borrowed 1. Hee-jun explains that when reclaiming a pawned item, they charge 3 times the amount borrowed, and if it is not reclaimed within 3 months, then the debt triples again. That makes Yonho ask in disbelief whether that is not outright usury. Hee-jun smoothly denies it and says it is simply the rule of the exchange. If Yonho dislikes it, then the item could always have been sold instead. So Yonho asks whether that means he really cannot reclaim it with the money he has now. Regretfully, Hee-jun says that is correct. Yonho's face falls further. He realizes that the Sacred Hand Manor is already barely surviving, so there is no way they would ever be able to get that necklace back, which means Jin Yuran must have known that from the start. Then Yonho asks whether the shop also accepts other items as collateral. He pulls out a golden object and presents it. Hee-jun says of course. Leave the item there and repayment will be 3 times the borrowed amount. The deadline is 3 months. Yonho then tells him to loan him the rest against that object. It is made of gold, so it should be worth plenty. Hee-jun agrees that it is definitely solid gold. For something like that, he says he can loan 1 gold nyang, though repayment would require 3, but then his eyes suddenly widen. He notices the seal engraved on the object. The Office of the Inspectorate. At that, Yonho calmly asks if that means 3 gold nyang then. And with a smug look on his face, Yonho waits. Meanwhile, the proprietor's face turns pale. He can only think one thing. He is doomed. Elsewhere, a man bows deeply before an old figure and reports that there is a problem. They failed to seize control of the palace. The old man, still facing away, speaks in a calm voice and asks whether Nok-gi did not follow instructions. The man behind him explains that the royal inspector stood so firmly in opposition that Nok-gi's influence diminished greatly. Because of that, he says they may have to abandon the entire plan. The old man gives only a quiet reply. He says he understands. The man hesitates for a moment before adding that there is also a smaller issue involving the Green Forest. During their attempt to seize it, the Hubei Ping clan became involved. The old man turns his head slightly and asks whether the Ping clan realized their true intentions. The subordinate bows and answers respectfully that it does not seem so. From what he can tell, it was not the Ping clan themselves who truly interfered, but the Orthodox Murim alliance instead. He adds that they seem to have mistaken the situation for nothing more than an ordinary bandit raid rather than a large-scale scheme. The old man responds with composure, saying that all kinds of problems are bound to arise during the execution of a grand plan. The real key lies in how those problems are resolved. The man acknowledges his words and reports that their dealings with the physicians are proceeding smoothly, along with all of their other arrangements. At that, the old man states that it is almost time to tie the knot. They have endured countless hardships since his retirement. But now they possess enough power that they no longer need to worry about his absence. Soon, they will return to the world and show everyone just how terrifying their sword can be. Back at the Milky Way Manor, Hee-jun is sitting comfortably when he sees Yonho's sword. The moment his eyes recognize it, he shoots up from his seat, drops to his knees beside Yonho, and repeatedly bows his head to the floor. Trembling, he stammers out an apology, saying that he failed to recognize him. Yonho only looks at him in silence while Hee-jun's thoughts spiral into panic. What should he fix first? The fact that he completely cheated that woman out of her necklace, or the fact that he demanded an absurd interest rate. His whole body shakes as he desperately tries to explain himself. He says that the interest rate may sound high, but many people pawn their belongings and never come back. Because of that, he claims he had no choice, and even with compound interest, their actual profit is only 4.5%. Yonho slowly repeats the number, 4.5%, then he asks what the annual interest rate is. Hee-jun stutters and answers that it is not that much, at most 60%. Yonho leans forward slightly, wearing a look of utter disbelief, and asks how 60% could possibly be called reasonable. He repeats the number again and says he has never heard such nonsense in his life. Hee-jun trembles even harder as sweat begins pouring down his forehead. He scrambles to justify himself, saying that the white jade necklace is worth at least 10 silver nyang, so the interest is fair. Yonho immediately cuts him off. Just a moment ago, he claimed that jade was worth only 1 silver nyang, but now all of a sudden it is worth 10. Hee-jun flinches, his face crumpling as he struggles to respond. That is when Yonho's patience finally runs out. He shouts for the doors to be locked and declares that he is going to see this matter through to the bitter end. Hee-jun cries out in panic, calling him sir, but Yonho glares at him and snaps that the word sir means nothing. That night, back at the Sacred Hand Manor, Jin Yuran is sitting in her room writing in a small book when she hears a knock at the door. Curious and cautious, she rises and steps outside, wondering who could possibly be visiting at such a late hour. Then her eyes catch something on the ground. As she walks closer, she freezes. It is the necklace she pawned. She slowly kneels, picks it up with great care, and holds it tightly in her hand. Her voice trembles as she whispers one word. Mother, looking around, she wonders who could have returned it to her. High above on the roof, Yonho lies silently with his eyes open, thinking to himself that he hopes it will be enough to cover the cost of the food. Meanwhile, at the Venerate Heaven Orthodox Murim Alliance, inside the General Strategist's pavilion, Ping Dojuk sits nervously in front of a table. His heart pounds as he thinks to himself that he must have done something wrong. Then he recalls that he really has done many wrong things. And that thought does absolutely nothing to calm him down. Suddenly, footsteps approach. A man enters the room and Ping Dojuk immediately straightens his posture and bows. Man gestures for him to sit and calmly tells him to take a seat. Ping Dojuk hurriedly obeys, answering yes. The man before him is Zhou Haiyan, the general strategist of the Orthodox Murim Alliance, a man known throughout the martial world as the Divine Strategist. As they sit across from each other, Ping Dojuk's thoughts continue racing. Why would someone of such high standing summon him personally? Then Zhou Haiyan speaks first. He says that he heard everything about what happened in the Green Forest, and asks whether Ping Dojuk encountered the 10 swords of the Green Forest. The instant he hears that title, Ping Dojuk stiffens in shock and stammers in disbelief. Zhou Haiyan calmly nods and confirms that those men truly were his pursuers. He remarks that Ping Dojuk was fortunate to survive at all. Hearing that, Ping Dojuk inwardly realizes that everything makes sense now. Zhou Haiyan continues, saying that he will personally handle the matter involving the Swift Dragon Escort Agency. More importantly, because of this incident, they may be able to uncover something much larger. But the real problem, he says, is the young man who helped Ping Dojuk that day. Inwardly, Zhou Haiyan reflects on the report he received. The Green Forest force that appeared there was one of their elite groups. Even though Ping Dojuk is skilled, defeating even one of them would not have been easy. And yet, someone crushed 10 of them single-handedly without any real struggle. So Zhou Haiyan asks aloud whether Ping Dojuk learned that man's name. Ping Dojuk immediately answers that his name is Yonho. Zhou Haiyan quietly repeats the name to himself and remembers having seen it before in a message from the beggar sect. He wonders whether the second son of the Guangdong Y clan has truly returned. 5 years have passed, and for someone to make that much progress in martial skill during that time is astonishing. The eldest son, Y Sanho, was already exceptionally talented, and now even the second son is making waves. As Zhou Haiyan thinks about it, he begins to suspect that the Guangdong Y clan may be standing at the center of the chaos that is just beginning to stir. Then he rises and asks where the young man was headed. Ping Dojuk answers that he was going to the Sacred Hand Manor. Zhou Haiyan frowns slightly. If someone has returned after 5 long years, then he should be heading home, not toward Hubei. He places a hand on Ping Dojuk's shoulder and says that he needs more information on Yonho. Since Ping Dojuk is the only one who knows what he looks like, he asks for his cooperation. Then leaning forward, Zhou Haiyan asks whether he can help. Ping Dojuk immediately drops to his knees, bows deeply, and loudly declares that he will, and in his heart he promises himself that he will meet Yonho again. The next day at the Sacred Hand Manor, Yonho is sleeping quietly on top of the roof. Down below, Jin Soa looks up at him and wonders out loud how someone even gets under a roof without a ladder. He suspects that Yonho must know some martial arts, but judging from his ragged appearance and lazy posture, he doubts the man knows anything beyond the absolute basics. Then his thoughts are interrupted by a loud pounding at the door, followed by a frantic voice yelling to ask whether anyone is home. Jin Soa opens the door and finds several people carrying badly injured workers. One man cries out that they are from the quarry and that these men were crushed by falling boulders. They only brought the ones who were still alive, and they beg for help, explaining that they have no money. At the sight of them, Jin Soa grits his teeth and mutters under his breath. Then all at once, Jin Yuran arrives and shouts at him to bring the patients inside. Startled, Jin Soa calls out to her in surprise, addressing her as his sister. But she ignores his hesitation and immediately starts giving orders. She tells him to separate the patients by severity, send the ones who are not critical into the rooms, and begin treating the urgent ones right away. Jin Soa answers immediately and obeys. Jin Yuran orders that 2 of them be taken into the rooms and tells someone to prepare hot water. Above them, the noise wakes Yonho. He stirs, looks down, and wonders what is going on. Below, Jin Yuran rolls up her sleeves, takes out a set of acupuncture needles, and orders that the urgent patients be laid on the floor. Then she moves swiftly into treatment, driving the needles into vital points with practiced precision. Suddenly, one of the patients convulses and violently vomits blood, splattering it all over Jin Yuran's face and clothes. But even then, she does not hesitate. She simply keeps moving and yells at Jin Soa to be faster, asking if he plans to let the others die. Overwhelmed by the sheer number of injured people, Jin Soa grits his teeth and thinks desperately that he needs help. Then he looks up toward the roof, spots Yonho and shouts for him to help. Pointing at one of the patients, he says that since Yonho comes from the martial world, he must know something about acupoints. Without hesitation, Yonho appears beside the patient and kneels down. He admits that he never properly learned this and asks what exactly he is supposed to do. Jin Soa, still treating another patient, shouts instructions at him. He tells Yonho to stimulate the Tiantu point halfway and the Zhangfu point fully. Yonho follows the directions, loosens part of the patient's robe, and presses his finger against the man's chest while muttering to himself as he searches for the spot. Then foam begins to form at the patient's mouth. Yonho frowns and says the man is reacting strangely. Jin Soa immediately yells back and asks whether he is sure he pressed the right points. Yonho hesitates, points again, and asks whether it is there. Jin Soa explodes in frustration, calls him useless, and says that the Zhangfu point is lower than that. Then he orders him to do it again. Yonho sighs and reminds him that he already said he was not good at this. A moment later, the patient suddenly starts breathing heavily. Yonho looks surprised and says that it seems like the man is breathing again. Jin Soa quickly tells him that the airway is only cleared for the moment, but the patient still needs to expel the blood and mucus trapped inside. Then he orders Yonho to suck it out with his mouth. Yonho freezes. Staring at him in disbelief, he asks whether he is serious. Is he really being told to kiss an old man? Then he demands to know whether there is no other way. Jin Soa shouts back that if he does not do it, the man will die. At that, Yonho pouts slightly and mutters that all he needed to say was that he had to clear what was stuck in the man's throat. There is no reason to humiliate him first with all that acupoint talk. Then Yonho covers the patient's mouth and nose with his hand. Jin Soa turns, sees what he is doing, and immediately shouts in alarm, asking what in the world he thinks he is doing. In the next instant, Yonho suddenly strikes the man in the chest. The patient coughs violently and spits out blood. Then, with a calm motion, Yonho guides the blood with his palm and gathers it into a floating orb beneath his hand. Jin Soa freezes on the spot, his eyes and mouth wide open in shock. Yonho calmly looks at him and says, "Can't you tell? I'm saving a life." Elsewhere, beneath the moonlight in the middle of nowhere, a man reads a letter in silence. As he looks over the contents, he mutters to himself, wondering whether his mother truly did what the letter says. That man is Wai Sanho, the demon-slaying sword and Yonho's older brother. He continues reading. "My beloved son Sanho, I would love to ask how you have been and all the rest, but the matter at hand is far too urgent. Yonho is alive." The instant he reads those words, his eyes widen and his hand tightens hard against his chest as his whole body trembles. Then he keeps reading. "There is a letter from Yonho after 5 years. I am sure that alone should ease the weight on your heart a little. However, he says he is not allowed to come home, whatever that means. So your father and I decided to go look for him at once. I am sending you this letter before we leave. Yonho's letter came from the Kaifeng branch of the Hao sect, so we are heading to Kaifeng." After reading it all, Wai Sanho's body continues trembling. He tilts his head back, closes his eyes, and quietly says that his younger brother is alive. But only for a moment. Then he turns around and tells himself that this is not the time to get emotional. Kaifeng is where Jiang Il is. The moment that thought crosses his mind, he leaps forward without hesitation. Elsewhere, Jin Soa knocks on Yonho's door and asks whether he is asleep. As he steps inside, Yonho, who is lying on his side, answers that he is. Jin Soa says it really does not look that way. Yonho immediately asks how Jin Soa expects to be a physician when he cannot even trust what people tell him. At that, Jin Soa bows his head and says that Yonho did well earlier and was at least a little helpful. Still facing away from him while lying down, Yonho questions what he means by a little when he practically saved an entire patient by himself. Jin Soa quickly corrects himself and says Yonho was greatly helpful. Hearing that, Yonho smiles and gives a satisfied little response, as if that sounds more like it. Then, with his head still lowered, Jin Soa says there is something he wants to ask. He wants to know where Yonho thinks their problem lies. Yonho asks what problem he is even talking about. There are so many that he has no idea which one Jin Soa means, so why ask him that in the first place? Jin Soa explains that he wants to restore the sacred hand manner to its former glory. That is exactly why he wants to hear the objective truth from an outsider like Yonho. At that, Yonho sits up and turns to face him properly. Jin Soa lowers himself into a chair, and Yonho says that while there are plenty of problems, the biggest one by far is money. Jin Soa is visibly surprised. "Money?" Yonho simply repeats himself, "Money." Jin Soa immediately protests, saying that medicine should be the most important thing in a physician's household. Should money not be only a secondary issue, Yonho tells him to think from the very beginning. What exactly caused his household to fall this low in the first place? After all, Jin Soa himself said that the huge physician's place across the street used to belong to them. Hearing that, Jin Soa lets out a deep sigh and starts talking about his father. He explains that their father was an incredibly kind man, one who did not have a single enemy. He treated people for free just as they are doing now, and even when treatment cost a fortune, he still never took money from poor patients. At first, that was possible because the family had wealth accumulated from previous generations. But by the time Jin Soa was born, the storehouses had already begun running low on gold. By the time he was old enough to understand what was happening, they were empty. Back then, there were also many physicians working under them, which meant their expenses were enormous. Even so, the debt was not immediately crushing, because their skill and reputation still brought in a considerable amount of money. But at some point, Jin Soa believes his father realized that his way of doing things could not continue forever. So he came up with another idea, a way to earn a huge amount of money in a very short time, even if it meant taking a tremendous risk. Before Jin Soa can say it plainly, Yonho cuts in and asks whether his father got scammed or assassinated. Jin Soa immediately complains that this kind of talk is nonsense, and says Yonho has clearly read too many novels. Then he lowers his head and awkwardly admits the truth. Their father turned to gambling. The moment Yonho hears that, he blurts out in disbelief, asking whether Jin Soa is seriously telling him that his father tried to repay debt through gambling, ruined the entire family in the process, and just kept chasing a big win. Embarrassed, Jin Soa confirms that yes, that is exactly what happened. He kept trying again and again. During those days, he barely ate proper food and did little besides drink, and in the end, he died from malnutrition and alcohol poisoning. After hearing the real reason behind the sacred hand manner's downfall, Yonho can only think to himself, what the hell is this? Then he tilts his head and asks out loud whether Jin Soa really wants to know how the sacred hand manner is supposed to recover, and more importantly, why he is even asking Yonho of all people. Jin Soa explains that since Yonho arrived carrying a recommendation letter from Mun Yuwen, the third Grand Scholar, there is no way he can be an ordinary person. That makes Yonho smirk. Then he tells Jin Soa that he is wrong. He really is just an ordinary person. And if Jin Soa wants advice on something like this, then he should be asking a professional instead. The next day they arrive at the Milky Way Manor and sit down in front of Hee-jun. Yonho begins explaining that if Jin Soa wants to ask about medicine, he should ask a physician, and if he wants medicine itself, he should ask a pharmacist. But when it comes to money, that is a different matter entirely. Before he can continue, Hee-jun nervously cuts in and asks whether the royal inspector is saying he wants him to invest in the sacred hand manner. Yonho confirms it, then he tells Hee-jun to think about it carefully. If Hee-jun had been the one managing the sacred hand manner from the start, would it really have fallen into its current state? Hee-jun immediately replies that of course it would not have. Yonho nods and says that is exactly the point. The sacred hand manner has medical skill but no ability to manage itself, so what would happen if someone like Hee-jun stepped in and handled that side of things? Hee-jun finishes the thought himself and says that money would definitely start coming in. At that, Jin Soa immediately turns to Yonho and says that he does not want to work with Hee-jun. Yonho bluntly points out that Jin Soa does not have the luxury of choice right now. Hee-jun is the one who has that power. Jin Soa is not in any position to be picky. Jin Soa protests and asks what exactly he has done so wrong. Yonho flatly answers with one word, being broke. Then Jin Soa looks at Hee-jun and says that their household was famed for its medical skill, so how could they possibly work with a lone shark? The moment he hears the words lone shark, Hee-jun snaps and shouts back, asking what exactly he means by that. Then he angrily points out that it was Jin Soa's family who blew through their money like it was nothing, while at least he knows how to protect his own. Before the argument can keep going, Yonho cuts in and asks Jin Soa where he thinks all that family fame came from in the first place. Did he think it just appeared out of the ground by itself? Did he really believe the sacred hand manner would have survived for generations if it had given out treatment for free the way he is doing now? Then Yonho points out that the former pavilion of the sacred hand manor was extremely grand too. The ancestors Jin Soa is so proud of all took money from their patients, and that is exactly how they built something so impressive in the first place. Jin Soa turns to Yonho and asks whether that is really true. Yonho immediately says of course it is. He explains that Jin Soa takes pride in his household precisely because it was a famous physician family. But to preserve that kind of name, he needs money, he needs wealth. He needs a grand pavilion so that when people see it, they think that this is clearly a household that succeeded. Then he points out something else. All truly famous physician households are rich. Hee-jun agrees right away and adds that they are not just rich but immensely wealthy. After all, when a person's life is on the line, patients are not stingy with their money. Yonho then turns back to Jin Soa and says, see. Jin Soa gives a small, stunned sound, then starts pouting to himself. All this time, he really thought medicine was supposed to be about the people. Later, back at the Sacred Hand Manor, Yonho lies down and pulls a blanket over himself. As he settles in, he begins thinking back on the expression Jin Soa had worn earlier. Inwardly, he admits that maybe he was a little too blunt, and Jin Soa had looked genuinely down after hearing all of that. But after a moment, Yonho dismisses the thought. It is none of his business. Then suddenly an ear-splitting voice roars through the manor and jolts him straight up. The voice bellows that he said to come out. Yonho sharpens his eyes and thinks to himself, what now? Out in the courtyard, a broad man is standing there, holding up a patient with one hand as if he weighs nothing. The man shouts that he wants to speak to the owner. Then he yells, asking where Jin Yuran is and where that damned matriarch is hiding. That man is Black Earth JWA Geol. The moment she hears the commotion, Jin Yuran rushes outside and demands to know what he is doing. She asks why he is dragging a patient out from their room like that. JWA Geol turns toward her, grins, and says so she is Jin Yuran. Jin Yuran immediately rushes toward the patient and shouts at him, asking whether he has any sense of empathy at all. JWA Geol barks back and asks whether empathy is what pays back borrowed money. Their father borrowed in the name of the Sacred Hand Manor, which means they now have only two options: shut down the business or repay the debt. Jin Yuran snaps back that if he has a problem, then he should talk to them directly. What did the patients ever do to him? At that, JWA Geol lets the patient drop and slams him to the ground. Then he repeats her words mockingly and says, talk to them. Without warning, he grabs Jin Yuran by the arm and yanks her toward him. Leaning in close to her face, he says with a grin that he never wanted to use this method either. But since she wants to handle things herself, then seeing as she is pretty enough, selling her to a brothel should be enough to cover the debt. With her looks, she ought to be able to work it off in about 10 years. In his mind, that sounds like a very good solution. At that exact moment, Jin Soa appears right behind him. Jin Soa starts pounding on JWA Geol's back with his small arms and shouts at him to let her go. JWA Geol casually kicks him away. Jin Yuran cries out her little brother's name. JWA Geol only keeps grinning. He says that with her face, it probably would not even take that long. Her frightened expression is pretty too. Then he says her little brother should stop worrying about her safety and start thinking about how useful she could be for making money. At that point, the patients suddenly throw themselves at JWA to stop him. JWA shoves Jin Yuran to the ground. The patients and Jin Soa cry out and rush him, shouting that if someone has to be taken, then it should be them instead, not the physician. One of the patients even bites JWA arm and yells that he's going to die soon anyway, so he might as well drag JWA down with him. Grinding his teeth, JWA throws them all off. Then Jin Yuran screams for them to stop. She tells them this is not their burden to carry. After that, she lowers her head and quietly says that he should not lay a hand on the patients. She will go. JWA looks down at her and grins. All right. The moment he says that, Jin Soa cries out to his sister and asks what she means. Jin Yuran turns to him with a smile and says that she will somehow repay the debt, so he should not worry about her. Instead, he should only think about restoring their household. Then with JWA holding her by the arm, the two begin walking away. The patients and her little brother can only cry as they watch, shouting physician and sister. Then suddenly, a calm and steady voice cuts through the courtyard. Wait. Both JWA and Jin Yuran turn toward the sound. Still wrapped in a blanket, Yonho slowly walks toward them. Then he adds that she cannot go. JWA looks at him with a smirk and asks who the hell he is. Yonho answers simply, I'm Yonho. In the middle of the courtyard, Yonho stands barefoot, wrapped in a simple white robe. His voice cuts cleanly through the tense air as he says, plain and direct, that they cannot take her. JWA still holding Jin Yuran, is completely thrown by the sudden interruption. In his mind, he can only wonder whether this stranger has a few screws loose. In the end, he decides to ignore him and simply says they are leaving. But the moment he tries to walk away, Yonho appears beside him and grabs his arm. Looking straight at him, Yonho repeats himself. He said JWA cannot take her. JWA expression twists with irritation. His brow furrows, his patience already spent, and in his mind, he can only think about what kind of nonsense this bastard is babbling now. Then Yonho gives his reason. Who is going to cook for him? JWA and Jin Yuran both stare at him in disbelief. What? With complete seriousness, Yonho explains that if the young lady leaves, then there will be no one left to make his food. Now thoroughly confused, JWA points at him and demands to know whether this woman has really been cooking for him. Yonho casually confirms that yes, she has. JWA presses again, asking why, and Yonho gives the most absurd answer possible, because he is a guest. That is the final straw. The veins on JWA temple bulge as he grabs Yonho by the robe and snarls that he must be an idiot. What kind of homeless-looking lunatic is this? Then with a furious roar that shakes the courtyard, JWA pulls back his thick arm, his fist clenched tight, and shouts that starting today, Yonho is never eating again. Jin Yuran sees the blow coming and throws up her hands, screaming for him to stop, but the punch never lands. In an instant, with a calm and almost bored expression, Yonho moves first. His fist comes down in a brutal arc. A massive shockwave of brilliant blue energy explodes from his hand and slams JWA straight into the stone ground. The courtyard floor shatters on impact, opening a deep crater where JWA crashes. He is neutralized in a single strike. Jin Yuran freezes where she stands, her mouth hanging open and her eyes wide with disbelief as dust and blue light swirl around the shattered stone. The courtyard is pure chaos. JWA lies crumpled at the bottom of the crater he created, while his subordinates and the servants stare in total shock. Standing over the wreckage, Yonho scratches the back of his head with a slightly awkward look and casually asks if JWA is all right. Then he adds that it was not really his intention. It just happened before he knew it. Coughing violently, JWA forces himself up from the rubble. Pain and fear crash over him all at once as he realizes the truth. This guy is pretty good. He stumbles backward to create distance, abandoning his earlier swagger and replacing it with wary respect. Then he asks where Yonho is from, addressing him as a martial master. Yonho brushes dust from his robe and casually replies that he is not a martial master. Realizing he is completely outmatched, JWA immediately shifts tactics and tries to appeal to rules and law. He says Yonho should not interfere because this is a private matter. There is a proper contract tied to the debt and even the authorities would take their side. Yonho calmly acknowledges that point. Seeing that, JWA catches the faintest bit of hope. Sweat rolls down his face as he stammers that if Yonho understands, then he should stay out of it. But Yonho calmly says that will be a little difficult. Then he repeats his strange concern. He already said it. If the young lady leaves, then there will be no one to feed him. At that moment, JWA understands. The food is just an excuse. What Yonho really means is that he intends to help them. So JWA drops the pretense and asks directly whether Yonho truly plans to interfere in the affairs of the Dark Earth Branch sect all the way to the end. Yonho tilts his head and repeats the name as if hearing it for the first time. Dark Earth Branch sect. JWA explains that it is the faction he belongs to and also the one to which Jin Yuran is indebted. Their sect is not going to simply stand by and let this happen. Yonho changes his tone and says that he has no intention of interfering. Right now, the real issue is money, is it not? That catches JWA off guard, so he asks whether Yonho is saying that he will repay the debt on her behalf. The other servants stare with wide eyes as Yonho makes an unbelievable offer. He says he does not have the money right now, but he will make it and hand it over, so JWA should leave. Then he sets the deadline. He will pay it within 2 weeks. A tense silence fills the courtyard as JWA studies him, weighing this absurd promise from a man powerful enough to crush him with one casual blow. After a long pause, JWA makes his decision. He says he will trust Yonho to keep his word. Elsewhere, inside a lavishly decorated room, Guak Dawson, the leader of the Dark Earth Branch sect, sits in the middle of a large meal. While chewing on a piece of meat, he receives a report that a martial master appeared at the Sacred Hand Manor. Kneeling before him, JWA confirms that it is true. He says the man claimed to be a guest. Guak Dawson repeats the word to himself, a guest. If that man is truly someone tied to the former master of the Sacred Hand Manor, then things could become troublesome. Then Guak Dawson looks down at JWA with sharp irritation and asks whether he is seriously saying he ran away the moment he saw that master. JWA's face immediately reddens with anger. Leaning forward, he protests loudly that he is no coward. Then he explains that the man said he would pay the money within 2 weeks, so JWA believed it would be better to observe the situation first. That answer only makes Guak Dawson explode. He roars that JWA is an imbecile. Did he tell him to go collect money? He told him to use the debt as an excuse to tear down the sign of the Sacred Hand Manor and crush them so completely that they could never recover. In a fit of fury, Guak Dawson hurls a large shellfish at JWA, smacking him hard in the side of the head. Then he screams that JWA really backed off just because of that nonsense. Holding his head and flustered, JWA tries to defend himself by saying that he thought it was better to first figure out who that man really was. But that only enraged Guak Dawson more. He slams his fist onto the table, scattering dishes and food everywhere, and screams that JWA is dragging this out for no reason. Then he asks whether he should rip his tongue right out. At that point, the real fear comes out. If this goes wrong, then they will be furious. And if that happens, every last one of them will be reduced to a puddle of blood. Seeing the genuine panic in his leader, JWA carefully suggests a simpler solution, should they just get rid of him. In an instant, the panic drains from his face and is replaced by a cold, calculating expression. There is no reason to provoke a martial master like that. For now, they will simply keep watching him. Then he leans back with a grim expression and repeats the decision. For now, they will wait and see. Inside a quiet room, Yonho lies sprawled across a wooden bed. Across from him, the young head of the house, Jinsoa, sits there with a worried expression. Breaking the silence, he asks anxiously what on earth Yonho is planning to do. Barely opening his eyes, Yonho dismissively asks about what. That only deepens Jinsoa's concern. He reminds Yonho of the bold promise he made and asks whether he did not say he would pay off the debt within 2 weeks. But with a look of genuine forgetfulness, Yonho simply asks if he did. That answer sends Jinsoa straight into panic. He jumps to his feet and blurts out that Yonho must have had some kind of plan. What does he mean, did he? Calmly, Yonho reassures him that of course he has a plan. In fact, he says it is the finest method passed down since ancient times. Then, with a completely serious expression, he reveals his so-called ancient wisdom. When debt collectors are after you, there is nothing better than this. Jinsoa leans forward at once, completely captivated and on edge, and nervously asks what it is. Then Yonho reveals his brilliant strategy. He says he does not know whether Jinsoa has heard of it before, but it is called a midnight run. The sheer absurdity of that answer earns Yonho several frantic smacks from the utterly enraged Jinsoa, who yells that he cannot believe he actually thought Yonho had an idea. Completely exasperated, Jinsoa clenches his fist and says he cannot believe he trusted someone like him in the first place. After taking the hits, Yonho's expression turns serious again. Sitting up, he asks the one question that actually matters. So how much is it? Jinsoa lowers his gaze to the floor and answers with a somber expression that he does not know the exact amount himself, but he believes it is somewhere around 20 nyang of gold. That makes Yonho freeze. 2,000 nyang in silver. How in the world does one person rack up that much debt? With a heavy sigh, Jinsoa reveals the full extent of their family's financial ruin. He explains that it was originally over 100 nyang of gold, but they sold off their assets and managed to bring it down to the current amount. All Yonho can do is let out a breath of disbelief. This is ridiculous. Jinsoa quietly replies that everyone says the same thing. After a brief moment of thought, Yonho rises to his feet with a look of resolve and says they should go. Still seated, Jinsoa looks up at him in confusion and asks where exactly they are going. Yonho glances back over his shoulder, his expression suddenly sharp, and says they are going to earn money. Then he adds an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That old saying only confuses Jinsoa even more. He asks why Yonho is suddenly bringing that up now. A slow, knowing smile spreads across Yonho's face as he reveals his plan. Because the place where they are going to make money is the very place where Jinsoa's father was ruined. And with that, Jinsoa realizes exactly where they are headed. The gambling den. Soon they arrive at Golden Flower Manor, a secret gambling house overflowing with activity. The air is thick with smoke, and the constant clacking of tiles fills the room as men gamble away their fortunes. Yonho, now dressed in an elegant white and blue robe, walks through the crowd with a cool air of confidence, while Jinsoa follows behind him disguised as a servant in a simple gray outfit with a brown headband. Elsewhere in a private room tucked away from the noise, Kang Chinlip, the master of Golden Flower Manor, lounges lazily while complaining to himself about how slow business has been. He wonders if the day is going to be another failure. Then he starts thinking aloud, asking if the rumors about him fleecing suckers spread too far. Not long after that, he reflects on his last major score and muses that maybe ruining the old master of sacred hand manner was the real problem. But his idle thoughts are cut off when a subordinate bursts into the room in a panic. Startled and annoyed, Kang Chinlip jerks upright and demands to know what is going on. Has the government come to collect their share or something? Completely ignoring his master's paranoia, the subordinate eagerly delivers his news with a huge grin. An idiot customer has arrived. Kang Chinlip blinks in confusion and asks what. Then the subordinate happily announces that a sucker has come in. Down below, Yonho slowly takes in the scene, his eyes moving from table to table as he watches men completely engrossed in their games. Quietly, he remarks that this must be the gambling house. Jin Soa, staying close by his side, nervously urges him to stop gawking already. Inwardly, he is full of worry. Is this really going to be all right? Trying to win back what was lost to gambling by gambling again sounds like complete madness. The moment they move farther inside, their presence is noticed. An attendant with a wide, toothy grin rushes toward them, spreading his arms with an exaggerated welcome. He cheerfully asks what brings the young master to such a humble establishment. Yonho looks at him with a cool, detached expression and simply asks whether the man knows him. The attendant's grin only widens as he says of course. After all, Yonho is clearly an esteemed guest who came to enjoy the night. Yonho plays along perfectly. With the bored air of an aristocrat, he asks what one is even supposed to do for fun around a place like this. Sensing a wealthy and naive customer, the attendant becomes even more obsequious. He tells Yonho to speak comfortably, eager to please him. Yonho clears his throat and awkwardly slips into the role, asking again what people do for fun there. The attendant grandly gestures with one hand, as if a magical glow is coming off his sales pitch. He says they have everything there from dice to bone tiles and every kind of game where money can be wagered to win more money. Then he beckons them forward with even greater enthusiasm, saying they absolutely have to see one particular game for themselves. He leads them toward a table, drawing a crowd. As they approach, Yonho clears his throat again, announcing his presence to the gamblers gathered around it. The attendant points to 2 small cups and a few carved objects on the table and says this is the one. Yonho leans in with carefully feigned innocence and asks what it is. To him, it looks like dice. The attendant smiles warmly and explains that the game is called Yin and Yang, the most popular game in the establishment. Picking up one of the cups with practiced ease, he explains the rules. He says he will place iron beads into the containers and shake them. As he vigorously shakes the cup, the beads rattle loudly inside. Then he takes 2 containers and shakes them together, explaining that the beads are divided between the 2 sides during the motion. Finally, with a decisive thud, he places 1 container on the floor and says that from there, all one has to do is guess whether the number of beads inside is odd or even. Yonho strokes his chin thoughtfully and remarks that the game sounds incredibly simple. The attendant laughs heartily and agrees. People love it precisely because it is simple. His eyes gleam as he lays out exactly why it is so addictive. Bet fast, win fast, and lose fast. The odds are exactly half and half. Hen, with one last round of flattery, he says the game should perfectly suit the young master's fiery temperament. A confident, almost cocky smile spreads across Yonho's face as he plays the role perfectly. That is true. He cannot stand things that take too long. Then, fully committing to the part of an impatient nobleman, he gestures toward the table and says that in that case they should give it a try. From above, Kang Chinlip watches the new arrival from a vantage point overlooking the gambling floor, wearing a knowing smirk. In his mind, everything is going exactly as planned. Hooking a sucker is the easy part. First, let him lose a little. Then let him win a little. Then give him one huge win. Repeat the cycle, and before he realizes it, he will be hopelessly addicted. A quiet, self-satisfied laugh slips out of him. As the game continues, Kang Chinlip keeps watching with complete confidence. He even chuckles to himself, thinking that the fool seems to be losing badly already. Then the atmosphere below suddenly shifts. A gambler's voice rings out in astonishment, shouting about how much that all is and saying that the young master is cleaning them out tonight. In an instant, Kang Chinlip's smugness vanishes. He leans over the railing, his eyes widening in disbelief. Below him, the clinking of silver fills the air as large, gleaming ingots are stacked higher and higher in front of Yonho. The sheer amount of winnings is staggering. Kang Chinlip can do nothing but stare in complete disbelief, his mind spinning as a single shocked thought echoes in his head. The hell just happened? He lets out a choked gasp. Down below, the scene has become surreal. Surrounded by towering stacks of shining silver, Yonho rests his head on one hand and looks utterly bored by his own absurd luck. Then, with a yawn, he makes another call. Odd. The silver keeps piling up with one satisfying clink after another. A calm, confident smirk plays on Yonho's lips as he picks up one of the heavy silver pieces and inspects it with a cool, almost lazy gaze. Outside, the beggar sect branch leader, Jang Il, finally relaxes and enjoys a rare sense of peace. With Wai Yonho gone, he muses that business is finally returning to normal. As winter approaches, he even finds a discarded door and feels pleased with his luck, thinking that today must really be his lucky day. But that brief moment of peace does not last. The very next instant, the door he just set up is violently smashed to pieces. Standing in the middle of the wreckage is an imposing figure with an intense expression carved across his face. He looks down at the startled Jang Il and asks one sharp question. Is that true? That man is why Sanho, the demon-slaying sword, and more importantly, why Yonho's older brother. Jang Il stammers in shock as he recognizes who is standing before him. Without wasting even a second, Sanho lunges forward and grabs him violently by the collar. His voice is filled with desperate rage as he shouts Jang Il's name and demands to know whether Yonho being alive is really true. Terrified, Jang Il quickly blurts out that it is true. He begs Sanho to calm down, saying they can talk if he lets go first. That confirmation momentarily stuns Sanho. He releases his grip and Jang Il collapses to the ground. The fury in Sanho's eyes fades into a quiet realization as he murmurs that Yonho really is alive. Then his composure returns, colder and more focused than before. He looks down at Jang Il and asks with quiet intensity where Yonho is now. Sweating and thoroughly intimidated, Jang Il tells him that the house sect has that information, so if Sanho wants to know, he will have to ask them. Sanho makes his decision instantly. Then let's go. Jang Il stares up in confusion and asks where exactly they are going. Without another word, Sanho grabs him by the back of his shirt, lifts him with ease, and starts walking toward the house sect. He simply tells Jang Il to lead the way. Still hanging in the air like a captive sack, Jang Il can only think to himself in pure exasperation that these brothers are both complete lunatics. Not long after they arrive at the Kaifeng branch of the house sect, a lavish and intimidating place. The moment they step inside, they are met by the branch leader herself. She glares down at them with a poisonous expression and immediately directs all her fury at Jang Il. She curses him for actually dragging the demon-slaying sword there, the rising star of the entire righteous faction. Jang Il desperately tries to explain that this is not why he brought him, but she cuts him off and tells him to shut up. She says she is settling the score with him today, and just like that, whatever Jang Il tries to say is swallowed by his own terrified screaming as chaos erupts around him. Then the scene shifts to a lively gambling den where a tense game is reaching its climax. While Yonho, looking completely relaxed, casually asks how much he stands to win in the current round. A voice from the excited crowd answers for him. 1,000 yang. Across from Yonho, his opponent, a burly man with a strained expression, grips the dice cup on the table and silently curses his luck. The crowd whispers about how insane the stakes have become, with some saying this might be the biggest game they have ever seen. And yet, in the middle of all that tension, Yonho looks utterly bored, casually resting his head on one hand. His opponent can only stare at him and wonder who this mysterious challenger really is as the young man lazily says for him to go on. The crowd keeps whispering that Yonho has already won 9 rounds in a row. That makes his opponent's confidence collapse even more. Sweat starts forming on his forehead as he thinks with dread that there is no way Yonho is about to win again. Then the opponent lifts the cup. The result is 4, it's even. At once the gambling den explodes into an uproar. 1,000 yang, somebody shouts that the young master is cleaning them out. Another voice proclaims that a gambling god has descended. The spectators are completely stunned. Beside Yonho, Jin Soa leans in and exclaims in amazement that he really won. Yonho only lets out a soft chuckle as he looks over the enormous pile of winnings in front of him. Inside his own mind, his confidence is absolute. He thinks to himself that he is the kind of man who can dodge a rock thrown at him in his sleep just by hearing it. Compared to that, this game is child's play. Then, as his defeated opponent trembles in silence, Yonho continues his thought. He can tell odd from even by sound alone. Then Yonho lets out a wide yawn and thinks to himself that it would be a shame to stop now, but he should probably call it a day. His eyes flicker over the shining pile in front of him, and temptation briefly stirs in his mind. Just one more win and he would reach 20 gold nyang. While he is considering that, a man with messy shoulder-length hair and a goatee pushes through the crowd. He approaches Yonho's table with a practiced smile and a respectful bow, saying that such an esteemed guest has graced them today. He claims he failed to recognize such a distinguished visitor. The crowd murmurs at once. It is Kang Chinlip, the owner of Golden Flower Manor. Yonho, however, remains entirely unimpressed by his presence. He looks up at him with a lazy expression and flatly says that he is not some esteemed guest. He is nothing like that. Kang Chinlip lets out a hearty laugh and says that in a gambling house, the one who puts on a show like this absolutely counts as an esteemed guest. But his warm attitude does nothing to change Yonho's mood. With the same deadpan look, Yonho replies that frankly he was not entertained. Kang Chinlip forces out a strained laugh. Clasping his hands together, he says that as expected, Yonho is on a completely different level. But inside, his true thoughts are much uglier. He curses under his breath in his head, thinking that Yonho pocketed 1,000 yang in one sitting and still says he was not having fun. Even so, he continues pressing the invitation. He says that a man of Yonho's standing should be playing a game truly worthy of him. Then he suggests something bigger. Yonho echoes the word bigger, and for a moment a flicker of interest appears in his eyes. Sensing that opening, Kang Chinlip immediately becomes even more animated. He paints the image of a truly grand game, not something small like this one, but a real match, something thrilling enough to shake the whole room. For a moment, Yonho appears to consider it. He even lets out a small sound of interest as though he might actually be tempted. Then just as quickly his bored expression returns. No, he is good. He turns to Jin Soa and tells him to pack things up, completely rejecting the owner's grand offer. As Jin Soa happily starts gathering the winnings, the man who just lost everything can only stare in total disbelief and despair. Seeing Yonho preparing to leave, Kang Chinlip's friendly mask cracks. Sweat starts dripping down his face as his voice turns threatening. He asks whether Yonho seriously thinks he can just walk out after taking 10 gold nyong from him, and whether he thinks that is something Kang Chinlip will simply let slide. Realizing that anger is not working, he immediately shifts tactics again. He grabs Yonho by the shoulder and calls him young master, his smile returning as though nothing happened. Then he presents a pouch of money and says that if Yonho agrees to join the bigger game, he will hand over 5 gold nyong right now. Then Yonho counters, make it 10. For a brief moment, Kang Chinlip is rendered speechless. A vein bulges on his forehead as he inwardly curses what kind of insane bastard he is dealing with. But he forces out a wide, strained grin and agrees. Fine, he will give him 10 gold nyong, however, he adds one condition. The game does not end until one side loses everything. Yonho pauses, thinking over the all-or-nothing terms. Then he decides that coming back tomorrow would just be annoying anyway. Looking at Kang Chinlip, he agrees. If he gives him 10 gold nyong, then he will do it. Delighted, Kang Chinlip praises that as a wise choice. And the moment Yonho agrees, Kang Chinlip's triumphant thought flashes through his mind. You fell for it, idiot. Then he turns toward the den and calls out that the match has been accepted, so the other party can come out now. A figure slowly emerges from the shadows. The very atmosphere of the room changes the instant he appears. The crowd gasps in recognition. It is Doc Bai. Doc Bai actually showed up. The newcomer is none other than Doc Bai, the one-armed gambling king. With a single hand, he skillfully rolls a set of dice, his scarred face completely unreadable as he surveys the scene before him. Then his eyes settle on the enormous pile of winnings stacked in front of Yonho. Inwardly, Doc Bai questions the rumors he heard, so he really won all that money by himself in yin and yang. His gaze then shifts to Yonho, studying him carefully. He does not even look like a gambler. Yonho, however, meets the legendary gambler's stare with total indifference. His bored expression does not change in the slightest, even in front of such a formidable opponent. After sizing him up, Doc Bai reaches a simple conclusion. A gambler is just whoever wins. That is all there is to it. Yonho then directly addresses the one-armed man and asks if he is the opponent. Doc Bai confirms that he is. Yonho immediately asks what exactly he has to do. With a flourish, Doc Bai tosses a handful of dice onto the table and announces that this is the game he recommends. The crowd immediately starts murmuring. Some scoff that dice is too plain, others argue that plain is exactly why it is the most reliable. The conclusion is obvious. There is no way that kid can beat Doc Bai. As the whispers continue, Yonho lets out a huge, bored yawn. Someone in the crowd mutters that there is no game Yonho could possibly win against Doc Bai. Then Kang Chinlip steps in and lays out the rules. The higher total wins, that is all. Then he asks whether either side has any objections. Yonho answers with a single uninterested word, nope. Doc Bai then adds his own condition, his eyes locked on Yonho the entire time. The match will continue until one side has won every last nyong. Grinning widely, Kang Chinlip eagerly elaborates. The pot will double every round, and if someone runs out of money, they can always buy back in. Then he reveals the final rule. The one who wins the money will decide whether the match continues. He spreads his arms as if presenting a masterpiece, then asks Yonho whether that arrangement works for him. Yonho glances around at the room, takes in the atmosphere for a moment, and then gives a simple answer. Sounds fine. With that, Kang Chinlip throws his arms wide and announces to the roaring crowd that the game will begin. As the match starts, a nervous Jin Soa leans in toward Yonho and whispers, asking whether he can really handle this. Looking completely relaxed, Yonho smirks and asks if Jin Soa has ever seen him fail before. With just a few rounds, now Yonho is sweating, and the huge mountain of winnings in front of him has been reduced to only a handful of pieces. The onlookers who were cheering for him earlier now stare with pity and disappointment. Jin Soa, pale and trembling, points out the brutal truth. Yonho has lost 10 rounds in a row, and yet Yonho, seemingly unbothered by the disaster, simply says that apparently he did. That answer sends Jin Soa into a complete meltdown. He screams, asking what Yonho means by apparently. Yonho is the one who told him to trust him. At this rate, they are going to lose everything. He even blurts out that Yonho is a useless idiot. Doc Bai, the gambling king, looks at Yonho's nearly empty side of the table and calmly declares that it looks like this will be the final round. The pot has now reached 2,000 nyong. The crowd, already sensing the inevitable, starts mocking the young challenger. One spectator sneers that losing all his winnings in a single instant is what happens when a novice gets arrogant. Another laughs and points out that if he loses again, he will end up 10 gold nyong in debt instead. In the end, the general opinion can be summed up in one sentence. This is exactly why beginners should not gamble. Through all of that ridicule, Yonho's bored expression still does not change. Resting his head on his hand, he simply says that is fine, so they should move on to the next round. With a confident smirk, Doc Bai throws the dice one more time, fully convinced that this will be the end. The dice roll across the table. And that is when Yonho changes. The lazy, uninterested look vanishes from his face. His eyes narrow sharply, turning cold and focused as he watches the tumbling dice with complete concentration. Then the dice come to a stop. Every single one lands on 6. The gambling den erupts. The crowd roars in amazement, a perfect score, all 6s. The gamblers cannot believe what they are seeing, 6 dice all perfect, as expected of Doc Bai. With a smug smile, Doc Bai extends an open hand toward Yonho and asks whether he will continue. Yonho casually asks why he would not. But Jin Soa, fully panicked, cries out in horror. With a serious tone, Yonho asks one simple question. Does he trust him? Despite the fear, despite all the yelling from earlier, Jin Soa answers instantly and without hesitation. Of course he trusts him. The certainty in that answer genuinely catches Yonho off guard. For a moment, he looks honestly touched. Quietly, he says that no one has ever said something like that to him before. Then he places a reassuring hand on Jin Soa's head. After that, Yonho takes a deep breath, centers himself, and picks up the dice for the most important roll yet. With everything now on the line, his focus becomes razor-sharp. In his mind, the calculation is simple. If he wins this, that becomes 40 gold nyang. The lazy mask is completely gone now. With a slow and deliberate motion, Yonho releases the dice from his hand. They tumble across the table. And in that instant, Bai's confident smile disappears. His eyes widen in total disbelief. The entire gambling den falls silent. Everyone stares, mouths hanging open, as one person barely manages to whisper that this cannot be real. Then the dice stop. Every single one has landed on 1, the absolute lowest result possible. Yonho stares at the outcome in complete confusion and lets out a baffled sound. Beside him, the moment Jin Soa realizes what just happened, he unleashes a desperate, horrified scream. Then the scene shifts. Inside a dark and silent room, a figure sits in the shadows, their face completely obscured. That figure asks only one question: who is he? Kneeling before them is Guak Dawson, the leader of the Dark Earth Branch sect. He reports that they still have not identified him. The shadowed figure quietly considers that answer: an unknown young master. Then the final order comes down with cold certainty: kill him. Guak Dawson remains kneeling as his superior repeats the command with even greater finality. No loose ends, kill him. For a moment, Guak Dawson hesitates. Weakly, he protests that they still do not know how skilled the man truly is. A sinister smile spreads across the face hidden in shadow. Pathetic. The figure says that proper men will be sent this time. They are already running out of time. Back in the gambling den, the chaos is already breaking loose. Yonho stands there, on his lips there is still a confident, almost playful smirk. Then he flexes his fingers, ready for whatever comes next. The crowd watches in stunned silence. As the dice rattle across the table and finally come to a stop, the result is catastrophic. Every single die settles motionless on the surface, and every one of them shows a single dot, a total wipeout. Yonho stares at the outcome with a blank expression of disbelief and lets out a confused sound as the reality of the loss sinks in. Beside him, the disguised Jin Soa completely loses his composure. His face twists into a mix of horror and rage as he screams at Yonho, cursing him for losing everything in a single moment. Across the table, Bai, the one-armed gambling king, watches with a sinister smirk. The scar on his face tightens as he coolly tells Yonho that he was simply unlucky. All Yonho can do is groan. Then the situation turns even worse. Jin Soa collapses on the spot, buries his head in his hands, and wails that they are completely finished. Ignoring his servant's despair, Yonho lazily looks up and asks what happens now. Kang Chinlip, the master of Golden Flower Manor, steps forward with a satisfied grin and spreads his hands wide as he delivers the verdict. Since Yonho no longer has any money left to gamble, he must immediately pay back the 10 gold nyang that was lent to him earlier. Yonho rests his chin on one hand, completely unfazed by the demand. Then he corrects Kang Chinlip, saying that he is not asking about the debt. He wants to know how much capital he needs in order to stay in the game. Caught off guard by the sheer audacity of that question, Kang Chinlip stammers that he would need 40 nyang. Yonho calmly confirms it, asking whether 40 is really all it takes to continue. Kang Chinlip quickly regains his composure and puts on a gracious face. He remarks that while such things are normally decided by the house, he is willing to make an exception. Outwardly, he welcomes the challenge. Inwardly, though, he ridicules Yonho, convinced the young man has gone mad and eager to strip him of every last coin. Still, Yonho wants certainty, so he asks if Kang Chinlip can promise that the game will continue. The manor master spreads his arms theatrically and declares that a gambling house cannot exist without trust. He even calls on the surrounding spectators as witnesses to his word. Hearing that, Yonho gives a faint, knowing smile, while beside him Jin Soa can only stare in confusion. Then, without hesitation, Yonho turns his gaze toward the entrance and tells someone outside to come in. A moment later, 2 burly porters march into the gambling den carrying heavy stacks of black and gold chests. Walking confidently between them is Jun, the branch manager of the Milky Way Manor, who cheerfully apologizes for being late. Yonho immediately snaps at him, demanding to know why he took so long and claiming that he nearly ended up being sold into slavery because of the delay. Jun only laughs and waves the complaint away, assuring Yonho that he would never let things sink that low. Kang Chinlip stares at the arrival in total panic. Sweat immediately begins rolling down his face as he recognizes Jun and stammers in disbelief, asking why a high-ranking figure from the Milky Way Manor is suddenly there. Ignoring the manor master's distress, Jun politely explains that he has arrived with the capital his guest requested. He apologizes once more, saying that the process took a little time because the entire amount had to be prepared in gold. Yonho casually leans back and fixes his gaze on the trembling manor master. He reminds Kang Chinlip of his promise that the game would continue as long as there was money. Then he calmly notes that the minimum bet should now be double the previous round. But Yonho is not finished. With a cold, challenging look, he suggests that they raise the stakes even higher. Kang Chinlip is completely stunned. Then Yonho lifts a single finger, his face dead serious, and drops the bombshell that silences the room. The next bet will be 100 gold nyang. Kang Chenlip just stares at him, sweat pouring down his face as he struggles to process the sheer insanity of the amount. He stammers and asks whether he heard that correctly. From the side, Yonho taunts him and asks whether he is scared. Inside, Kang Chenlip is screaming in panic. This bastard is completely insane. But even so, he forces himself to turn toward his greatest weapon. Leaning in close, he urgently asks Doc Bai whether he is confident enough to pull this off with stakes this high. Doc Bai looks insulted by the question. With a sharp glare, he asks whether Kang Chenlip is actually doubting his skill. Terrified of losing his support, Kang Chenlip immediately denies it. Forcing a smile, he insists that he trusts him completely. Then he turns back toward the table with renewed, if shaky, confidence and loudly declares that the game will continue. That announcement sends another wave of excitement through the murmuring crowd. But Doc Bai remains focused only on his opponent. Staring intently at Yonho, he remarks that the game has become much larger now and asks whether this was part of Yonho's plan all along. Yonho responds with a look of genuine confusion and asks who in the world would ever do something as crazy as losing on purpose. Then he adds, almost mockingly, that he is not filthy rich enough to throw money away for fun. Doc Bai still does not fully buy it. His sharp eyes narrow as he points out the timing. If it was not planned, then why did Yonho call the Milky Way Manor ahead of time? Yonho gives him a simple, almost playful answer. His mother always taught him that no matter what he is doing, he should always keep a lot of money on hand. That answer leaves Doc Bai silent. His eyes stay on Yonho's unreadable face for a long moment. Then Yonho breaks the tension by asking whether it is his turn to start. With a smooth motion, he sends the dice rolling from his hand. The entire crowd watches with total focus as the dice tumble across the table. They rattle and bounce violently in a chaotic dance. One by one, they slam into place, and the room erupts as the first 4 dice all land on 6. The tension spikes instantly. Then the 5th die settles on 6 as well. Now only one final die remains, still spinning wildly on its edge. The entire room holds its breath. Everyone watches the last die wobble and wobble until at last it falls. It lands on 5. The gambling den erupts into a mix of cheers and groans. Some shout that it was so close to perfection. Others lament how narrowly he missed a complete set of 6s. But even so, the crowd quickly agrees that the score is still terrifying. Whispers spread that even against the legendary Doc Bai, a result this high might be enough to win. Doc Bai, however, remains unimpressed. He looks down at the near-perfect score with a condescending sneer and says that it is a shame, being only 1 point short of perfection. Yonho brushes off the psychological jab without effort. With total calm, he replies that he has no idea what Doc Bai is trying to imply. 35 is just an objectively high number. At that, Doc Bai's face stretches into a menacing grin. His eyes begin to glow with a fierce violet light as he stares down at his opponent and declares that 35 changes nothing at all. Then he adds a chilling warning. Yonho has made a grave mistake by underestimating him. Determined to crush whatever hope remains, Doc Bai announces that he is now going to show everyone exactly why he is called the Gambling King. With a sharp, powerful motion, he casts the dice from his hand. They fly across the table with tremendous force and strike the surface with heavy clacks. One by one, the numbers begin to reveal themselves. The first die is a 6, the second is a 6, then another 6 and another. The pattern continues until 5 dice lie perfectly on the board, each showing the highest number possible, 5 6s. Now everything rests on the final die. It spins violently in the foreground, and the entire room is suspended in breathless anticipation as it refuses to settle. The crowd goes wild, but while the entire room holds its breath, the disguised Jin Soa is on the verge of a complete breakdown. Meanwhile, Yonho remains infuriatingly detached. That ridiculous exchange is cut short when the spinning die finally begins to lose momentum. It wobbles across the table. The blur starts to slow. Then, with one final sharp clack, it comes to a complete stop. The whole room leans in as one, faces slick with sweat, eyes wide with disbelief. Everyone stares at the table as if peering into an abyss. Time itself seems to stop. And then the truth becomes clear. It is not the 6 that Doc Bai needed. Instead, 4 black pips stare back at them in the dim light, sealing the outcome of the game. A shaken voice finally stammers out the result. It is a 4. The calculation is immediate and brutal. Added to the 5 6s already on the board, Doc Bai's total comes to 34, which means Yonho has won by a single point. That realization explodes through the crowd. The room erupts as people scream that the kid won by only 1 point. The tension shatters and transforms into absolute chaos as spectators roar in excitement, shouting about the staggering sum of 100 gold nyang and struggling to accept that they just witnessed the fall of the Gambling King. The gambling den descends into total pandemonium. People shout that this victory will go down in history. Others marvel that Yonho is the first man ever to walk away from Golden Flower Manor with such an amount. Right in the middle of it all, Yonho stares at his own hand, momentarily dazed by the outcome. But his brief peace lasts only a second. The disguised Jin Soa launches himself at him, grabs him in a crushing hug, and screams in sheer ecstasy that they won 100 gold nyang. Yonho immediately grimaces and shoves him away, coldly reminding him that just moments ago he was calling him a son of a bitch. On the other side of the table, Kang Chenlip grabs his head in agony and screams that they actually lost. Then he rounds on Doc Bai and shouts that the one-armed man promised he would win. Doc Bai, however, simply closes his eyes and accepts the defeat with a strange kind of calm. He says that while he may be the gambling king, the boy before him must be a gambling god. That answer makes Kang Chinlip stare at him with bulging veins and ask whether he is out of his mind. Then he starts spiraling, screaming about the money of Golden Flower Manor and how completely doomed he is. At that point, Hee-jun steps forward and takes control of the chaos with a bright smile. Clapping his hands loudly, he demands everyone's attention. Then he announces to the entire room that this victory officially settles every financial matter between Golden Flower Manor and young Master Yonho. He spreads his arms wide and calls upon the whole room to act as witnesses to the game that just took place. The crowd answers with a roar of approval, raising their fists and solidifying the legitimacy of the result. Amidst all the cheering, Doc Bai stands tall and accepts the loss with surprising grace. He walks toward Yonho and says that it was truly a good game. Yonho returns the sentiment with a silent, respectful bow, acknowledging the elder gambler's skill. Then naturally, he moves on to the practical side of things. Hee-jun steps in and explains that he will secure the massive winnings at the manor for safekeeping. Yonho agrees simply, clearly ready to be done with the tension. As the adrenaline begins to fade, the physical toll finally hits Jin Soa. He bends forward, breathing hard, and confesses that he is absolutely not cut out for gambling. Just watching that match nearly drained the life out of him. Then he asks whether Yonho is all right. Yonho admits that he is only a little tired. Deciding that it is finally time to leave, he entrusts the money to Hee-jun and says that they are going home. More than anything, he just wants to eat good food and sleep. Jin Soa immediately brightens and says he knows exactly where they should go. But in his eagerness, he turns too quickly and slams straight into a towering dark figure. His sentence cuts off mid-word as he blurts out a startled apology. That single collision stops the group cold. Standing before them is a menacing group of martial artists led by a man with stark white hair and a dark robe embroidered with a spiderweb pattern. It is Guak Dawson, the leader of the Dark Earth Branch sect. A few steps behind him, Yonho silently watches, his eyes narrowing as he sizes up the newcomers and judges their threat level. Beside Yonho, Hee-jun leans in and quietly whispers that based on the symbols on their clothing, these men appear to be from the Dark Earth Branch sect. Yonho softly repeats the name to himself. But before he can react further, the atmosphere changes. Guak Dawson steps forward, his face buried in shadow and his expression grim. Ignoring the trembling servant altogether, he scans the room and demands, in a voice rumbling with restrained violence, to know exactly who Yonho is. Elsewhere in a quiet courtyard far removed from the gambling den, Mun-yoonji stands at the entrance of a building, looking at a late-night visitor with surprise. She repeats the name Yonho just to be sure, then looks up at the tall man standing before her and asks whether he is truly Yonho's older brother. Sanho stands there stoically in the moonlight. Behind him stands Jang Il, the beggar sect branch leader, looking utterly disheveled and exhausted. Then he asks the one question that matters, where is his brother right now? Mun-yoonji shakes her head and explains that Yonho is not there anymore. He already left for Hubei, traveling with the Swift Dragon Escort Agency. Sanho accepts the news without even a flicker of emotion. He offers a brief, polite thanks, then turns immediately and starts walking back into the night, with Jang Il dragging himself after him as they continue the pursuit of his wayward brother. Without missing a beat, Sanho tells his exhausted companion to move. Jang Il, barely able to catch his breath, asks where they are headed next. Sanho's answer is short and devastating, Hubei. The sheer distance instantly breaks Jang Il. He screams in protest and demands to know whoever agreed to drag him along for this. Completely overwhelmed, he collapses onto the dirt and starts throwing a full tantrum like a child. He wails that he already ran all the way there without even a drop of water or a bite of food, and if they go to Hubei right away, he is going to die. Watching the pathetic scene, Mun-yoonji lets out a long, weary sigh. Then she calls out to Sanho and politely asks him to rest before continuing his journey. Sanho stops but immediately declines. He says that he cannot afford to delay. Mun-yoonji persists, her tone calm but firm. She explains that if they turned away guests at such a late hour, the world would speak poorly of them, so she insists on preparing a bath and food. On the ground, Jang Il continues rolling around and shrieking that he is going to die either way if forced to take another step. Seeing the pitiful condition of his companion, Sanho finally relents and mutters that he guesses he has no choice. Soon, thick steam curls through the air of the bathhouse, wrapping the room in warmth and quiet. Jang Il sinks into the hot water and lets out a long breath of pure relief. He chuckles to himself and thinks about how absurd this is. A member of the beggar sect enjoying such luxury would probably make his leader foam at the mouth if he ever found out. Across the bath, Sanho rises from the water. As the steam parts around him, his body is revealed in full. It is a physique honed to perfection, layered with muscle and marked by the scars of countless battles. Jang Il stares with widened eyes and gives a low whistle, openly admiring how monstrous Sanho's build is. But then his eyes lock onto one particular scar. A huge jagged mark runs across Sanho's chest. Curiosity immediately overcomes him, and he asks whether that wound is the legendary scar left by the tailless phantom demon. He recalls the rumors that Sanho nearly lost his life in that battle. Sanho pauses. He repeats the name of the demon with a distant, unreadable expression. Then he calmly shakes his head and says that the wound from fighting that creature is nothing compared to the scar carved across his chest now. That answer leaves Jang Il completely dumbfounded. He scrambles out of the water, wraps a towel around himself, and chases after Sanho, demanding to know the truth. If it was not the phantom demon, then who did that? Sanho stops, A faint, bitter smile touches his lips as he repeats the words demonic martial artist. And then in his mind he slips into an old memory. He sees a time filled with chaos and tears. A young boy is crying uncontrollably, shaking him and screaming his name in a desperate attempt to wake him up. It was not a monster. This scar was carved by his own little brother. Back to the present, Yonho stands tall, unaware of his brother's quiet reflection, flanked by Jun and his disguised servant. With his fist clenched tight, the imposing leader of the Dark Earth Branch sect, Dawson, slowly scans the area. His voice drops into a low, menacing tone as he asks a single question. Who is Yonho? From within the small crowd, a calm voice answers. Yonho casually points a finger at himself, completely unbothered, and says that would be him. Dawson goes silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on the young man standing before him. One of his subordinates leans in and confirms that this really is the person they have been looking for. Seeing him in person, another member of the Dark Earth Branch sect blurts out his disbelief at how young Yonho looks. That only makes Dawson snap in irritation. He shouts that he already told them the man was young. The report simply made him sound like some great grandmaster, when in reality he is just some little brat. Even so, Dawson's face hardens as he scoffs and says that none of that matters. Kid or not, Yonho still has to pay the price for interfering with the Dark Earth Branch sect's affairs. At his silent signal, the men behind him all draw their swords at once. The sharp hiss of steel fills the air as they begin stepping toward Yonho and his companions. But just as the blades are aimed at him, Yonho calmly lifts one finger and cuts through the tension with two simple words. Wait a minute. Ignoring the drawn swords entirely, Yonho turns away from them and looks toward his own side. The branch manager, Jun, immediately steps forward and produces a document along with a brush. Yonho tells Jinsoa to sign there. Jinsoa looks up in confusion and asks whether Yonho means his signature. Yonho simply tells him to sign it and promises to explain everything later. Trusting him without hesitation, the young boy does exactly that. Once the signed document is secured in Jun's hands, Yonho turns back toward Dawson and calmly asks how much debt the Sacred Hand Manor owes. Dawson answers without hesitation, 20 gold nyang and 50 silver nyang. At that exact moment, two large ornate chests are set down before the Dark Earth Branch sect. Their heavy lids are thrown open with a loud thud, revealing piles upon piles of gleaming gold coins packed all the way to the brim. The shine of the treasure leaves Dawson completely stunned, and all he can do is stammer out a confused question. What is this? Yonho's face does not change in the slightest as he explains that this is the money the Sacred Hand Manor owed them. Then he looks directly at Dawson and declares that from this day forward, the debt is fully repaid. After that, he tells him to write up a certificate acknowledging the debt has been cleared and to take the money. For a brief moment, Dawson just stares at the fortune before him. Then the shock on his face begins twisting into a crazed and greedy smile. His voice dripping with contempt, he asks whether Yonho seriously believes everything can be settled with just that little bit of money. Standing with his hands folded behind his back, Yonho answers in the same calm tone as before. That is exactly why he brought more than the amount that was actually owed. Dawson picks up one of the shining gold coins and stares at it, momentarily swallowed by greed. He even admits that this does seem to be the case. But one of his subordinates quickly leans over and whispers a reminder into his ear. Their goal was never the money. Their goal was the Sacred Hand Manor itself. If the manor is allowed to free itself and rebuild, then what was the point of all of this? The words yank Dawson right back out of his greed. In an instant, his entire demeanor changes. He whirls back toward Yonho in fury and shouts that the debt was only a secondary issue. The more important matter is that they cannot simply allow Yonho and the others to walk away after interfering in the Dark Earth Branch sect's affairs. As the swords once again point his way, Yonho calmly looks at the sect leader and asks whether he is saying he wants to fight him. A sinister smile spreads across Dawson's face. A fight? No, this is called retribution. Then with a furious roar, he points straight at Yonho and gives a single brutal order. Bring me that bastard's head. The members of the Dark Earth Branch sect answer with one unified shout and leap into action. A violent flash of light fills the air as all of their glowing blades converge on the exact place where Yonho stands. A faint blue aura begins to shimmer around Yonho as a smirk slowly forms on his lips. Retribution, is it? He repeats the word with open confidence. Then, as the swords come within inches of him, his expression hardens. They are going to regret that. Before the purple blades can touch him, an overwhelming force bursts out from where he stands. In a blink, Yonho appears directly in front of one of the attackers. His fist, wrapped in crackling blue energy, crashes into the man's jaw and sends him flying backward. Then, without pausing for even a moment, Yonho continues moving through the group like a storm. Panjakig strike. Every blow is wrapped in that same brilliant blue light. One by one, the members of the Dark Earth Branch sect are smashed aside and hurled helplessly in every direction. Their coordinated assault is completely destroyed in an instant. Watching it all unfold, Dawson can only stare in total shock. Sweat begins to bead down his forehead as he stammers out a single question. What is that? One of his own subordinates panics and blurts out that he warned him why Yonho was no ordinary person. Dawson clenches his fist in frustration and mutters that this whole situation has become a massive nuisance. Without even turning around, Yonho speaks into the silence and tells him to call the rest of them out. The ones hiding in the back. Dawson freezes. A bead of sweat slides slowly down his temple as he wonders how Yonho could possibly have known about the reinforcements hidden away behind the scene. But seeing no other choice, he grits his teeth and calls out, saying that it looks like they will need some help from their honored guests. At those words, 5 figures step out from the shadows. They are dressed in black cloaks, and wide-brimmed hats obscure their faces as they move into position in front of Yonho without a sound. Now standing alone amid the fallen, Yonho watches them carefully. The blue aura around him has faded, but his eyes remain sharp as he studies the new arrivals. Then his gaze settles on one of them. He says that the man looks familiar. Have they met somewhere before? But before he can even finish the thought, the figure he was looking at explodes into motion. A blade glowing with brilliant light tears through the air and goes straight for Yonho's throat. With less than a heartbeat to react, Yonho throws his whole body backward and narrowly avoids the strike as the shining sword slices past his face with terrifying force. Landing lightly on his feet, Yonho catches himself and lets out a genuinely surprised breath. That was a surprise. His mind races. He had expected nothing more than a rough brawl. The man approached without revealing even a trace of presence and then in the blink of an eye drew a sword meant purely to kill. As he watches the silent group of 5, their faintly glowing swords giving off an eerie presence, Yonho realizes what they are. The hidden sword. That thought drags him straight into an old memory. He sees his master explaining one of the uglier truths of the world. He says there exists a kind of swordsmanship made for one purpose alone: killing. It is the sort of technique used by assassins and hired murderers, people who exist solely to eliminate a target without leaving the slightest trace behind. In that memory, the old man asks the younger Yonho what he should do if he ever finds himself standing against an opponent like that. Young Yonho looks nervous and uncertain. He admits that he does not know. The old man's expression immediately hardens. Blue power radiates from his body as he delivers a lesson Yonho would never forget. Those who wield such a sword are killers who have already taken countless lives. That means they can never be underestimated. Then with a firm and chilling voice, he tells the young Yonho to remember his words. The moment you find them, kill them all. Snapping back to the present, Yonho remembers his master's grim warning. Letting out a quiet sigh, he concludes that since the old man was that insistent, he cannot afford to go easy on them. He mutters that this whole thing has become a real pain. Then, acting on that decision, he turns to the branch manager, Hee-jun, and calmly asks to borrow a sword. Hee-jun immediately offers his own blade. The moment Yonho's fingers wrap around the hilt, he gives a quiet warning to the people behind him. He says things are about to get a little noisy, so everyone should step far back. In the next instant, he throws off his outer robe. A powerful blue aura erupts around him, swirling violently as he draws the unsheathed sword. From the assassin's point of view, their confidence immediately begins to waver. The one who launched the first attack realizes at once that anyone capable of dodging his blade is no ordinary opponent. He shouts a command to the others, warning them that the enemy is a master and must not be underestimated. Then he orders them to attack together. Obeying him at once, all 5 assassins surge forward in a perfectly coordinated assault. Their blades glow as they close in from every direction at once. At the center of it all, Yonho stands ready, gripping the sword with both hands as the clash becomes inevitable. Then he closes his eyes for just a brief moment. As the assassin's swords descend on him, a colossal wave of blue energy bursts from his body. The sheer force stops all 5 attackers in their tracks. Their bodies strain helplessly against the pressure before they are blown violently backward. And in the middle of that chaos, the spectral image of his master appears behind him, his voice echoing in Yonho's mind with a lesson from long ago. Do not let yourself be held back by each individual movement. Yonho's focus sharpens completely as he answers inwardly that he knows. He remembers the heart of that lesson. Everything begins with an unshakable heart. Then Yonho moves. He slips past one downward slash with graceful ease, casually deflects another, then spins away from a third. His movements are fluid, precise, and almost effortless, standing in stark contrast to the assassin's direct and merciless attacks. He moves through their formation like flowing water, his blade flashing like light as it intercepts every strike meant for him. Then another piece of his master's teaching rises to the surface. The answer is to imbue your sword with your mindset, tightening his grip on the hilt. Yonho pours his will and his immense power directly into the blade. With one sharp motion, he swings the sword in a wide horizontal arc. A massive wave of brilliant blue energy explodes outward and rips through the space around him. As his blade cuts through the air, his master's voice continues. It may be nothing more than the same piece of steel, but if you do not imbue that piece of steel with your very being, the path of the true sword cannot even begin. Yonho embodies that truth completely. Every movement of his now is a perfect union of thought and action. He parries and deflects with effortless elegance, his sword no longer seeming like a weapon in his hand, but an extension of his own will. In the midst of the chaos, it shines with an inner light. Soon, only a single assassin remains standing. He is wounded but still refusing to fall. In one final swift movement, Yonho closes the distance. His blade flashes, and the last assassin is sent flying, his body crashing to the ground. As Yonho stands in the aftermath, the blue aura around him slowly begins to fade. His master's voice echoes once more. What I taught you was not a move, it was a seed that might grow into anything. He stands over the fallen enemies calm and motionless, his master's teachings now fully proven on the blood-stained ground before him. While the final lesson continues to echo through his mind, a perfect sword is created with your mind. What his master taught him was never meant to be rigid forms copied exactly as they were principles, seeds meant to grow. Then comes the final command, create your own sword. Yonho absorbs that truth completely. He's not merely carrying on his master's techniques. He is forging something that belongs to him alone. Surrounded by a vast, almost cosmic expanse of swirling blue and purple energy, he raises his sword high. The blade becomes a beacon of light standing against the darkness. This is the true culmination of his training. The moment he steps beyond imitation and enters true mastery. And then his master's final charge rings out with perfect clarity. In that way, you must forge a sword that is uniquely yours. As he takes in that last lesson, the energy around him condenses into countless intersecting beams of brilliant light. Those beams overlap, cross, and multiply, becoming proof of the unique power that now belongs to him alone. With fierce determination blazing in his eyes, Yonho unleashes the full extent of that power. The intersecting beams around him collapse inward, then erupt outward into a massive swirling vortex of pure energy. In the next instant, that vortex surges upward and becomes towering pillars of radiant blue light that tear through the battlefield and shatter the ground beneath them. The resulting shock wave blasts across the area and sends Jin Soa stumbling backward, but Jun catches him just in time. Slowly, the dust and energy begin to settle. When the haze clears, the aftermath is revealed. The assassins are scattered across the floor. Their cloaks are torn, their bodies motionless, and their swords lie broken and useless around them. Yonho stands over them as the last traces of blue aura gradually fade from his body, while faint wisps of blue smoke curl upward from the defeated men. Behind him, the spectral form of his master appears once more, silent and watchful. Then Yonho speaks to the fallen assassins, his voice cold and final. He says that he has severed their key meridians and sealed away their martial arts. From this day on, they will never again be able to use a sword. Looking down at them, he passes judgment on the lives they lived until now. Whatever kind of lives they once led, they will no longer be able to use power to harm others ever again. Then he adds one final, quiet sentence to the now powerless men. They should consider this the price of spending their lives suppressing others with strength. As he turns away, a brief sense of familiarity brushes against his mind. For a moment, he wonders why those assassins seemed vaguely familiar to him. But he pushes the thought aside for now, certain he will understand it eventually. Then his attention shifts to the last remaining member of the Dark Earth Branch sect, Guak Dawson. The sect leader is paralyzed by terror. His whole body trembles and sweat runs heavily down his face. He tries to say something, but all that comes out is a frightened yelp when Yonho casually raises one hand toward him. Then with a disinterested yawn, Yonho asks him a single question. Did he not say earlier that he was going to punish someone? The leader of the Dark Earth Branch sect, Guak Dawson, trembles in fear as he stammers out, "Young master." Unfazed, Yonho calmly explains his reasoning. He says that his master always told him that ignoring the men who mess with him would be a personal insult to that master, and that he tries to live by those words. The moment he hears that, Guak Dawson throws himself flat on the ground and begins begging for mercy. He pleads that people can make mistakes sometimes. If Yonho forgives him, then he swears he will turn his life around and live as a good man from now on. With his arms folded, Yonho looks down at the groveling sect leader, clearly unconvinced. He says that changing for the better is a good thing, but after everything Guak Dawson has done, who exactly is supposed to believe him now? Still prostrated on the floor, Guak Dawson looks up in sheer desperation. Then Yonho gives his verdict. Killing him would be a bit much, so instead he will simply take an eye for an eye. Guak Dawson freezes and repeats the words in disbelief, an eye for an eye. Guak Dawson suddenly realizes the horrifying meaning behind those words. Sweat pours down his face as his voice trembles, and he asks whether Yonho means he's going to take away his ability to use martial arts again. Yonho cheerfully confirms it. Yep, that is exactly it. Then he adds that he loves it when people immediately understand what he means. Desperate to the very end, Guak Dawson makes one last plea and asks whether there is really no other way. With a broad grin, Yonho simply crosses his fingers, making it perfectly clear that there is no alternative. Then a wave of power bursts outward, and in the next instant Guak Dawson collapses unconscious onto the floor. With the sect leader dealt with, Yonho turns his attention to the remaining subordinate, Jwa and gestures for him to come closer. Nervous and shaking, Jwa asks where he's supposed to go. Yonho's answer is short and direct, their base. And that day became the turning point for the Dark Earth Branch sect, once considered the strongest in all of Hubei. The Dark Earth Branch sect, which had stood as the greatest in Hubei, met its downfall. Meanwhile, back at the Sacred Hand Manor, Jin Yuran stands on the balcony, quietly wondering where her younger brother has gone. Her brief moment of thought is shattered by the excited shouts of Jin Soa, who comes rushing in. He is grinning from ear to ear, overflowing with energy, and immediately asks if she knows what he did. Completely unfazed by his excitement, Jin Yuran simply asks what he is so worked up about. Unable to contain himself, Jin Soa throws his arms wide and announces that they repaid every last bit of their debt. His sister, however, does not believe him for even a second. She dismisses it as a dream. But Jin Soa insists that it is true and begins recounting everything that happened. As night falls and the full moon lights the courtyard, a A stunned Jin Yuran listens to the whole story and finally asks in disbelief whether it is really true. Jin Soa confirms it with a huge smile. They are free now, and it is all thanks to Mr. Yonho. A wave of relief washes over Jin Yuran. Clasping her hands together, she quietly says she understands and that she is truly glad. Then she adds that they owe him a great deal. But just as quickly her expression hardens. She turns to her younger brother and tells him firmly that it was still wrong to repay the debt through gambling. Jin Soa is immediately taken aback by her stern tone and can only manage a weak little sis. But Jin Yuran does not back down. She says that she will let it pass this time because he was not the one actually gambling, but from now on, he is never to go anywhere near a gambling house again. A dejected Jin Soa lowers his head and questions her logic. Is the method they used to repay the debt really that important? Jin Yuran answers without wavering. A person who abandons the orthodox path is bound to hit a wall sooner or later. Then she asks how he can still be fine with gambling after seeing exactly what their father suffered because of it. That makes Jin Soa's frustration explode. He yells back that if things had gone differently, she might have ended up dragged off to the escort house instead. So can she still say that it was wrong? Without even a heartbeat of hesitation, she answers yes. A physician should walk the orthodox path. That answer leaves Jin Soa speechless. All he can do is stare at his sister with disbelief and hurt burning in his eyes. Then under his breath, he mutters that she is far too stuck up. He says that he did his best for her, yet all she can see is what she wants to lecture him about. Jin Soa spreads his arms and gestures at their humble surroundings, asking her to look at the place. If they keep doing things her way, then they will stay trapped in this place forever. Jin Yuran watches him in silence, and as his words hang in the moonlit air, a question begins forming in her mind. Is this really for him? The new kind of resolve in his voice, Jin Soa continues. He says that he learned a lot from Mr. Yonho, and because of that, he no longer wants to live the way she does. Then he looks her directly in the eyes and declares that he wants to live his own life, leaving Jin Yuran standing there in silence. The scene then shifts to the Pine Forest Great Hanam Institute, a beautiful and grand estate. There Yuan, the master of the Hanam Institute, warmly welcomes his guests. Sanho, the demon-slaying sword, bows respectfully and says that he is honored to be received so kindly despite arriving without warning. Yuan smiles and replies that since he heard this man is Mr. Yonho's older brother, that naturally makes him an important guest. As they walk through the institute halls, Sanho apologizes for anything rude his younger brother may have done during his time there. Yuan casually waves the apology away and says it was nothing. Then he confirms that Sanho said he is searching for Yonho. After that he pauses, turns serious and asks whether he may say something. Once Sanho gives his permission, Yuan asks him a thoughtful question. Does he know what great potential is? But without waiting for an answer, Yuan offers his own insight. Great potential is not something that can be contained or restricted. Considering Sanho's personality, Yuan says he is certain that Sanho will try to shape his younger brother according to his own expectations. Then Yuan's gaze sharpens as he offers his final warning. If he does that, he will only ruin him. Everyone gets hurt when they try to force a horse into a house that is too small. So he should let him be free. Yuan concludes by saying that if he does, then one day that horse will run through the plains. Sanho listens in complete silence, clearly affected by the weight of those words. After a moment of thought, he bows respectfully and thanks Yuan for his consideration. Then he says he will think carefully about the advice he has just been given. Later, as they travel along a forest path, Sanho's companion notices how grim his master looks and asks why he still seems so displeased even after they were fed and allowed to rest. Sanho ignores the question and instead asks one of his own. How was his younger brother when the man saw him? Caught off guard, the companion hesitates, then answers honestly and without much kindness. He says he only treated Yonho well because he was Sanho's brother. If he were not, he would not even have considered him human. The man complains that Yonho is so lazy, so evil, and so scheming that he might as well have come straight out of the unorthodox Mura. He is more cunning than a politician. Then he adds that Yonho is honestly just very annoying. But the moment those words leave his mouth, he panics, clamps a hand over it, and realizes he may have spoken too freely about his master's own younger brother. Yet Sanho remains calm. His face gives away nothing as he quietly says that this is how the man sees him. And inside, Sanho comes to a realization. Most ordinary people cannot see through Yonho's talent. Otherwise, the Yonho they describe is very different from the one he remembers from the past. Elsewhere, Yonho awakens with a deep yawn and stretches as he sits up. Wondering aloud how long he slept, he lands lightly on the ground and immediately grimaces at the lingering soreness in his body. That damned sleep training. He mutters that he got beaten up in his dream, so why does it feel like he got beaten up in real life too? But before he can dwell on that nonsense for long, Jin Soa bursts out emotionally that what Yonho has done for them is greater than anything. Before Yonho can even respond, Jin Yuran suddenly drops to her knees in front of him. With her head lowered in deep gratitude, she says she cannot possibly repay him for everything he has done. Startled by the sudden act, Yonho rushes over and tells her to get up, asking why she is doing something like this. But ignoring his attempt to stop her, Jin Yuran looks up with a serious, determined face and asks whether she can make one request. Slightly flustered, Yonho asks what it is, At the same time, in the back of his mind, he cannot help wondering whether he is somehow being cursed by his ancestors. Still kneeling, Jin Yuran makes her request. She asks him to change Soa's mind. Then she explains the burden she carries. Her younger brother has to inherit the sacred hand manor. He has to revive the household and restore their honor, but right now he is shaken, so she begs Yonho to change his mind. Yonho, unable to fully grasp the conflict, asks what exactly she means. Becoming a great physician and reviving the sacred hand manor are two completely different things. When she asks him which one matters more, Yonho honestly says he does not see why he should have to choose at all, because those are two separate issues. After a short silence, Jin Yuran answers with complete conviction. The revival of the sacred hand manor comes first. She explains that even if Soa becomes a great physician, their fathers will cannot truly be preserved if the sacred hand manor is not brought back to life. To her, the family legacy matters more than anything. However, if the sacred hand manor is restored, then there will still be a chance for a great physician to emerge from it in the future. Listening to this, Yonho slowly nods and a faint smile forms on his face. Then he says he understands. So for her, the priority is the sacred hand manor itself. Jin Yuran looks up at him with the smallest trace of hope in her eyes. And then Yonho says that if that is the goal, then there is actually a very simple solution. The scene shifts again to a building glowing under soft pink lantern light. Inside a lavish room, Gui Nangnang, the leader of the Hao sect's Kaifeng branch, seethes with rage. She fumes that she should have killed that beggar. Even now, she is still furious over the way he brought the demon-slaying sword to her door. But before she can finish that threat, Gongmu bursts into the room in a panic and announces that there is a problem. Already irritated, Gui Nangnang snaps and asks what it is this time. Then Gongmu nervously stammers as two imposing figures enter the room. The elderly man leading them fixes his gaze on Gui Nangnang and asks whether she is the one in charge there. Already worn out by the non-stop stream of visitors, Gui Nangnang sighs and thinks bitterly that apparently absolutely anyone can stroll in these days. Even so, she composes herself and answers yes. Then with a commanding presence that fills the room, the man introduces himself. He is Wei Jianghan. The instant the name reaches her ears, Gui Nangnang freezes. Wei Jianghan, the righteous chivalrous swordsman Wei Jianghan. With a proud, booming voice, Wei Jianghan confirms that yes, that is indeed him. Since she already knows who he is, he says that should save them some explanation. Then he begins to say they are there because they are searching for their son. But before he can continue, his wife shoves him aside with an annoyed motion and scolds him for wasting time flexing when they are already busy enough as it is. A little embarrassed, Wei Jianghan tries to protest that it is just that he happens to be famous. His wife instantly shoots back and asks whether that is what matters right now. Gui Nangnang can only stare in dumbfounded silence as the woman who just manhandled the legendary righteous chivalrous swordsman. The wife clears her throat and prepares to get to the point. With a composed expression, Wei Yonho's mother explains why they came. Wei Yonho sent them a letter from there. Then, without wasting any more time, she looks directly at Gui Nangnang and asks her to explain exactly what happened.